Our story begins in a palace at the end of an afternoon, where someone was shouting, saying that, "Your Majesty could not do this." In a grand hall, the woman who was shouting claimed to be the Empress of the Empire. She said she was the mother of the people and the only imperial consort. The anguished woman asked the man how he could discard her like that. The nobleman was Alexander Lorenzi, the emperor of that realm. With a cold look, he asked Isabel to stop being so arrogant. After all, she had never been his only consort. Had she forgotten about Empress Sasha? She began to say that the girl was merely a consort. That declaration enraged the emperor, who said that she was completely deluded. With her red hair and green eyes, Isabel looked at him completely devastated. She began to cry even more, in denial of the tragedy that was happening. The emperor pulled his lover close, saying that Isabel could not even compare to Sasha. He said it was a pity that a woman like her was so greedy for the title of empress, to the point of coveting it just to keep him by her side. With long black hair and lilac eyes, she watched Isabel without saying a word. She hugged the man, avoiding the woman's gaze. Isabel watched the two of them walk away while tears fell from her eyes. The arrogant emperor said that Isabel was merely a decoration through which he took some power from Duke Blake, and revealed that he had never loved her, and that his love was reserved only for Sasha. The devastated woman sat on the floor, unable to believe the cruel words of her husband. Before they left completely, she asked him to wait. Alexander ignored her completely. She continued calling out to him in vain. A cell phone rang loudly. A young woman shouted because she was very outraged about something. The young woman was very upset by the emperor's words. After all, why couldn't Isabel simply dump him and live alone and happily? That story was called A Flower from Another World. It was a fantasy romance with a common storyline in which the protagonist became empress and tried to win the emperor's heart. But there was something the girl did not understand. Despite it being a loveless marriage, the emperor already had his empress. However, the female protagonist had the audacity to occupy the throne of the previous empress. The emperor was blinded by love for another woman and abandoned his legitimate wife. Because of that, Empress Isabel suffered in a cold room and was struck by illness while he enjoyed himself with his lover. Did the emperor regret it? The truth is that the emperor did not even look back, marrying his lover as soon as he got rid of his wife. The girl was shocked that such a bastard could exist. What had Isabel done so wrong to suffer like that? Could it have been her love for him? She looked at the clock, thinking about how long those characters would last in that story. Finally, she realized it was already 3 a.m., so she decided to just go to sleep. The girl had started a new project some time ago. The next day, she knew she needed to go to work earlier, but before sleeping, she had a thought. Someone in the palace called for the empress during tea. The person revealed to the red-haired woman that Your Majesty had granted her an audience. The environment she was in had old and colorful furniture. It was so spacious that she could even practice running. Even the servants were dressed elegantly. She barely recognized herself. With that appearance, she looked very different. Originally, she was a Korean university student who woke up one day in the kingdom of Castilla from the story A Flower from Another World. She became Isabel. At first, she thought she was dreaming and did her best to wake up. However, no matter what she did, she couldn't wake up. In the end, she had to accept that she wasn't dreaming, as she was taken care of by the palace maids. Now, living inside Isabel's body, the girl tries to calm herself down. She thinks that Isabel's past actions were regrettable, but that wasn't what she wanted to be. Would it be better to be a mistress? One of the maids says that she did a great job, wondering how much effort she must have made to meet the emperor. Isabel wonders if the emperor the girls are talking about is the male protagonist. To be honest, she didn't want to meet him at all. He was the one responsible for turning Isabel's life into a living hell. She asks the maids to wait for a few moments, and gently asks them to make her as beautiful as possible. The girls were very happy to hear that request. Isabel reflected for a few moments while the two talked among themselves. She realized that they truly wanted Isabel to be loved by the emperor. She felt a little bad about that, but decided to continue with her plan because she couldn't live someone else's life. Wearing elegant shoes and with a firm posture, she enters the emperor's chambers. She seemed distant, lost in her thoughts. Finally, she arrived at the emperor's study. He had made her wait for 2 weeks and finally summoned her to the study instead of taking her to the imperial bedroom or somewhere else. Maybe this way he would get straight to the point and let her leave. The emperor greets her without much ceremony and with little enthusiasm as well. He almost seemed surprised to receive her there. She widened her eyes when she saw him. He truly was a very attractive man, and for that reason must be the male protagonist. In an arrogant tone, he asked her why they were meeting. She throws the question back at him, asking if there should be a specific reason for a couple to meet, but he was not satisfied with that answer. The arrogant man asks her to sit down. Isabel has a theory that she needed to gather as much information as possible, since she had struggled her whole life to survive in an unfavorable environment. Before going to meet the emperor, she tried to analyze the situation to better understand the relationship between Alexander, Isabel, and Sasha. Only 1 year and 6 months had passed since Sasha arrived at the imperial palace, which was the same period when the emperor began to show interest in her. He asks if she has changed her mind. With a graceful smile, Isabel reveals that she has changed her mind. She knew there was only one thing she could do before he trampled over her life. With a gleam of interest in his golden eyes, he asks what had changed. Triumphantly, Isabel asks the emperor to divorce her. With a surprised look, he asks the woman what she is talking about. He asks if she is aware of who is standing in front of her. That was not the place to make jokes. Isabel was disappointed by his response, already half expecting him to answer that way. During that time, Isabel had been doing all the palace duties without a single complaint, just to win the emperor's love. And even so, in the end, he chose Sasha. She tells him that she is not joking. Isabel explains that she thought about it for a long time and came to the conclusion that the title of empress was too much for her. Alexander listens to everything attentively. The lady explains that this was her final decision, and she hopes that he will understand her. He asks what she means by saying the title is too much for her. Hasn't she been fulfilling her duties as empress for 3 years already? And now all of a sudden she has changed her mind? Isabel says that she doesn't feel worthy of the title, and that she was not a suitable choice. Her gaze was hopeful. She hoped the emperor would realize that she was not joking with him. Alexander looked at her with contempt, as if her words deeply annoyed him. He asks if she was irritated because he hadn't visited her chambers for 2 weeks. That question surprised Isabel. The emperor explains that there was an invasion in the palace, and because of that he had to be away, and asks her to forgive him. Completely changing his tone of voice, he speaks sweetly, saying that in the future he will do everything to see her every day, claiming that he would try to be the perfect husband for her. She listens to everything with a certain disbelief, trying to remain calm since she already expected such a reaction. Isabel held her dress apprehensively, telling herself not to fall for the emperor's schemes. She knew of her tragic end and was not willing to go through that again. The young woman smiles as she states that the emperor would quickly find a woman more suitable to be his companion. She also tells him that she would have no problem at all being replaced by his consort. Then, Alexander asks her not to pay any attention to the consort. The emperor says that she is only living there for diplomatic reasons with the empire. Moreover, the girl arrived less than a year ago. He continues by saying that it would be difficult to replace a woman like Isabel, and for that reason, he gently asks once again that she should not worry too much. Isabel notices his gaze. She realizes how mistaken he was, thinking that she was acting purely out of jealousy, with a completely irrational promise. The empress reveals to him that her decision was not because of Sasha. While using a humble tone, she claims that she realized she did not deserve to occupy that position. The elegant woman hopes that he will understand. The cruel emperor looks at her as if he were trying to unravel her. Isabel hears him ask what she intends to do about Duke Blake. She reflects on what he said. Isabel's family, originally influential members of the aristocracy, lost their prestige and wealth over the years. And because of that, her father, Duke Blake, forced his daughter to marry the emperor. Although she did not know what was in that contract, she had lived her life happily. What kind of family treated their daughter like a piece in a political game? Our protagonist reveals that she knows imperial law requires the consent of both parties to proceed with a divorce, which in this case would be between her and the emperor, her husband. She apologizes if there is any misunderstanding in her information, but she was very astute and knew she was right. The emperor, annoyed by her words, states that this law was established because there had been very few divorces in the imperial lineage. He pauses for a few moments, weighing his words. Distressed by the discussion, he asks if she really wanted that divorce. If that were the case, he could not accept it. A sudden divorce like that was something he would never accept. He declares that she cannot simply abandon her position as empress, as it was not something replaceable. Analyzing the situation, Isabel finally understands why it is so difficult to obtain a divorce. He tries to postpone that conversation for a while. He claims that if she wants anything, he can gift it to her. Trying to negotiate strategically, he says that she may live however she wishes, but that the two of them would not divorce. The girl anxiously fiddles with her dress, asking what he meant by that. The man asks whether he had the right to lie to her, if he was the emperor of Castilla and she the empress. With a slight mocking tone, she asks whether, as empress, she could do anything except ask for a divorce. He agrees, saying that she could not deny it. Isabel gives a satisfied smile. With an elegant bow, she wishes glory to the sun that never sets, as was customary to say to the emperor. That was enough, but how could she be satisfied if she had only taken a single glass of wine? She turns to leave, leaving the emperor alone in his study. If he did not want to divorce, she would make it happen at all costs. Now, it was time to resume her plans. Suddenly, someone arrives in the palace corridor. Isabel stops to see who it was. With long black hair and light-colored eyes, that innocent appearance no longer deceived her. That young woman was Sasha, the emperor's concubine. The two women stare at each other for a few moments. Apparently, she was going to speak with the emperor without an appointment. Despite her delicate appearance, Sasha was a treacherous woman who wandered around the palace. Isabel decides to ignore her and continue on her way, but Sasha strikes up a conversation, saying that it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Our protagonist was not liking that empty chatter at all. To have become a consort, she must have received etiquette lessons, but instead of using them, she addressed the empress without any courtesy whatsoever. Isabel asks her what the consort was doing in that place. With a smile, Sasha says that she had gone to see the emperor. At first, she had gone to look for him in his bedroom, but since he was not there, she went to his study. The red-haired woman could not believe that the girl had simply gone to the emperor's bedroom as if it were nothing. Our protagonist decides to end the conversation, explaining that she had some things to take care of and turns to leave. Sasha asks her to wait a little. Isabel asks what she wanted. Sasha says that there is something she has wanted to talk to her about for quite some time already. Our protagonist hears the girl say that she thinks the two of them should be close, sharing their worries and secrets. Things like that. What she really meant was that she wanted the two of them to talk honestly. Sasha asks whether what Isabel did was a tactical move to get the emperor's attention. The two women remain silent for a while. When our protagonist read the story for the first time, she judged the consort to be innocent and foolish. But now, it didn't really seem that way, because Sasha was treating her as competition. However, our clever protagonist smiled because she had a few cards up her sleeve. All of this was far too childish for her. Sasha seemed too innocent to anticipate Isabel's moves. The girl asks why she is laughing. Had she said something funny? Isabel says that she truly found all of that very funny, especially seeing Sasha struggle so much for nothing. And then, didn't she agree? Sasha seemed deeply shaken by the Empress's words. Holding back her tears, the girl asks, how so was she struggling for nothing? Isabel says that Sasha could have him all to herself, and turns to leave. With a triumphant posture, our protagonist declares to the innocent girl that she has no interest in the Emperor. Isabel knows very well that she doesn't care if the two of them act like soulmates in the future, as long as they leave her out of that drama. To save her life in that story, she decided to become the villain. Since Alexander had said that she could do whatever she wanted, she decided to go on a shopping spree using the Empire's money and live a fabulous life. Isabel was very satisfied with her plan. She was not even a little willing to go back to her old life. Since she was there, she might as well enjoy that life for a long time. A new day begins in the Imperial Palace. Servants carry boxes. Some maids organize a few items. Sasha asks everyone what that all meant. The girl was quite irritated and asked Isabel what she thought she was doing. Our protagonist tells her that she was moving since the Empress's palace was being built at that moment. Sasha asks why that move was necessary. She questions Isabel about why she was moving into her palace, of all places. She lets out a satisfied laugh. That had been the first thing she chose ever since she decided to become the villain of the story. She would move into the consort palace, which was where Sasha was temporarily living. Isabel's original palace was large and filled with exquisite furniture. However, it was still tiny compared to the palace the emperor had gifted Sasha. When the emperor began to neglect Isabel, the servants also rejected her, leaving the palace so poorly maintained that a stream of icy wind could pass through the place. But for various reasons, Isabel was not able to fix that problem and ended up contracting tuberculosis. No matter how much Sasha pretended to be naive, the consort palace was full of expensive items the emperor had bought for her. Isabel didn't know when she would be able to divorce the emperor, so her plan was to renovate the empress's palace and decorate it her own way, even if it took some time. That was also why she chose to live in a place that wasn't a construction zone. The other palaces were very far away, and there were many rooms in the consort palace. So, what was the problem with sharing a little? Isabel sarcastically suggests whether Sasha wouldn't like to use the Empress's palace for a while. She says it is very airy and the interior design is quite minimalist. She would probably like it a lot. Sasha was left speechless. Like a shameless villain, Isabel also suggests that Sasha could use the other palaces if she wanted to. The girl says fiercely that that was her palace. Why would she abandon something that belonged to her in favor of Isabel? Our protagonist was satisfied to see the young woman so upset. Since she didn't want to leave, Isabel says that the two of them would live together for some time. The red-haired woman hopes that the two of them will get along very well. After all, what could possibly go wrong with that arrangement, right? From her gaze, it was clear that Sasha was deeply enraged by the Empress's audacity. Clenching her fist tightly, she says that she was worried about Isabel. She reveals that she knew how much the Empress hated her. And then, making an innocent little face, she asks whether the Emperor would be okay with that change. Isabel seemed completely unbothered by that question. She lets out a laugh, thinking about how hard Sasha was trying to appear kind, when what she really wanted was to gossip about Isabel to the Emperor. Isabel asks whether Sasha was really worried about her. Our protagonist thanks the young woman's sudden concern with great irony, which ends up hurting the consort quite deeply. Isabel thinks that, judging by the expression on Sasha's face, she was going straight to tell everything to the Emperor that same afternoon. She was calmly having tea in her chambers. Out of nowhere, Alexander bursts the doors open furiously. She lets out a sigh and thinks it was about time. He approaches her, saying that Sasha told him something he couldn't believe. Was it true that she was moving to the consort palace? The Emperor says that she already had the Empress's palace, and that her attempt to take Sasha's palace was completely unnecessary. Isabel reminds him that he had said she could do whatever she wanted. He became furious upon hearing that. Our protagonist says that she simply followed his commands and did whatever she pleased. On top of that, she told Sasha that she could stay in the Empress's palace, but the girl refused the generous offer. Alexander says that she was being ridiculous. He claims that he could build her an even larger and more sophisticated palace. So what was the reason for taking something that belonged to someone else? Isabel lets out a small sigh. She reveals to him that she doesn't want to know about any other place. Only the consort palace interests her. He looks at her apprehensively. The woman argues that it was none other than him, Your Majesty, who said that she could do whatever she wanted. Alexander and Isabel stare at each other for a few moments. His gaze was impetuous and unshakable. She, on the other hand, seemed deeply satisfied with her strategy and wore a smirk. Defeated, he says that she may do as she wishes. Alexander lets out a sigh and says that he never imagined she would be as stubborn as a mule. Our protagonist was radiant, but deep down, she knew that this did not mean he would divorce her, but that he would endure her doing even the most ridiculous things to keep up appearances. This could be good for her. Making a courtesy to the Emperor, she thanks him, saying that he made a wise decision. Alexander says that it will be challenging for her to share a palace with someone. He asks her to try not to cause any unnecessary trouble that could ruin the imperial family's reputation. Isabel listens as he comments that he will try to convince Sasha somehow. With a dangerous smile, she says that she can't promise him anything, and then she declares that everything will depend on the consort's attitude toward her. Isabel knew very well that Sasha would not stay silent after things had gone so far. A new day begins. In an inner garden, the birds were singing. Isabel walked with her ladies-in-waiting. The main character was deep in thought. After all, the peace and silence in the palace were far more intense than she had imagined. That was far too suspicious to her. Even though her stay there was temporary, Isabel had no intention of remaining idle. She ordered the servants to take her boxes to their respective rooms. Isabel was determined to feel at home, so she filled all the rooms with her belongings, and because of that, she took over almost all the spaces. Because of this, she was occupying more than 70% of the consort palace. And even so, Sasha still had not appeared to complain. She then thought that the Emperor must have comforted Sasha very well. Despite the consort palace being immense, she constantly ran into the consort. Isabel noticed that every time, instead of confronting her, Sasha ignored her completely. From the young woman's expression, she clearly felt wronged, but apparently the Emperor had ordered her to keep quiet. Isabel definitely did not want to meddle between the two of them, so her strategy was to make Sasha start a fight with her. But the young woman would not give her any opportunity to cause the divorce. Was the Emperor trying to tell her that he would not divorce her no matter what happened? That was exhausting. According to the original story, Isabel was just a supporting character who existed only to be compared to Sasha. Our protagonist knows that soon she would be treated like trash. The girl knew very well that she would not simply accept all that suffering, and because of that, she wanted to leave as soon as possible. Isabel had to outdo herself and do something even more terrible. She decides to call her maids. She decided that it was time to make a new dress and that they should summon all the tailors of the Empire. After all, being extravagant was part of her role as the villain. During the afternoon in the palace, there was a murmur of people. Several tailors and designers carried rolls of fabric back and forth. Meanwhile, Isabel, wearing her robe, watched them. Apparently, all the most famous professionals of the Empire had been summoned. That was unbelievable. One of them comments that he had heard that the Empress had burned and buried all of her old clothes and jewelry. Another man said that she had donated other inferior pieces to her maids. So, because of that, all the tailors and designers had been summoned to create a brand new wardrobe and accessories from scratch for her. One of them asked what she thought of that dress design. He hands her a book containing one of his exclusive designs, claiming that the model would suit her red hair very well. The man gently suggests that she take a look at the catalog. Isabel seemed very satisfied. She realized how first-rate designers were truly different. Those dresses were very expensive and elegant. Our protagonist realized that she had never had the chance to wear such elegant dresses before. In her past life, her parents had forced her to share expenses with them to pay for her brother's studies. She was truly exhausted from that suffering. Her parents constantly threw it in her face that she had attended the university she wanted, but her brother hadn't had the same chance. She couldn't take it anymore. In a burst of emotion, the protagonist revealed to her parents that from then on, she would live only for herself. Her parents were shocked. She wanted at all costs to escape that torment, even though for a time she had sent most of her money to help her parents. Remembering the past, Isabel felt a little sad. Because of her previous life, she sympathized greatly with the character in the book. She thought as she flipped through the pages of the catalog. She and Isabel were very different, because while in her real life, the girl whose real name was Jane struggled to buy even cheap clothes, Isabel was covered in jewelry and expensive dresses. Despite being in the Empress's body, she still felt that she should kneel and give thanks for the fabulous dresses. But the girl knew she had to maintain that facade, because if she showed she wasn't accustomed to expensive things, it could raise some suspicions. The tailor asks her what she thought of the dresses. His creations were unique throughout the empire. However, her reaction took the man completely by surprise. He told her that she had very good taste. Despite not feeling comfortable playing that role, Isabel had to make an effort to leave there safely, and she tossed the catalog away. She gave a big, malicious smile. With the purest arrogance, she asks him, "Who else, besides you, would make such horrible clothes?" He was completely speechless. Isabel says that if she went out on the streets wearing those crude garments, she would become a laughingstock in the empire. While crossing her legs on the sofa, she says that she hopes he didn't come there to present her with those rags. Then, the Empress asks if he had other, more expensive dresses to present to her. The tailor was still shocked by her rude words. Finally, Isabel asks if he would like to show her something else. Feeling exhausted, the man explains that he hadn't produced anything else yet. He offers to present something in 2 months, but the Empress aggressively asks if he expects her to wear a robe for 2 months. Now she was furious, and orders the tailor not to lie to ensure his safety, because she discovered that Sasha would visit him the following week. Most noble clothing was made to measure, and once chosen, those designs were not sewn for other people. If there was one thing the nobility hated, it was wearing clothes that had already been seen on someone else. Thus, each design had to be unique. At that moment, among the nobility of the entire empire, the young consort Sasha was famous as a client with special status. The man tried to justify himself by saying that those designs were more compatible with the concubine Sasha. Isabel noticed that from the tailor's long justification, those models apparently had not been reserved by her. She realized that he was lying. So for how long had Isabel allowed that to happen to her? She then says that he was a very arrogant man and orders him to bring the designs to her immediately. He was terrified. With a wave of her hand, Isabel says that apparently he was incapable of understanding how much the Empress was superior and had more power than a mere consort. To demonstrate her power, the Empress's guards advanced toward the tailor. Trying to save himself, the man explains that he can ask his assistants to bring the designs immediately. Sometime later, Isabel chose the outfits from the catalog. He asks her which of the 14 designs she liked the most. She replies that she wants all of them. The tailor didn't seem to understand very well. She says that she hates being repetitive and hands the paper back to him. Then, once again, she says that she wants all the designs. Since she was already going to spend a lot of money anyway, she might as well buy all the dresses so she could secretly sell them after the divorce and have her own money. Far away from there, in the Emperor's elegant palace, someone was shouting that this was an absurdity. A man asked His Majesty if he had any idea how much money the Empress had spent on dresses and jewelry this time. At the table, the men seemed very agitated as they discussed her expenses. One of them criticized her attitude, saying it was an exaggeration even if it were to maintain appearances, and that those purchases had cost an entire day's worth of the Empire's defense budget. Alexander listened to all of this in silence. The elegant man seemed very annoyed by those comments. Another man said that he wished to be honest, as he was a loyal subject. Although the current empress, Isabel of Castilla, was excellent at what she did, Alexander could not let this pass. The emperor insistently tapped his fingers on the table. Yet another spoke up, saying that her extravagant habits did not match the seriousness of her royal title. One of the men maliciously said that the consort Sasha was a fantastic candidate to replace the current empress. Alexander drummed his fingers impatiently. Suddenly, the emperor asked all the men if they had already said everything they wanted to say. He commented that he had been waiting for them to finish, but they seemed like wild horses that did not know when to stop. The emperor reminded them of a passage from a poem that spoke of how the splendor of Castilla was comparable to the legendary empire of Icarus, and that all that splendor could never be bought with all the gold that filled Lake Nixos. Even though civilization might one day fade away, the empire would be eternal. One of the men seemed tormented upon hearing fragments of the poem. Alexander reminded them that the empire had as much gold as Lake Nixos. Did they really think that a few dresses would impact the imperial treasury? He was Alexander Lorenzi II. He was the empire incarnate, and the prestige of the empire was his prestige. Which of them would dare to question his authority there? The men felt embarrassed when they heard the noble ask whether Isabel's competence had not earned her a few dresses. He had gathered the the most talented people in the empire there, and apparently none of them were capable of knowing what was truly important. Alexander chose Isabel as his empress. He called for the Minister of Finance, who shrank back nervously, and asked whether he was questioning the emperor's decision. The man tried to respond, asking how someone like him could ever doubt the decisions of His Majesty. He tried to justify himself by saying that he had expressed himself poorly, as he was worried about the interests of the empire. Alexander impetuously said that the minister did not seem to know his place, since he had remained in a position he did not deserve for far too long. Then, the emperor decided to give him the position he truly deserved now. Orders were given, and the Minister of Finance was immediately removed from his post and was to be confined to his mansion for 3 months. The minister begged for mercy as he was dragged away by the guards. Alexander realized that he had almost forgotten a detail. The empress's prestige was also his prestige, so he would never allow her to dress in rags that did not impact the empire's finances in any way. The Minister of Defense seemed confused by his words. Then, he tried to please the emperor by saying that he agreed with him, as the empress deserved to wear nothing less luxurious than that. Alexander laughed because he knew the man would agree with him. The emperor asked if everyone agreed that the empress should dress luxuriously, correct? With a wave of his hand, he ordered his secretary to have a dress made 10 times more luxurious and refined than her last commission. The secretary stated that he would do as the emperor wished. With a determined look, Alexander told the men that it was time to resume the meeting. In the corridor, the men spoke about the dismissal of Minister Earl Claxton. Alexander commented that it had been faster than he expected. The emperor spoke with his secretary, revealing that because the minister had helped with the maintenance of the throne, he had been given a position greater than his status, but he was very greedy and kept trying to obtain other privileges like a leech. The noble had considered the possibility of getting rid of him, but fortunately managed to find a plausible excuse. The secretary commented that if the emperor punished him like a noble, he would be severely reprimanded. The emperor commented to him about how people truly did not know their place, and how human greed had no limits. The noble paused for a few moments. Alexander asked the secretary what he was trying to tell him, and he replied that it would be difficult for the common people to consider him a lucid emperor if he continued to make such incorrect judgments, no matter how great his achievements were. In response, the emperor said that the secretary still seemed not to have understood one detail. According to his words, Alexander's time on the throne was still very short, and he was still in the phase of expanding the empire's power. Therefore, Alexander saw himself as determined to rule through fear. He revealed to the secretary that he intended to eliminate abnormalities, rule with severity, and dispose of things without mercy. All of that was part of his tactics. Those were the only things he had learned from his father. Turning to leave, he asked the secretary whether he would have eliminated his father if he cared about being a lucid emperor. The secretary had no answer to that. He remembered well that it had been 3 years since Alexander ended the life of the previous emperor and ascended the throne. Although that change had pacified some conflicts with barbarians on the northern border and strengthened the empire's power, many people still used the excuse that, because they were young, they wanted to fight with their minds. However, Alexander was not the type to hide or give in, ready to run over his rivals for satisfaction. The secretary knew that ordering that dress for the empress was also a warning. He walked on, reflecting that his work would increase day after day. He was also unsure of what the empress would think of it. He only hoped that she would not view it negatively. A new day begins in the palace. A butler carries a large gift. More and more gifts arrive. While holding a dress, Isabel looks in surprise at so many gift boxes. Our protagonist was very fascinated by the presents. Isabel was impressed by the precious stones embedded in the dress. She noticed that the golden fabric had some golden threads, something she had never seen since she was born. She was amazed at how the garment remained light despite the many layers of fabric. The butler told her that Alexander had sent her a gift. She thought he would simply give her something luxurious, but it was actually a magnificent dress. The man explained to her that it was a gift commissioned with great affection by the emperor, saying that it cost the value of a palace. Isabel was shocked by the value of the dress. If she spilled a drop of sweat on it, she would never forgive herself. She decided to ask when Alexander had decided to send her that gift. The butler hands her a letter written by the emperor himself. Our protagonist reads the letter, which said that he was not sure whether such a dress would suit her beautiful eyes, but that the next time they met, he hoped she would be wearing that gift. She was completely confused. The girl was very confused, trying to understand what his intentions were. She remembered that Alexander originally did not care about Isabel at all. Or did he? One of the maids comments that the dress was truly wonderful. No one had ever seen anything as beautiful as that design. The girl congratulates the empress on obtaining something so splendid. In an inappropriate manner, she continues talking about the sincerity of the empress's heart reaching the emperor's heart. Isabel was left speechless upon hearing that. One of the maids scolds the young woman, saying that she had been inappropriate. The girl apologizes for the intrusion. Isabel says that it is all right. She realized that the girls were happy as if that story were their own. Isabel did not hate that girl at all. In her memories, she knew that the young woman had been loyal to her throughout the entire time they were together in the palace. On the contrary, the Empress liked her quite a lot, but regarding the other maids, Isabel was not quite sure what she wanted. She thought that she would understand everything later. Our protagonist decided to focus on something much more important, which was the value of that dress. According to the Emperor, that blue dress cost the value of a palace. In her previous life, she was crazy about shopping, but the standards of an emperor were truly different, and Isabel would have to make a great effort to exaggerate in luxuries. Apparently, he did not show off much because he had a lot of money to spend. Or perhaps it was because of the divorce request that he was being so generous with her. Would he really hate divorcing her that much? One of the maids approaches, suggesting that Isabel try on the dress to see how it looks and offering to help her. However, Isabel does not wish to wear it so soon. Turning to leave, she states that she will not wear it, and triumphantly declares that she cannot simply accept a grand gift from a man she intends to separate from, so they should throw the dress into her wardrobe. A conductor leads the orchestra. Elegant guests chat cheerfully. At the table, a wonderful dinner was being served. Wearing elegant shoes and a splendid dress, Isabel enters the hall. Her red hair was tied up in a bun, and her green eyes were fascinating. That party took place every Friday, and all members of the royal family and their servants attended. Despite being something established since the third king, how were they able to afford a party of that magnitude every week? It was probably to flaunt their wealth. In any case, Isabel planned everything very well. Such a refined event used resources very well and did not diminish the dignity of the royal family. Isabel was very satisfied with how the event was unfolding, as it was something not everyone would be capable of envisioning. As she delicately swirled a glass of wine, someone approached and praised the party. She noticed who was speaking to her. It was Count Barkley, who looked at her with a strange gaze and a malicious smile. He was a less important character who had appeared since the beginning of the story. The man was an active supporter of Sasha, who wanted her to gain the title of Empress. Isabel thinks, "What an ugly mustache." The Count was so startled by her attitude that he was left speechless. He asked her what the problem was. With a smile, Isabel tells him that it was already time to get rid of that hypocrisy. The woman asks if he liked what she had said. He couldn't understand that conversation at all. He says that he was only trying to sincerely praise her hard work in organizing that event. Challengingly, Isabel asks him if his gratitude had taken 3 years to appear. What a surprise. Count Barkley was shocked by her audacity. She turns to leave, thinking that if he were truly grateful, he would have expressed it much earlier and would not be trying to cling to her only now. The person who was supposedly meant to hear those false compliments no longer existed. The former Isabel, well, she thought that now was not the time to worry about matters of the past. As she walks through the Golden Hall, Isabel begins to plan. Alexander was there as well. The Emperor was wearing a very elegant and ornate imperial outfit. Isabel notices his arrival, and truly, he was the most handsome man of all, also known as a man who appears only once every 100 years. When she read the original story, she thought it was something cheesy, but it was the truth. Isabel was a little surprised to see him there. In the adjacent hall, the Empress stared at the man, and he stared back at her. Alexander looked at her without saying anything, and she couldn't think of anything to say to him. Suddenly, someone approaches, interrupting the moment between the two of them. Her long black hair fluttered. Sasha, wearing a long, ornate cream-colored dress, calls the Emperor by his name. In the hall, the other guests were shocked by how the consort dared to call the Emperor while ignoring his royal title. She was reprimanded by the secretary. The girl tries to explain that she was so happy that it came out naturally. Alexander looks at her with a certain indifference. Grabbing him by the arm, Sasha says that she missed him very much. Seeing all of that, Isabel thinks that the whole act was a bit too much for a public space, but the other guests seemed to ignore it, as they saw her as a heroine despite everything. Sasha displayed an innocent look. Isabel noticed something. As the Emperor and his consort walked away, the girl told him that even if they saw each other every day, she would still miss him. Sasha took the opportunity to tell him that she had spent a long time waiting for that party simply to be with the Emperor. Alexander rudely says that the event happened every week, so what was the reason for such high expectations? Isabel listens in surprise as Sasha says that every week was interesting, because it was where the entire imperial family gathered. She wonders what she meant by calling them family. The Emperor asks her to pay attention to the words spoken there. She apologizes, saying that she spoke without thinking. Isabel wonders what kind of shallow provocation that was. How could the Isabel from the story have been so hurt by that? Sasha looks around with that usual innocent air. Our protagonist thought that it didn't matter whether the two truly loved each other or not because she was not the real Isabel, so there was no way for her to be hurt. It would be a shame to pay attention to such basic tricks, and in any case, she had another purpose for attending that party. Isabel delicately swirls her wine in the glass. In front of her stood Marquise Wilhelm, who seemed a little frightened. The wine spills. Isabel throws her wine onto the Marquis, who is caught by surprise. Very startled, the guests watch all of it. The woman gives a satisfied smile. With a smug smile, she apologizes for the incident, saying that her hands were very slippery. The wine was completely spilled. All the guests were completely shocked. Even Sasha was frightened, hiding behind the emperor. Isabel tells the Marquis that she hadn't realized how slippery her hand was. The tormented man says that she deliberately spilled everything on him. She says that she has already apologized and asks what more he wants from her. Isabel keeps insisting that her hand really did slip, but he was not convinced. She says that it will happen again, and she delivers a hard slap to the Marquis. He felt the force of her hand. Isabel had a deep hatred for that old man. How dare he touch one of her girls when he was a married man with children? A few nights earlier, our protagonist remembers hearing fragments of a conversation among the maids. She approaches to better understand what was going on. One of the maids was comforting a friend who was crying and saying that a man kept sending her insistent letters and even showed up at her house. The young woman was so afraid that she feared Marquis Wilhelm might be waiting for her when she went out to work. Isabel immediately recognized his name. The girls were talking, and one of them said there were rumors that he chose young girls and touched them. Another commented that one of the Marquis's daughters had married into a poor family, as if he wanted to get rid of her. One of them commented that she was very afraid because he was a very powerful man. Isabel hears the girl say that she was afraid she wouldn't be able to stop him, so perhaps she would need to resign and even move house. Our protagonist became very angry, thinking that that old man was old enough to be the girl's grandfather. Isabel was furious at his audacity. She would already be angry if something so terrible happened to anyone, but it was even more revolting because it had happened to a girl who was so loyal to her. She lifted her head, taking a deep breath, and hoped that the young woman would not worry. Our protagonist was determined to take action. Back in the present, Isabel's hand moves quickly. She slaps the Marquis once more. The guests were very frightened, wondering if someone should stop her. Sasha still did not understand what was happening. In the Golden Hall, some began to reprimand the Empress. Isabel didn't care at all and continued slapping the Marquis, because to her that was the quickest revenge she could obtain. Despite the reprimands, no one there had the courage to stop her from doing that, except for one person. Sasha watched as Alexander stepped forward. The Emperor shouts at her, calling her by name. She smiles with satisfaction, having caused the reaction she expected. Isabel says that she wasn't finished yet and that there was still one more thing. The Empress, in all her glory, delivers a strong kick between the Marquis's legs. Everyone was very shocked at how everything escalated so quickly. The Marquis finally felt the pain of the consequences of his actions. The man finally fell to the ground, knocked out by her kick. She looked at him with deep contempt in her eyes. Isabel thought that it was better to do what she could with the resources she had. She turns upon hearing Alexander calling her. Our protagonist felt a little afraid when she saw him so close to her. Alexander wore a very severe look. She remained silent for a few moments, waiting for his reaction. With a defiant posture, she asks what the problem was. The Emperor seemed to be in a bad mood. He was very enraged that she had caused such damage during the banquet. Quickly, Alexander grabbed her arm. Isabel begins to speak to him. She thought that she was determined to cause a scene in a public place to encourage him to ask for a divorce, avoiding future embarrassments for him. Perhaps it was strange for her to do something that might benefit someone like Sasha, but she couldn't help it. She intended to follow the wishes of her heart, and soon Alexander would make her disappear. His gaze was furious. Then he says that she caused a huge mess. Isabel was confused. Had he gone mad? Alexander was a very attractive man, despite his temper. She couldn't understand what tactic he was using. The Emperor let out a sigh, and she was still confused. He told her that such behavior was inadmissible. Alexander looked at her hand, which was reddened after delivering so many slaps to the Marquis. Turning to the side, he asked for the royal physician to be called to treat the Empress's hand. Was she the only one confused by his change in attitude? Well, apparently not. She approaches Alexander. In an ironic tone, Isabel says that the one who must be needing the imperial physician is Marquis Wilhelm, since he was unconscious on the floor. The Emperor tells her to feel free. Sometime later, in another part of the palace, far from the guests, the royal physician examines Isabel's hand and she feels that Alexander was protecting her. After examining the Empress's hand, the physician explains that everything was fine, as her hand was only reddened. Isabel remembered that Alexander did not reprimand her in public. The Emperor asks the physician to give her the best possible treatment. Isabel wonders what he might be thinking by doing that. He seemed very annoyed with her. And suddenly, he gives her an affectionate smile. She averts her gaze so as not to feel attracted to the emperor. She wondered what kind of smile that was on his face. On the other side of the palace, some guests were talking about some golden threads in the palace, and some others were asking what had happened between them, since for some time the emperor had only cared about the consort. What could have caused such a drastic reaction from the empress? She knew she looked like a hateful woman in the eyes of others. Alexander says they may go to the imperial dinner if the physician has already finished treating her. The noble turns to her and gives her a charming wink. Isabel is very confused by the emperor's change in attitude. They proceed to the great golden hall. He begins to take off his coat and places it over Isabel's shoulders as a protective gesture. Isabel discreetly showed that she liked that gesture. She looks at those who were still present there. In the background, behind the guests, Sasha seemed desolate. The consort was clearly very upset. Our protagonist realized how affected Sasha was by that. She also noticed how people were still commenting on what had happened. She imagined that surely the next day the newspapers would be talking about her relationship with the emperor. Had he changed toward her to try to dissuade public opinion about the possible divorce? That was a bit compromising. Alexander explains to the guests that he had not prepared anything very formal, but that he hoped they would enjoy it. That moment was not meant for official business, but rather a place for exchanges among officials from each palace. He wished that no one would feel pressured into anything. Isabel thinks it was an exaggeration to say that nothing had been prepared. If an event of that size was prepared every Friday, what must an annual event be like? Even the simplest foods were very elaborate. She lets out a sigh, thinking that at least she should eat to have energy to carry on with her wicked plans. Alexander approaches and asks the empress to serve herself, since she had used a lot of strength a short while ago. She laughs a little awkwardly. Out of nowhere, Sasha compliments Isabel's dress. Trying to strike up a conversation, the girl asks whether that dress was from boutique Charlotte Collins. Sasha says she heard that the empress bought 14 designs there, and as expected, the models were fabulous and suited Isabel very well. For her, a simpler model would be enough. Our protagonist tries to understand why the consort was trying so hard to seem modest, until she realizes that it was a very effective strategy. She remembers that in the original story, Sasha was seen as a poor girl who rose quickly, and there was an episode with a noble lady who had a mink stole. Pretending to be a modest girl, Sasha says she would never buy something so expensive and would be content with squirrel or rabbit fur because she found everything too extravagant. The lady was very embarrassed by her words. However, that made the men admire Sasha even more. Isabel thinks that before she might not have noticed that strategy, but it was certainly intentional. Had the consort forgotten that she had already bragged about being close to the owner of the dress boutique? Speaking of dresses, Alexander diverted his attention from Sasha, and turning to Isabel, he asked the empress why she was not wearing the dress he had given her. He asked whether that was not enough for her. During the dinner, Isabel wonders why he was speaking to her like that. She refused to nurture a relationship with him. The guests were beginning to grow tense again, thinking that the emperor and the empress were at odds. Isabel thinks that there will always be public opinions, no matter what she does. Adopting another strategy, she tells him that his nobility does not match those clothes. She tells him that she would rather receive a city or a castle. The guests were astonished by her words. She lets out a sigh, thinking that since he was the emperor, that was not asking too much. But perhaps her plans were not going as she expected. Alexander smiles at her. He asks whether what she wants is just a city. Taking her hand, the emperor says that would not be enough. Looking at her with affection, Alexander says that even if he conquered another empire, she would never be replaced. He reminds her that she is the pillar of that empire and his only empress. Isabel was deeply shocked. Had he eaten something spoiled? Her plans were only to get her money and a divorce, not to take all the empire's investments. It would make no sense if he continued giving her extravagant things. She wonders what she would do if he gifted her a dress worth the value of a city. Interrupting the conversation, Sasha tells the emperor that she wouldn't mind if he never gave her an expensive dress, saying that she only wanted silk and linen dresses. The two nobles hear the consort say that people's values do not change according to their clothes. She says that the only condition was that the emperor would remain by her side for her entire life. That would be enough for her. The guests listened as the young woman said that even though she had no treasure, he treated her as if she were a treasure. Isabel was left speechless. The truth is that our protagonist found all of that very sudden and without reason. She regarded Sasha as a young woman who was quite intelligent. Had she become insecure upon seeing Alexander give attention to Isabel? Alexander rudely asks Sasha what she is talking about. Putting the consort in her place, the emperor says that she had no treasure. So what did that mean? He tells the girl that he gave her an amount appropriate to her position as imperial consort. Nothing more than that. Sasha was deeply shaken by that blunt response. He asks her how she could fulfill her responsibilities to the people without understanding what she possessed. To him, modesty and humility were not the only virtues of the imperial family. Isabel remains silent while the two argue. Sasha seemed devastated by the Emperor's speech. He asks her if she understood what he meant. The young woman replies that she will remember that in the future. Isabel lets out a sigh, thinking that despite the reprimand, Sasha would behave the same way again soon. By the way, in the original book, would Alexander ever have spoken to her like that? In her memories, there was nothing like that. Judging by the atmosphere of the dinner, she did not seem to be the only one surprised, as the guests were also uncomfortable with that conversation. Isabel no longer knew what to expect. She remembered very clearly that the character had been cruelly abandoned by the Emperor and his consort. At last, the protagonist decides to eat something. To Alexander, Sasha's words must have been a huge exaggeration. She finds herself thinking about what happened, having seen him speak about the obligations of the nobility, because Isabel saw him as just another authoritarian emperor. Alexander asks the guests if anyone would like to join him for a drink. After several guests offered to have a glass of wine with him, Isabel thought that he was capable of creating a new atmosphere for that dinner. With a gleam in her eyes, she was determined not to lose. She decided to behave so badly during the dinner that they would grow tired of her. Isabel complains about several things during the dinner, even ordering the servants to remove all the fish bones. In addition, she asked for the steaks to be grilled and the tomatoes to be peeled before being served, because she could not digest tomato skin. Some guests comment on how difficult the Empress's temperament is because she used to be gentle and calm. She hears the men commenting on how the former Isabel was benevolent and merciful, but something had made her change drastically. The same men also gossip about the imperial consort who, besides being sweet, was completely submissive to the Emperor. Isabel becomes annoyed hearing those foolish comments about herself and Sasha, but decides to focus on the food, which was much better. The Empress knows that she should be 100% committed to the role of villain. In silence, Alexander takes a sip of his drink. Suddenly, something catches the Emperor's attention. What could it be? After that party, nothing much happened for some time, until Isabel received an invitation. She noticed that it was a letter from Duchess Salinger. That was the first time Isabel had heard that name, as she did not remember seeing it in the book. Why would she send her an invitation? There was nothing about that Duchess in Isabel's papers, so they were probably not relatives. Could she be a friend? Some kind of mysterious ally? Since in the original story Isabel was a secondary character, it wouldn't be strange if a friend didn't appear. If Duchess Salinger really was Isabel's friend, it would be strange for her to refuse that invitation. Even so, her personality had changed drastically after several events. If she ignored her friend, she could be considered insane. And in an empire like that, people of that sort found their fate at a stake. Her only purpose was to obtain a divorce, not to end up amid flames, so Isabel decides to be even more cautious. Our protagonist was curious to know why she had been invited, so she decides that it would be better to take a walk than to stay in her room. Although divorce was her main goal, if she was going to spend some time living there, she needed to gather more information. She knew that there was more information than the maids could reveal to her, or that was written in the books in the library. Isabel reflects that a tea party with other ladies would be a great place to gather the information she wanted. But even so, how would she accept that invitation? At the Salinger Palace, many elegant ladies walked about in their ball gowns. Many refined young women paraded in their outfits. Others chatted with friends about the latest events. At the center, Duchess Salinger greets the guest of honor of that afternoon, the Empress Isabel of Castilla. That was the first time our protagonist encountered people from outside the palace, aside from the designers. Judging by the Duchess's title and her age, she seemed to be the most influential figure there, so it would be crucial for Isabel to remain cautious. Isabel reflected, trying to understand whether Salinger was a friend or an enemy, and she heard some girls praising her dress. Some of them said how much the wine color highlighted her red hair and fair skin. Distracted, our protagonist wonders who is still yet to arrive. She hears a nearby laugh. At her side, Duchess Salinger commented that the Empress's dress was truly luxurious. She gives an enigmatic smile. Now it was time to know the truth. Apparently, the Duchess and she did not have a friendly relationship. Among the nobility of the empire, talking about money was considered vulgar. Because of that, even at a grand party, it was considered taboo to talk about money. The same applied to inconvenient questions about how much certain things cost. And the Duchess's comment about her dress being too luxurious was not a compliment, but an insult. With a contemptuous laugh, Duchess Salinger repeats that the dress was very luxurious, but only the dress. Isabel cannot accept that situation. To her, there was no way a lady of that age had not learned basic etiquette. Even if the empire was a place where power was far more important, and even if her family was a ruined lineage with only a name left, why was there no one there who respected Isabel? She assumes that the Duchess must have seen her as a peasant who would never be able to fit in among the nobility. But Isabel was no longer the same as before. Opening her large fan, she wonders if the Duchess thought she would simply accept those insults. Isabel reveals that her dress was from Boutique Winston, leaving the woman confused. Showing off her beautiful dress, she comments that there were many fabulous designs there for her. All the Empress needed to do was choose. Then she accused the Duchess of also buying very luxurious dresses at the same place. Quickly, the older woman stands up, fleeing the discussion, and Isabel smiles triumphantly. And that was how she made the Duchess taste her own poison. Our protagonist immediately noticed that she was wearing a dress from the same boutique. If things continued that way, the woman would not be able to keep up appearances. If she did not want to be challenged, then she should not start a fight. In any case, there were 2 empty seats. If one was hers, whose would the other be? And finally, she arrives. Isabel watched the guests greeting the imperial consort. Sasha appeared wearing a delicate cream dress with embroidery. She asked the other girls to sit down. Our protagonist grew pensive as Sasha's presence there would change her plans. Then she gives a smug smile. Approaching the Empress, Sasha says that it is wonderful to see her there. The girl gives her a friendly smile. Isabel realized what was happening. All those people gathered there were deliberately ignoring her. According to imperial etiquette, if a person of higher status was seated, they should never stand up to greet anyone, even if other guests arrived. It was a polite way to be considerate, as the person of higher status might feel uncomfortable being left sitting alone. But Isabel realized that all the women there had ignored that rule. Sasha gracefully approaches. She gives such an innocent look that it is almost irritating. On the other side of the hall, the imperial consort looked at the Empress. She returned the gaze like the great rivals they were. The guests showered the consort with compliments, noting the elegance of her cream-toned dress. At last, Isabel understood the reason why Duchess Salinger had invited her there. It had probably been at Sasha's request. Surely the girl had deliberately asked the Duchess to invite her, so that Isabel would be in a place where the consort stood out, just to diminish the Empress. Then, the shrewd protagonist understands that it is time to leave. Isabel smiles with satisfaction. Suddenly, everything that was on top of the table is thrown away. The guests were shocked by what had happened, especially Sasha, who had already witnessed other tragic moments. Isabel stood with her hand outstretched. The Empress looked imposing as she faced the other women. She commented to the guests that the laws seemed to be turned upside down in that mansion. According to Isabel, the arrangement of the tea table should be changed accordingly. They try to apologize to the Empress, attempting to fix the situation. Isabel turns to Sasha, calling her. Soon after, she asks the consort if she would like to say something to her. Feeling very nervous, Sasha begins to respond. The girl starts asking Isabel for forgiveness, saying that she arrived in the Empire only recently. She explains that she was not used to those rules of etiquette and promises that she would be more careful next time. Isabel lets out a sigh, noticing how Sasha always came up with more and more excuses, but it was already too irritating to keep reminding her all the time. Our protagonist ponders for a few moments. She realizes that Sasha already seemed quite nervous. Perhaps the concubine had never imagined that she would have to bow to the Empress she had once despised so much. Isabel says that the tea had already been spilled, so it was time for her to leave, and the elegant monarch turned to go. However, before leaving completely, she wanted to give a small warning. She told Sasha that from then on, it would be better for her to be careful with her behavior in front of the Empress. Those words left all the girls in shock. However, Sasha remained silent. She was very nervous about that public reprimand. Sometime later, in the Emperor's office, Sasha told Alexander everything that had happened. He listened to everything she said, and then replied that she should deal with that kind of thing on her own. The girl did not seem to understand. Alexander patiently explained to her that as the Emperor of the Empire, he was not idle enough to intervene in the mess of a simple tea party. He casts a firm look at the girl. Playing innocent, Sasha asks whether she had ever bothered him. Trying to convince him, she says that she was afraid of disappointing him if she did not adapt well to the Empire and its customs. She only wanted to tell him what had happened. He says that he was not bothered at all. Putting on a charming act, Sasha says that the Emperor seemed too busy to listen to her. Alexander wonders why she needed to tell that useless story right now. He anxiously taps his fingers on the table. Finally, the Emperor asked the girl what she would like him to do. She pondered for a few moments. At last, Sasha smiled. The consort tells him that she hopes she is not crossing any line by worrying about this. But after the tea party, she heard the guests insulting the Empress. What Isabel had done that afternoon was surprising even to her. Alexander asks what that had to do with anything. Sasha explains that if she herself told the Empress what had happened, it would be difficult for her to listen. So the girl suggests that he directly express Sasha's concerns to Isabel. After all, he was still her husband, wasn't he? He was still tapping his fingers on the table. Sasha is certain that the Empress would listen to him. At night, the palace was illuminated by the moonlight. Alexander walks down the corridor. The Emperor seemed quite thoughtful about Sasha's request. He gives a malicious smile. The girl had not surpassed his expectations. The truth was that the consort was not as naive as her appearance suggested, and she truly knew a thing or two. Despite taking some time to tell him what she wanted, she eventually revealed it in the end. What Sasha truly wanted was for him to reprimand Isabel for her behavior. But truly, there was no one innocent in that filthy world, because that woman was very similar to him. Sasha was truly cruel and hid behind a facade of innocence and kindness. A filthy soul that thought only of herself, hiding behind her beauty. He would have hated it if she were truly naive and kind. Alexander did not hate having that kind of person by his side, and that was why he placed her under the title of consort, depending on gains and losses. However, that had become very irritating recently. He noticed how she had been becoming more demanding lately, and other things were starting to irritate him. He knocked on the door, thinking that he understood the reason for it. Isabel opened the door, and Alexander was there waiting. The Empress looked very irritated. The woman asked him if there was any urgent reason at such a late hour of the night. However, he remained silent. With a smile, he asks if he may come in. Isabel says nothing, assessing the situation. She allows him to enter her room, and he thanks her. Alexander stops and thinks for a moment, noticing that it had been quite a long time since he had gone to Isabel's room. He thinks that it must have been more than a month since the last time he was there. The Emperor hears his wife comment that he had ignored her for 2 weeks. So what was the reason that had made him go to her room at midnight? He gives a smile, asking her whether husband and wife really need a special reason to meet. Isabel became even more irritated. She had said that to him at the beginning of the story. She had asked for a divorce, and was that how he wanted to treat her? The Emperor observed his irritated wife. Her expressions had become much more varied. Originally, he knew that his wife was not very expressive. She always seemed nervous, impatient, or even wore a sorrowful smile. But this Isabel was very different. At first, he thought she was simply trying to get his attention, but the more he looked at her, the more it seemed that wasn't really the case. Apparently, something had changed, he thought as he lightly moved his hand. Isabel seemed to have become a completely different woman. Her luxuries had increased, but he preferred her that way. For a while, Isabel had imitated Sasha, even wearing the same dresses, which created a rumor that said the Emperor did not spend money on his wife. Amused by that moment, Alexander confessed that he did not know she made that expression. Despite being together for 3 years, he was still surprised to discover new things about her. Isabel asked him if that was true. Everything was so sudden. He says that this new personality suited her very well. The Empress heard her husband praise her expression at that moment. She crosses her arms, thinking that she was mistaken in believing that he had gone to her room at midnight to say something important. Isabel tries to understand the reason for those sudden compliments and replies that she likes her new personality. Interrupting the conversation, she says that if he had nothing truly important to say, it would be better for her to go to sleep and for him to return to his room. Alexander gives a slightly mischievous smile. Before she leaves, he says that her new style pleased him very much. A little anxious, she turns to him and asks if there had been any misunderstanding. She was not dressing that way for him. The Emperor lets out a sigh and says that he knows that very well, since she is the one who talks about divorce every day. He meant that he likes the way she knows how to dress beautifully. Isabel was completely caught off guard by that sincere compliment. How could her heart have sped up a little because of that? She thanks him for the comment. Smiling at her, Alexander asks why her cheeks were so red. Indeed, it was true. Perhaps our protagonist was not accustomed to receiving sincere compliments from handsome men. She says that probably. It must be the lighting that made her red. Isabel justifies that it was not her face that was blushing, but the light in the room. Alexander smiles at her. He thinks that it must be something important to her. Observing her, the Emperor thought that the situation was far more interesting than he had imagined. In fact, he was not mocking her at all. However, there was something. Recently, her behavior had been very different. She seemed like a frightened kitten whenever she was near him. Alexander remembers how she used to be. The former Isabel seemed much more like a lifeless doll than a human. Posing like a marionette, Isabel was unresponsive. He imagines that if she were injured, she would react like a person, and he decided to ask if she remembered what happened at the last dinner party. She did not like that question. What could he be plotting? Alexander confesses that he still did not understand why she had behaved that way, and asks if she knew how much trouble she had caused. He apologizes for the embarrassment. She was surprised to hear the Emperor say that he was grateful they had taken Marquis Wilhelm away. Isabel did not quite understand what he was talking about. Alexander looked at her with his intense golden eyes. He finally explained to her that the Marquis had prevented a neighboring empire from increasing its power, which was not exactly illegal, but the Marquis himself found signs that they were embezzling taxes and military supplies. The emperor added that even without fully understanding what was going on, he would not easily give in to such a suspicious movement. Isabel also heard him say that he had hired an assassin to injure Marquis Wilhelm until she intervened at the party, which turned out to be a great opportunity. For Alexander, it made sense for him to act politically, because he was certain that the Marquise's supporters would go after him to protest. But what would happen if she intervened? That was what happened. He says that all attention would turn to the Empress and her unpredictable actions. Isabel asked if that was the reason he protected her during the ceremony. Perhaps that was why the next day's newspapers had only news about their love triangle and nothing about Marquis Wilhelm. The emperor explained that since everything happened because of the Empress's actions, he sent some physicians to the injured noble. The 8 weeks of recovery would be enough for Alexander to investigate the Marquis's irregularities. He asked if she was satisfied now that the Marquis had been deposed. Alexander said that even the Marchioness was relieved, and that he knew of several women in the palace who disliked him. He gives her a shrewd smile. Alexander suggests that they have a collaborative relationship. The man states that in public, they would maintain the appearance of a couple who did not like each other, but that in truth, the two of them would cooperate with one another. There were many advantages to that arrangement. She says that in fact, they had no relationship at all, and that she refuses His Majesty's offer. Isabel did not want to nurture any further relationship with her future ex-husband. Sparks flew around them. He says that if she thought that way, he would have no other choice. Isabel asked what he meant by that, and he replied that he would have a different proposal for her. Even so, it could be something interesting. He reveals that he was willing to do anything for her. Isabel realized how tough he was to deal with. The Empress asks him to stop speaking to her that way. His insistence only made her more annoyed. She was capable of crossing fire and ice for something she wanted. Alexander crossed his arms and thought for a moment. He commented that the two of them were truly stubborn and said that the best one should win. Isabel lets out a big laugh and asks if he would like to say anything else to her. She warns him that the two of them could end up getting hurt in the process. With a defiant look, she warns him that she had very sharp teeth. Isabel was anything but a loser. Something caught Alexander's attention. As he extended his hand, he began to feel something different. Isabel was also surprised. He desperately wanted to touch her. He gently touched her lips. Even his expression changed completely. He did not know why, but he desired it fervently. More than ever, the emperor wanted to have Isabel with his own hands. That night, the atmosphere in the room changed completely. A romantic mood seemed to arise. Alexander gently touched Isabel's face, bringing the two closer. He wondered what it was that he was feeling. His fingers continued to touch his wife's face. The emperor could not understand that he was in love. He could only think about how much he wanted to kiss her, from her mouth to the side of her face. Alexander tried to restrain himself, as he did not know how Isabel would react. The emperor gently held her face with both hands and moved closer to kiss her. The two drew nearer, but something did not go as expected. A feather pillow is thrown, and it struck the emperor hard, who was still confused about what was happening. Alexander asked Isabel what she was doing. She grips the pillow more tightly. Very startled, the empress asked what he was thinking. Quite furious, Isabel asked if he had completely lost his mind. She hit him repeatedly with the pillow, saying that this would not make her give up on the divorce and that this trick would not work on her. Alexander asks Isabel to calm down. She asked if she looked calm at that moment. Isabel abruptly closed the doors. The emperor was devastated. His wife threw him out of the room, leaving him in pieces. She tossed the pillow back onto the bed. Isabel was completely furious at his audacity. How dare he try something like that while she was trying to divorce him? That near kiss. That was truly very unexpected for her. At last, she realized something. It was better for Isabel to stop thinking about it. She believed that a man like him could never have feelings for her, because he only had eyes for Sasha. To our protagonist, he was merely a man in a romantic fantasy. Originally in the story, Isabel tried to win him over even though they were married, so he could not suddenly become interested in her. She thought that trying to kiss someone you do not care about was a waste of time. That face combined with that personality must have made many women cry. Why would she have felt so happy that a man had tried to kiss her, even knowing that he did not love her? A new day begins in the palace. Isabel's sleep had been disturbed the night before, and because of that, she looked very tired. She thought irritably that all of that was his fault. Our protagonist was so startled that she preferred to kick him out before something worse happened. If she injured the emperor's face, she could suffer far more serious consequences. She thought that if the emperor wanted to punish her for what happened the night before, he would have already done something, right? But since he had not commented on it, perhaps he had let it go. That situation bothered her greatly. Isabel had many other things on her mind. After all, the empress was still responsible for many matters within the court. She should support cultural events and the well-being of the people. cultivating diplomacy among smaller kingdoms, many things that might go unnoticed, but that were essential to the empire. Those duties were supposedly meant to be shared by the empress and the consort, but Sasha was completely clueless. It had already been 6 months since she arrived at the court. Isabel picked up her quill pen. She was tired of having such a heavy workload and wished the empire would give her some respite. Her maids approached, claiming that Your Majesty seemed very tired and offering to help her with whatever she needed. Isabel said that everything would be fine. However, she quickly remembered that she was the villain in that story. She asks the maids to wait a little. On the other side of the palace, many maids were praising Sasha's hair and porcelain skin. They asked whether Emperor Alexander liked her fair skin. A figure approaches the door. The bedroom doors burst open abruptly. Sasha was very startled by the Empress's arrival. She told Isabel that it was very sudden for her to be there. The Empress lets out a loud laugh. After throwing several papers onto the table, she says that she had been working far too much. And she adds that meanwhile, Sasha was being praised for her hair and skin. Now it was the consort's duty to accompany her in the royal work. Isabel asks Sasha, "Why don't you stop being a lazy woman?" Later that day in the palace, Isabel was having a cup of tea. The Empress enjoyed a bit of peace and quiet. She was satisfied because she had left all the work to Sasha, since clearly the consort would not know how to do it properly. Sasha begged Isabel to give her some time so she could learn, maybe a month or even a week. Isabel said she would not grant her a single extra day, and that the deadline started immediately. The consort tried to evade her duties by saying that the emperor had ordered her to take some time off from work. Isabel says that Alexander's orders had no effect on her. The Empress asks what Sasha had been doing during all those months. Clearly, she knew that not everything would go well. Sasha did not work well at all, as many parts of the palace were left without maintenance. She chose the wrong people for diplomatic ties and spent money on meaningless things. A palace was like a machine house, whose gears needed to fit together perfectly. After only 3 days of handing the work over to Sasha, things began to go off the rails. Some servants begged Isabel to return to her duties as before, because things were not going well. They begged more and more, and our protagonist realized how much Isabel had done favors for everyone without receiving any gratitude in return. The two of them were very fearful because of the problems. In truth, it was difficult for Isabel as well to let things happen that way, but she needed to maintain her villainous stance. The Empress asks the servants who had ordered the two of them to come speak with her. Had she not just said that she was not interested in the work? Isabel asks them what Alexander was doing at that moment. The two remain silent, too embarrassed to speak. They confess that the consort's assistants do their best to help her, but even that was not enough. Isabel knows that not all the assistants in the world would be able to help someone with Sasha's weak little mind, but she refused to give in because she did not want to return to her former days. Isabel puts an end to that situation and says that enough is enough. And so, she sent everyone out and continued with her strategy. Apparently, after everyone left, someone arrived who had not been invited. Alexander looked at her with a firm gaze. He asked her to resume her royal duties as he was responsible for teaching the noble consort. The Empress heard him say that her workload would even be reduced. Isabel became annoyed because, besides raising his voice at her, Alexander called Sasha noble. He apologizes, saying that he was insensitive and made things worse. Alexander confesses that he does not expect her to forgive his foolishness, and that he promises he will not allow that to happen again. Isabel says that many things happened within that palace. She grows irritated hearing him say that he had no authority to speak about the palace's affairs. So that was a request, not an imperial order. As emperor, a favor to the empress, a partner to govern the empire. That speech took Isabel by surprise. The truth was that she was not expecting a sincere apology from him. She did not care about his apologies or about Sasha's suffering. Isabel reminds him of one detail. She points out his statement in which he promised that he would not let that happen again. Then, she asks him to write a memorandum reminding him of his duty to properly educate the consort and to divide the work fairly. Alexander says that he hopes she will trust him, so that he will write the memorandum. She says that there should be a condition if the agreement is not fulfilled. Isabel smiles with satisfaction. The Empress has only one request: the divorce. Alexander remains silent. Despite being a little annoyed, he accepted the agreement. Swearing on his name, he asks for the papers to be brought for him to sign. Isabel thinks that he should simply accept the divorce and let the consort become his empress. Why was he choosing such a difficult path? In any case, the emperor truly kept his word. Sasha gained 5 tutors, totaling almost 10 hours of classes every day. It was almost as if she were preparing for college. Meanwhile, Isabel dealt with all the poorly done work left by the consort and worked so hard that she could be called a bad girl. She completed all the remaining work in 15 days. It was very difficult to bring things back to normal, and the people who began working with her praised her greatly. The servants praised the empress throughout the palace. Everyone returned to admiring her and commented on her grace. Isabel asks them to stop it. While the maids were talking, Sasha listened from afar. Those praises directed at the empress infuriated the consort. In the palace, some maids commented that the empress had hired experts in administration. The girls wondered, how could she have thought of that? One of them shared her theory. There were 3 people, including the official responsible for managing the imperial palace. Another was the official responsible for charity work. And lastly, the official of culture and the arts. Apparently, they were doing extremely well. One of the maids began telling the others about her latest conversation with the empress in the palace. Isabel was a very humble woman. The maids were very impressed by her composure. They chatted in the garden while Sasha walked nearby. The consort listened with some discomfort as the girls praised the empress. A few days later, a tea party took place, which had been organized by the imperial consort. It was the first time the guests had seen so many beautiful flowers together. One of the guests said there must have been more than 4,000 flowers. Extending a flower, Sasha asks if the lady liked it. Then she reveals that all of them had been a gift from Alexander. Sasha says that she did not want anything excessive, but that he insisted. The guests were enchanted by the love the emperor seemed to have for the consort. However, someone had something different to say. A blonde man named Count Damien commented that none of them knew how terrifying the emperor was in official meetings. He argues that Alexander would not show such kindness to the imperial consort without feeling love for her. Another woman argues that the emperor was an adorable man. Count Damien says that he was only like that with women because many people had lost their lives due to his whims. He began to reveal a secret, but gave up. Sasha was very uncomfortable with the Count's words. The consort says that Alexander truly was a very capricious emperor, but that she understood nothing about politics. The conceited man says that she should not know anything about politics anyway for being a woman, and that the emperor was constantly busy with affairs of the realm. One of the girls comments that Sasha had been studying a lot. Count Damien is left speechless upon hearing that Sasha had been studying hard to be a better consort for the empire. She wanted to work hard because she knew that lately she had not helped much. She says that the emperor loved her very much and cared about her. Sasha says that she had been studying so much lately that she was feeling a little dizzy. One of the ladies asks for the servants to be called. The consort apologizes and says that she would not like her guests to see her like that. Sasha begins to tell them what she wanted was to no longer trouble the empress and to be able to accept more responsibilities. She looked at the guests while they discussed the consort's work. Sasha laughed discreetly, feeling a slight sense of satisfaction. The consort told everyone that she was fine. The girl confessed that she wanted to become someone as competent and capable as the empress, who had the great idea of hiring specialists to help her with imperial matters, while all Sasha could do was learn on her own. But that came as a surprise to the guests. Sasha explained that since Isabel was the empress, she must have thought carefully before making that decision. After all, she had spent a lot of money, nearly 5 million gold coins. Count Damien reveals that he knew about the empress's luxuries, but did not expect her to spend all that money, even though it did not compare to what she had done with Marquis Wilhelm. Everyone commented that nothing like that had ever happened in the entire history of the empire. Was she really the right person to be the empress? The Count tells Sasha that her father was the one who dealt directly with the affairs of the emperor and the empress. He tells the ladies that men who take part in political affairs need to be more logical and rational. They all looked at him with a certain disdain. Then, one of them suggests that he go speak directly with the emperor about Isabel's expenses, since he was so logical. Count Damien was confused and asked why she said that. The young woman replied that he was the only one there who saw the emperor frequently, so he was the only possible choice. He became terrified, claiming that he was just a newcomer to the empire. The man heard the ladies reminding him that he had bragged to them about his many connections and that he should be a brave man. Suddenly, Sasha calls out to him. She declares that if he could speak with the emperor, it would be of great help to her. With tears in her eyes, the consort says that she will do her best so that Alexander does not become so angry. Count Damien was left speechless. At last, he was convinced. Now he was determined to go speak with the emperor. The afternoon refreshment continues. Sasha was very grateful because everything had been far too easy. Ladies and other young women did not react as passionately as men, so it was difficult to incite them to do anything. But it did not take much to convince a man surrounded by women to react impulsively. Sasha was very satisfied to see that her plans were going well. A new day begins in the palace. Noblemen arrive for a meeting with the emperor, among them Count Damien. He wondered if this was really the right thing to do. Despite being apprehensive, he could not ignore what Sasha had asked of him during the tea party. He was very reflective, but he was determined to help his friend. The men sit at the table to begin the meeting. Still reflecting, he placed his hand on the papers. At last, he considered that matter appropriate for the agenda. To Count Damien, it was completely ridiculous that such a reckless woman could be the empress. She had been audacious enough to make the consort cry. It was Sasha who should be empress, not Isabel. The Count believed that a patriotic man like himself could not let such matters slide. Now it was time to act. Before Alexander began the meeting agenda, Count Damien quickly stood up and declared that he would like to say something. His uncle, Marquis Damien, immediately reprimanded him, saying that if he wanted to add something, he should have consulted him beforehand. Count Damien was very annoyed by that interruption because he was no longer a child to follow his uncle's orders, and he would seize that opportunity to show his abilities. He explains that he needs to speak about certain matters concerning the Empress, and two assistants hand over some reports that he had investigated. The Marquis stood up quickly, asking the Count how he dared to bring something like that without consulting him first. Alexander tells the Marquis that everything was fine. Count Damien lets out a sigh of relief. The Emperor says that all of this was very interesting. He was very interested in learning about that agenda for a public debate on punishments for the Empress's atrocities. Alexander asked the others whether that was really his opinion. Count Damien confirmed that it was. With a slight smile, the Emperor asks him to continue. Thinking that the Emperor was interested in his opinion, he began his speech. As he commented on his investigation, other older men of the Imperial Council conversed among themselves. The two judged that Count Damien was probably envious of the previous generations. But at that moment, he was full of himself, thinking that his abilities were being recognized and that he might obtain a higher position. Even the Emperor was smiling during his speech. Obviously, he was listening carefully. When he finished, Alexander praised his presentation. At last, the Emperor asked whether that opinion had been influenced by someone else. Count Damien cheerfully revealed that he and 6 other friends had reached those conclusions. Alexander surprised him by saying that then there were only 7 foolish people in that place. He had incited a public debate about the atrocities that the Empress had committed against Marquis Wilhelm. His uncle listened in anguish as the Emperor asked his nephew whether he had ever considered the reasons why she had done that. Alexander called for the secretary. He returned quickly holding a stack of papers. The Emperor said that the Count should perhaps take a look at them, if his head was not merely an ornament, and he asks all the lords present to read what was written. Alexander throws some papers at Count Damien. With trembling hands, he picks up one of the sheets. The Count was shocked to discover that the Marquis's previous accusations were of exporting military supplies and embezzling taxes. Another noble was very shocked, not knowing what to say about it. The lords agreed that the evidence was quite clear. Alexander revealed to everyone that Marquis Wilhelm was about to flee to the kingdom of Rüdiken, and after the Empress discovered this, she risked her reputation to deal with it with her own hands. Count Damien read all the papers, shocked by the gravity of the accusations. He realized that he had made a huge mistake. The Count could barely pronounce his words. Damien tried to point out the Empress's expenses in hiring specialists to handle the internal affairs of the palace, as that could be a violation. Alexander responds by demanding that the Count read the conditions under which Sasha left the palace when she was put in charge of handling those matters. The Emperor said that Isabel realized it would be inappropriate for only 2 people to take care of the palace's work, and that everything could be disrupted if she were unable to work. Count Damien was once again left speechless. Alexander, rising from the throne, asked what was more important to him, maintaining customs or ensuring security so that palace affairs could proceed smoothly. The Emperor said that now only one problem remained: how he would deal with the other 6 idiots who had defamed the Empress without knowing the circumstances. Immediately, he ordered his guards to take Count Damien to the dungeons. Far from there, in another part of the palace, Isabel was having tea while thinking that the time had come to speak with Alexander about their divorce once again. She was feeling a little uncomfortable with all of that. A few days pass. Sasha rests in her room. The consort lets out a sigh, a little sad. She reflected that despite having used bait for the speech, her plans had failed. What could one expect from such a young and immature man? There had already been a Count before. Interrupting her thoughts, one of the maids approaches, asking if Sasha was all right. The young woman asks what the imperial consort was thinking about. Sasha says it was nothing serious, and the girl says that it seemed like she was pondering difficult matters. Sasha confesses to her that the emperor had not visited her in a long time. The maids are very saddened by that news, but ask her not to worry so much. After all, the emperor was a very busy man. The girl says that he still visited her even when he was very busy, and that she would like to feel useful to him. One of the maids suggests that Sasha work as a goddess, for Sasha was capable of bringing new things between worlds, and it was something only she could do. The girl suggests that Sasha create a new narrative from another world. Quickly, the consort stands up and thanks the maids. That was a great idea, and Isabel would not be able to do that. Sasha hopes that the Empress will not remain arrogant for much longer. It was now October, the season when trees turned orange and birds began building their nests. And to welcome the new season, she wanted to hold an event as a goddess. Isabel reads a letter from Sasha inviting her to attend as she presents herself as a goddess. Our protagonist cannot remember if that happened in the original storyline. Reading the letter again, she realizes that this event was unprecedented. The Empress then assumes that the consort had arranged this merely to interfere with her plans. Moreover, if she wanted to build a relationship, she should focus on giving gifts or spending more time together. Alexander looked at her with unexpected affection. He seemed very happy to see her, but she was annoyed because the number of times they saw each other intentionally had increased. Why was he like that? In any case, it meant nothing if only Sasha was concerned. Our protagonist was curious to know more. She stood up from her armchair. Isabel was satisfied to have been invited. The girl thought it would be worth going. Guests begin to arrive at the palace. Some nobles of the realm chatted cheerfully. Suddenly, someone arrives wearing a delicate light pink dress. Sasha, the imperial consort, finally arrived, wearing a style somewhat ahead of its time. That caused a certain surprise among the guests. She wondered whether dresses above the knees were too revealing in that kingdom. People there wore long dresses even in the summer. Sasha decided to let that go. She knew very well that she needed to rebuild her influence in the palace, so she had to stand out greatly in that speech. The truth was that she did not care about the opinions of the other nobles, and she knew that no one would do anything suspicious because they knew who she was. However, she knew that someone would do anything to sabotage her. She could be a problem, precisely because she was a woman capable of stealing everyone's attention, even Alexander's. Sasha thought that this event would not be an exception, for Isabel would certainly wear a glamorous dress and many accessories to stand out. The consort walked toward the event. She knew that not long ago, Isabel had been just an ordinary girl. Sasha bit her lips nervously, but she managed to smile, disguising her anxiety. That day, she was determined to be the main character, no matter what others did. Finally, she arrives at the Grand Golden Hall and greets the nobles. She introduces herself as Sasha, the imperial consort. Before she could finish her greetings to the audience, a detail caught her off guard. She saw that her hands were trembling. Trying to continue her speech, she says that it was her first time holding an event, but inside, she could hardly believe what was happening. As she spoke, the guest seemed distracted by something more interesting. Seated on her throne, Isabel tapped her fingers on the arm of the chair. Sasha wondered what there was about that dress. The guests barely seemed to notice Sasha. There was no way the Empress's dress could be more eye-catching than hers. Then Isabel asks the guests to pay attention to her and tells everyone that the imperial consort can barely say a word. The Empress asks everyone to look forward so as not to embarrass her. With a smile and a nod, she asks Sasha to continue her speech. However, Sasha was still very unsettled by Isabel's audacity. Sasha thanks her, but she was still trembling a little. Even so, she wanted to resume her speech. Continuing her speech, she hears new voices, and she saw what was happening. Alexander, handing his coat to Isabel, asks her to cover her legs with it. Our protagonist refused, saying that she was not feeling cold. The Emperor insists that she cover herself. Sasha even forgot what she was about to say when she saw her beloved Alexander paying attention to Isabel. She tries to compose herself and decides that this is the last time the Empress will embarrass her. Sasha was the hostess of the event and did not intend to let anyone disrupt it. The girl calls the guests' attention once more, and then she decided to talk about smartphones. She comments that in her country of origin, that was an essential item. Isabel, thinking about her past life, imagined that it would be an object that might interest the people of the kingdom. Perhaps they would even think it was a royal item, however. Among the guests, a blonde man says that he did not believe it. How could something fit in the palm of one's hand and have so many functions? He says that he wanted to try that item at that very moment. Sasha was a little flustered, not knowing how to react to the request. The guests asked whether she was capable of creating a smartphone. A lady said that possibly she was, since she spoke so well about it, and another noble commented that the consort was very talented. Sasha was cornered. Would it not be enough just to tell a good story? Quite embarrassed, she confesses to the guests that it would not be possible to create a smartphone. The man asked her why not, since she was a goddess. Sasha tries to justify herself by saying that she was only an apprentice. Isabel, now with her legs covered, watched the disaster without saying a word. She was satisfied that it was turning into a fiasco. In that kingdom, universities were something quite different. In the Empire, if someone decided to go to university, that meant that the person would devote themselves to knowledge and education. However, many nobles did not attend university, but in her original world, not everyone wanted to go to university either. Since Sasha had mentioned being an apprentice, she should be capable of creating a smartphone. Isabel wonders why Alexander does not go help her, since he was the consort's romantic partner. And then, someone asks everyone to be quiet. Sasha looked at Isabel, who was far away. Isabel looked back at her. The consort was furious and very embarrassed. After all, what was she thinking? Was the Empress trying to pretend empathy? But the girl was determined not to end the event that way. She turns to her maids and asks them to bring something. The girls say that they did not know if it was ready yet and that they might need more time. Sasha insists that they bring it immediately. She thanks all the guests for their presents and then informs everyone that she had prepared a variety of dishes and would like them to try them. Isabel wonders what kind of dish she had brought. What could it be? A noblewoman says that the color of the meal was quite beautiful. Another guest comments that the portion was pleasing and had a sweet aroma. Sasha declares that they may help themselves freely as a buffet had been prepared. She hoped that everyone would like the food so that they would respond well after she explained how the meals had been prepared. However, the audience began to react very badly, complaining that the food was sticky. One guest complained that it was sticky to chew, while another man complained about the spiciness. Sasha was stunned, seeing the guests complain and even ask for water. Isabel picked up a toothpick. She skewered a portion of the food and began to taste it. Our protagonist thought it was quite tasty, even though the menu was a bit strange. Some guests wondered whether they could eat that food. Isabel assumed that the people of the kingdom did not seem to like honey rice cakes and kimchi dumplings. Even in her home country, foreigners usually found them a bit strange, despite them being delicious dishes. She thought it would be a shame if they were simply thrown away. Isabel thought for a few moments. Sasha wondered how things had come to that point. She would not stop trembling. Supposedly, Sasha was meant to be the main character. That reaction was not good at all. She was very lost and did not know what to do. Suddenly, Isabel clapped her hands. The Empress asked for everyone's attention. She said she would like to thank everyone for their presence at the event. Sasha was desolate listening to Isabel say that she had also prepared a simple dish using the same ingredients the consort had used. The guests wondered what kind of food the Empress was talking about. Isabel smiled, satisfied with herself. She saw how the guests seemed a little frightened. Our protagonist thought that there was nothing special about kimchi, but that combination was really a pity. Forcing the guests to eat when they did not like it was a bit too much. Suddenly, Alexander called his wife, who turned to him. The emperor said that he would like to eat. She then asked whether he would like to taste something first. He asked whether there was something wrong with that, and he also said that he hoped the food would not be as bad as before. Isabel explained that there was no reason for him not to try it, but she feared that the food might alter his precious palate. With a slight smile, he asked where her confidence had gone. Our protagonist became very irritated. Isabel said to him, "Very well then." She told him that she had prepared a buffet and that he could help himself to whatever he wanted. Alexander said that this looked more like the Isabel he knew. Our protagonist wondered what the hell he meant by that. She became a little worried about it. As he served himself, she explained that she had not been able to find all the necessary ingredients, so she had to be creative. All the guests were silent. No one dared to say a word. The emperor was open-mouthed. Isabel was a little alarmed, waiting for his reaction. Alexander said that her food was delicious. Everyone was shocked. How could the food be different? He said that the spicy seasoning had dissipated in the water, so it was not too strong. The bacon and vegetables went well together. The cheese complemented the flavor very well. Isabel wondered how he could explain all of that so well. The guests did not know which options to choose. Our protagonist was very relieved. She was happy that they liked the fried kimchi and the pancakes. Isabel was a very determined empress. In the empire, there was no soy sauce, so she had to use a mixture of salt and rice. One of the guests asked to eat more pancakes. More guests praised Isabel's food. The protagonist imagined that they were enjoying it because they were hungry, poor things. She was happy that everything had ended well at that dinner. Sasha had left silently, so Isabel had to manage the event, since she did not want Alexander to see her failing. Perhaps the consort was not in the best moment to think about that. Instead, she was curious to know Alexander's plans. Isabel accepted his invitation for them to dine together, because he had helped her taste some of the food, but she was not sure what he was plotting. Mentally, she prepared herself to stay alert. Alexander explained that he still wanted to convince her to collaborate with him, but that was not the only reason for the invitation. She wondered whether that was why he had abandoned her before. Why had he decided to help her then? The emperor revealed that he had not known she was so skilled. Isabel lied, saying that after they got married, she began to take an interest interest in cooking. Alexander asked whether that was true. Looking at him, our protagonist thought he was a truly fascinating man. She had read about his appearance in the story. Perhaps because of that, she could understand some of his actions in every situation. When she first read it, the first thing that came to her mind was that, in truth, Alexander was a tyrant emperor who only cared about Sasha. Clearly, that must have been the case. However, looking at him as they walked together, things really did seem to have changed quite a lot. In the afternoon, in the Imperial Garden, Isabel knew that Alexander was very observant. He would not care about anything other than the person he loved. As she walked, she thought that soon the two of them would become strangers, but that she still needed to discover a few things. Then the man told her to look over there. Those were Isabella flowers, beautiful and delicate, yet poisonous. Some people still use them to make medicine. Isabel thought that Alexander would take her to his room, and so she could hardly believe that they had gone to the garden. A little irritated, she said that they were not there just to look at the flowers. Alexander replied that appreciating the view of the flowers with his empress had a certain charm. Isabel then asked if he was talking about the empress whom he had abandoned for almost 3 years. His gaze changed quickly. At last, he replied that she was right, and that it had not been fair. That change in attitude surprised Isabel. He had given many excuses before when she mentioned the divorce. Thinking that way, had his attitude changed? Clenching her fist tightly, she remembered that he had a huge ego. That acknowledgement had not been sincere. She asked whether he was going to apologize. Alexander said that he could apologize insincerely as many times as she wanted, so that Isabel would not mention the divorce again. For him, lying to gain a political ally was not that difficult. Isabel began to reply to him, but she stopped and paid attention to the flowers. Alexander approached her and said that if it was not what he wanted, then the two of them were even. He told her that perhaps one day he would regret what he had done. Isabel remained silent, intrigued by his words. The emperor asked her to let it go as he was already talking nonsense again. When she read the original story, Isabel judged him to be a sociopath. All the cruel acts he committed without hesitation were all because of Sasha. Aside from the consort, he showed no feelings for anyone, as he saw people as trash. Remembering that, our protagonist became a little wary. She replied to him that she did not understand what he was talking about. Isabel asked whether someone's memories should not be forgotten. Alexander remained silent for a few moments, and soon stated that she merely wanted to ignore his words, and that pleased him. The protagonist said that being with him did not please her at all, but since he did not seem shaken, she found his words very strange. He approached and declared that he did not care whether she believed him or not. Alexander said that bringing her there as his ally was not something dangerous. He truly had brought her to the garden so that they could see the flowers. Offering his hand to her, he said that now it was time to go. Isabel leaned back, feeling wary of accepting his offer. Was this man taking advantage of his own beauty to win her over? In the end, she accepted holding his hand, knowing that she would not fall for his intentions. To her, no meant no. She preferred to change her life rather than fall in love with Alexander. He told her that he had enjoyed that afternoon very much. Isabel told him to thank the imperial consort because it was Sasha who had organized the entire event. She asked whether Alexander did not want to go down to see how the party was going. Staring at her with his golden eyes, he remained silent. The emperor gently held his wife's hand. Leaving her surprised, he bent down and gave a gentle kiss. Isabel did not understand the reason for that kiss. His lips moved away from her soft hand. Alexander gave her a slightly mischievous smile. Furious, she asked him what that had been. Soon they would be divorcing. Alexander laughed, saying that that was how a lady should be treated. Her cheeks grew very flushed. Isabel said that if they were done with the farewell, it was time for her to leave, and slamming the doors behind her, she wished him good night. Inside her room, she reflected on what had just happened. Isabel noticed that he was loyal to no one, and that he would flirt with any girl just to get what he wanted. On the other side of the door, Alexander wondered why he was acting in such a strange way. It was as if he were drunk. A new day begins in the palace, and some nobles were already conversing. One of them commented that the Empress had slapped Marquis Wilhelm to ensure the suspension of his duties while he was being dishonest. Far from there, some ladies spoke about having misunderstood Isabel's motives for causing that scene, how noble it was of the Empress to sacrifice her reputation to save the palace. They all mentioned the incident in the Golden Hall. The event had nearly ended in disaster, but she managed to resolve the situation. She was a woman very suited to be Empress. Hidden behind a pillar, Sasha listened to that conversation. She remained silent, reflecting a little. A few days later, at night, one of Sasha's maids asks her to eat a little. The girl explains that the dinner had been made with all the food she liked. She tries to comfort Sasha, saying that the consort was not at fault for what happened at the event. Sasha simply replied that she wanted to be alone, but the maid revealed that she was quite worried about her, since the consort had not eaten for 2 days. Annoyed by the insistence, Sasha ordered her to leave because she wanted to be alone. The two remained silent for a moment. The maid did not understand why she had been so rude. Sasha apologized, explaining that she was irritated because she was very busy, and asked the maid to withdraw. The girl left the room, finally leaving her alone. Sasha held her sheets tightly. All of that was very strange to her. How did Isabel know those dishes? The dishes the Emperor had tasted were kimchi soup and kimchi fried rice. Isabel had lived in the Empire her entire life. The shaken consort wondered what the chances were that the Empress could create a dish identical to one from another world. If for some reason Isabel knew Korean culture, how would she have arrived in that world? That would not be possible, because only an oracle can travel between dimensions. If a mortal crosses worlds, their memories can be reversed. The most likely explanation was that Isabel had learned about Korean culture by overhearing conversations or reading something in a book, but Sasha could not understand how that could be possible, since the only bridge between worlds was the goddess. People who arrived there from another world brought their culture and helped others. In that way, new cultures were spread throughout the empire and preserved in books. It would be impossible for Isabel to know something that others did not know. Sasha sat down on the bed. The girl looked at her trembling hands. What could she do in that situation? She seemed devastated by fear. All of that was very complicated for Sasha to deal with. To the consort, everything seemed to be falling apart. From her relationship with Alexander, her social status, and even her target was turning against her. That was precisely why she needed to find out how Isabel had obtained that information. If the Empress were to become a great threat, a peasant woman asked a worker who that newcomer was. He said it was a woman who had arrived there with several guards. The Empress was walking. Her arrival caused great surprise among the common people. Isabel was satisfied that she had managed to draw so much attention. It was common for citizens to gather to take a look at the Empress. That was De La Mancha Street. It was a kind of black market, where the things sold could be illegal or not, and therefore it was the perfect place to obtain some suspicious items. Isabel knew that it was definitely not a suitable place for a lady. The maids at the palace were quite worried about her. She felt a certain pity for the guards, who were also afraid. The Empress had no choice. Alexander had been very strange recently, so perhaps she needed to create an even more drastic situation to obtain the divorce. Spending a fortune in a place like that could be seen as a disgrace to the royal family. She ordered the guards to follow her. Isabel chose a shop to begin the purchases. She hoped to spend all the money she had brought. At the end of the afternoon, Isabel was sitting on a bench, holding her face in her hands. The Empress was devastated. She was doomed. Our protagonist wanted to spend all her money on suspicious magical items, but she was surprised at the last shop. She asked the merchant to sell her everything. He asked whether she really wanted everything in the shop. However, Isabel was shocked to hear him say that they only sold first-rate products that the Emperor would love. What she truly wanted was to escape that world, but apparently everyone thought she was buying gifts for the Emperor. There had to be something she could do. She stopped for a few moments to think. Suddenly, a commotion began to draw several people toward a place. Isabel grew curious to know what was happening. She asked one of the guards why people were gathering. The guard explained to her that an auction was taking place. That caught Isabel's attention, and she thought it would be an opportunity. How had she not thought of that before? There could be very valuable things that she could acquire. Isabel quickly stood up and ordered her guards to go with her. She imagined that there she might find something spectacular that could help her divorce immediately. The auctioneer greeted the ladies and gentlemen, thanking them for their presence. He assured them that he had the best merchandise in the empire. However, the merchandise he mentioned consisted of prisoners from the wars that occurred in the empire who were under imperial law. Isabel had never considered that people could be merchandise. She reflected that although it was not illegal, unfortunately the law had loopholes that allowed it to happen. The nobles refrained from acquiring them, as they did not want foreigners. Among them, there was a young woman who seemed sad and was trembling greatly with fear. That was something that violated human rights. But there in that world, Isabel had to act like the nobility. Thinking about it, one of the characters in the story had a past related to this. The auctioneer announces the first merchandise. It was a girl of only 18 years old who knew how to sew very well and had a beautiful face. The girl shed a tear as the man described her. That scene left Isabel devastated. The auction deeply upset her. The bids kept increasing more and more. One of the interested parties offered an even higher amount. The auctioneer asked if there was anyone else interested, until Isabel ordered him to stop. She stood up, surprising everyone. With a determined look, Isabel said that these were orders from the Empress. Everyone wondered what she was doing there. The auctioneer was left speechless. The girl watched the scene, deeply impressed, yet still afraid. She watched Isabel gracefully pass by her. The Empress announced that she, Isabel of Castile, decreed that the auction was to be ended and that everyone should leave. The man tried to stop her, saying that if it were done that way, he would suffer a great commercial loss because he would lose the trust of his clients. She cast a threatening look at him. The man was terrified by her power. Indeed, that made sense. Isabel handed him a blank check. Then she explained that as soon as she wrote a number on it, everyone would leave with her. The auctioneer was astonished by the check. He thanked her repeatedly, and our protagonist realized how he cared about nothing but money. She noticed that people were already leaving, and she walked toward the auctioneer and the girl. Assessing the situation, she saw that they were people who probably did not know the language and might not be able to manage on their own, possibly even going hungry. If bad people found them, they could be taken again. Isabel reflected on how she could resolve this. What could she do? After a few moments, she said that she was now responsible for them. From that point on, they should trust her. Then she declared that, in addition to that, they would go with her to the palace to help her with work. Far from there, in the Imperial Palace, the secretary told Alexander that Isabel had gone to De la Mancha Street. He anxiously tapped his fingers on the edge of the bathtub. His secretary noticed how the emperor expressed his irritation through that habit. The man explained that with the empress going to that place, the reputation of the imperial family could be affected. However, Alexander replied that that was not the problem. He asked if he did not know how dangerous that place was. The secretary silently watched him finish his bath. Alexander said that he would probably have to go there personally to fetch her. There in the hall where the auction took place, one of the guards reminded her that the palace was not an appropriate place for them and asked her to reconsider letting them work at the Imperial Palace. Isabel watched the guards who were trying at all costs to convince her not to take those people to work at the palace. She ordered them to shut up because she would take responsibility for all of them from that point on. Everyone looked fearfully at the empress. She commanded that all of them receive proper education, learn the imperial language and the laws of that kingdom for 3 hours every day. The girl was moved and began to thank Isabel. She bowed before the empress, who looked at her in surprise. Crying profusely, the girl thanked Isabel for her mercy. Our protagonist remained silent for a few moments, and she thought about how frightened those people must be after everything that had happened. Unfortunately, prisoners like that young girl never knew their fate or what dangers they would face. Isabel ordered her guards to remove all the chains and take everyone to the palace. She assumed that since they were adults, they could study for a year, and then she would donate enough money for them to become independent in the future. Suddenly, she heard a man arguing with someone. A very cruel man was scolding a young boy, ordering him to hurry up and do things faster. The boy's hands were trembling. The man said that they were all the same. Before he could do anything, Isabel had an impulse. How could a human being harm someone so young? She ordered that man to stop immediately and asked if that boy was a prisoner. Since she had bought the freedom of everyone, how could there be someone left? She grew furious as the filthy man explained that the boy was worthless because he limped on one leg. Isabel told the man that she would take the child with her. In addition, she asked him for the whip. The boy on the ground remained silent, unable to imagine what was going to happen. The empress stepped forward to take the whip and told the man that he did not seem to know how dangerous that was. Quickly, she lashed out and struck him across the face. He was severely injured, but Isabel was quite satisfied. The empress told that filthy man that he had no right to harm anyone, especially a child. She held the whip firmly and finally said that if he kept standing there, she would make him taste the danger. The man was terrified, and before anything else could happen, he turned to leave and ran away from there. The empress's guard was shocked by what had happened. Our protagonist noticed that she had only struck once, but that her arm was hurting. The guard explained that maybe it was because she had never done that before, logically due to the fact that the empress did not perform many activities that required physical effort. In any case, Isabel assumed that everything would be fine, and that this would make the emperor divorce her as soon as possible. By her logic, the empress went to a shady market, secured the freedom of many people, and even assaulted a merchant. Her guards seemed fed up with all of it. Isabel thought that soon she would finally be free. The boy began to speak to her. He thanked her greatly for the empress's kindness. Isabel, worried about him, asked if he was okay. She would arrange proper treatment for him, but something surprised her. So many twists. The boy began to say that he had not been very well before, but that he was willing to devote his entire life to repay the favor she had done for him. Isabel approached him. Who could that handsome boy with light hair and eyes be? She asked him what his name was. The boy began to introduce himself. His name was Caleb. Isabel thought that name sounded familiar. That name was one of the male protagonists of the story. Caleb was a boy who appeared in the middle of the original story, and, contrary to what his innocent appearance suggested, he had a dark side. He had been enslaved since he was very young because his parents were prisoners of war. But the boy was self-taught and learned magic on his own, rising to the 7th level as an archmage. With all that magic and talent, he managed to save himself and freed himself from slavery, creating a guild of informants. In the original story, he was in love with Sasha, and as an archmage, he used the guild's information to help her. But could it really be that Caleb? In the auction hall, Isabel held the boy's face in her hands. Analyzing his physical features, he seemed to have the same slightly wavy brown hair, long eyelashes, and even that innocent little face. She judged that he should be around 16 years old at that time, but he was too small and looked younger. Isabel felt distressed thinking that he was malnourished because of the years of being enslaved. Even his personality seemed more timid than in the original book. Was it because he was still very young? Caleb tried to say something to her. Finally, the protagonist realized that she was gripping him and apologized. She said that she would let him go, until their conversation was interrupted by someone who had just arrived. Wow, Alexander managed to arrive in time. Isabel was very surprised to see him so suddenly. The emperor asked his wife what she was doing there. The empress and the boy remained silent, staring at him. Alexander approached the two of them, repeating the question. What was Isabel doing there? Instead of answering him, she asked, what was he doing there? She did so, knowing that she already knew the answer. Isabel assessed that he must have been so furious with her that he personally came to fetch her from Rue de la Mancha. With a big smile, the empress asked her husband if he was there to scold her. If that was the case, it would be better for him to expel her from the palace. But he did not answer anything. So much mystery. Alexander simply asked who that scruffy little boy was. Isabel replied that she had bought his freedom and that of other prisoners. He asked why she had tried to kiss the boy. Isabel was very surprised, knowing that that was not what had really happened. Furious, the empress asked what he was talking about. She explained that she was looking at his injuries. Did he think she was shameless enough to kiss a boy? Alexander finally noticed the boy's injuries. Isabel noticed a change in the emperor. She saw that instead of getting angry, he was relieved upon understanding the situation. He said that he was grateful that nothing serious had happened. It would have been a terrible rumor to spread through the streets. Our protagonist asked him not to worry. Clenching her fist tightly, Isabel asked him if he had come to fetch her because she had gone to a forbidden street. Alexander smiled and said that that was not the case. Then he asked her why he would be angry at her for that. Isabel asked what he meant. The emperor looked at her in silence. Quickly, he approached the woman and began to tell her a secret. The truth was that Alexander owned that street. He revealed to her that shortly after ascending the throne, he bought all the businesses there with secret funds, because it was useful for him to have control over the activities that took place there. The emperor chuckled softly. Without letting go of the woman's shoulders, he said that few people knew that fact, including his secretary, and that he was telling her because she was his empress. And then he gave a broad smile, saying that she knew what that meant. Isabel was stunned by that information. She reflected for a few moments on the relevance of that information. There was no fool in that world who would tell such a great secret to someone he intended to divorce. His confession was a way of telling her that they would never separate. At the same time, it was an expression of how confident he was that this would never happen. Now that she knew his secret, it meant that, whether she wanted to or not, she was even more involved with him. Isabel did not feel well because she thought she had been deceived. That thought deeply irritated her. She never wanted to tell such a tiresome story as that one. Then she asked Caleb if he was determined to keep his opinion. The boy confirmed, saying yes. She saw that he was clenching his hands tightly. The boy lifted his head and gave his final answer to the empress. Caleb revealed that he still wanted to be her personal escort knight. Isabel told Caleb that it would be good for him to learn more about magic so that he could improve his skills. He asked her if there were many people his age at the Knights Academy. The empress replied that there were, and that way he could make friends his own age. With tears in his eyes, Caleb begged Isabel not to make him go to the academy. That sudden request left her shocked. The boy explained that he had been harassed by other boys when he was even younger, and because of that, he was very afraid of them. She was deeply moved by that confession. Isabel thought it was regrettable that he had experienced something so terrible. Had he already taken revenge on his aggressors, as in the original story? Or did he remain a shy boy because he was still very young? Caleb promised that he would be mature and learn many things to make up for it. Isabel was a little hesitant. In the end, she understood. Letting out a sigh, she made her decision. It was not as if there were few guards in the palace, and Caleb could stay with other servants. She planned to keep him for at least a year anyway. The boy quickly stood up. With a big smile, he asked if she really accepted him. Caleb asked if she really would not abandon him. He was very happy to be her personal escort knight. That was the happiest day of his meaningless life. Isabel was satisfied with her decision. She asked him not to call his life meaningless. The empress told him that no existence in that world was meaningless. There was always something very valuable in every kind of life. Caleb looked at her with his deep eyes. He promised to be more careful with his words. Very well. Now that he had understood that, she turned to him, curious to know if he would like to tell her anything else. Isabel asked the boy, what was the problem? The protagonist heard him make an oath that he would dedicate his life to her, and that if he had anything, he would give it to her. Caleb knelt down and gently took Isabel's foot. He began to kiss the Empress's foot. A little startled, Isabel asked what he was doing. With puppy eyes, he replied that he felt obliged to please her at all times. Isabel asked him not to kneel before her anymore because he would dirty the clothes she had given him. Later, on the other side of the palace, in the royal office, Alexander seemed a little annoyed. His gaze showed a bit of anger. The emperor was writing some papers. That little boy. Caleb had been an eyesore to the emperor. Did he really need to cling so closely to Isabel? He was not helping anyone as a knight. That irritated Alexander greatly. The emperor tried to reconsider. Since it was his wife's decision, and she probably had a good reason for doing that, he could not allow anything to affect his relationship with her, no matter how much the boy bothered him. After all, as emperor, he had no reason to be upset over such trivial matters. Besides that, he needed to worry about the long list of embarrassing things Isabel had bought on Rue de la Mancha. Those purchases bothered him far more. It was not normal for an empress to spend money on that forbidden street, and because of that, the people were not taking it very well. Some nobles were demanding from him an appropriate explanation and a law to prevent it. Moreover, for Alexander, it would be difficult to find all the people who had seen the empress that day and ask them to keep silent. However, compared to that, this did not seem so difficult. Apparently, Isabel had bought extremely inappropriate things. He remembered that she kept them in a compartment reserved for the empress. They were items so compromising that she kept them stored away in drawers. Alexander remembered that his wife was quite a strategist, so there must have been a reason. He thought that if it were someone else, perhaps she would be interested in spending a night with him. But when it came to Isabel, that certainly could not be the case, since she always refused to see him and said she wanted a divorce. Alexander leaned back in his chair. The emperor did not want to make any hasty decisions. It would be better to simply go and ask her. He walked through the corridors of the palace. As he walked, he thought about many things. If Isabel really wanted to spend a night with him, then, but what could he do? In his presence, the empress was always irritated and impatient. Alexander remembered several moments. On the night he tried to kiss her, she became furious. All of that was very strange to him. Unplanned moments moved like gears. Theoretically, they should have bothered Alexander, but the truth was that he was not bothered at all. Thinking about that, Alexander gave a shy smile. He decided to approach cautiously as he knocked on her door. However, from the empress's room, he began to hear some voices. It was Caleb's voice, saying questionable things. The boy was saying that he was grateful to stay by her side and serve her, and that he did not want to accept the expensive clothes she was offering. Isabel asked if he truly would not accept them. She had bought all those clothes for him, and no one else would wear them. Alexander became quite irritated. It was the middle of the night, so why were they talking in her room as if they were very intimate? To him, it was absurd that Isabel refused all of his gifts, but bought expensive clothes for Caleb. He decided to open the doors abruptly. Isabel asked what Alexander had come to do there out of nowhere. The emperor held firmly onto the doors of his wife's room. He apologized for intruding on their conversation, but he could not help being curious about that situation. What kind of knight stays in the empress's room in the middle of the night? The three of them stared at one another, confused. Isabel asked what he meant. He himself had barged into her room out of nowhere. Caleb knelt on the floor and begged the emperor for forgiveness. He explained that the fault was not the empress's because since she had sent gifts, he had been summoned. The protagonist placed her hand in front of the boy, making him stop speaking. In front of the emperor, she asked the boy to stand up. Alexander became furious upon hearing his wife say that the boy did not need to apologize. He clenched his fist tightly. Isabel asked her husband whether she could not reward her subordinate for his loyalty. She also asked whether he truly thought she would be betraying him. The last time they spoke about that subject, she had made it very clear that it was not true. Alexander replied that he did not suspect her, but he had his doubts as to whether that boy knew his place. Isabel revealed that she was the one who had called Caleb, and not the other way around. The two of them stared at each other in silence for a few moments. The emperor wondered why he was acting that way, since he should avoid making any allegation that could harm his relationship with Isabel. Alexander fidgeted his fingers impatiently. Isabel grew curious to know what he would say. He was distant in his thoughts. The emperor wondered why he acted so impulsively when he was near her. Then he called Caleb and asked the boy to leave the empress's room. Caleb left, and the two of them were left alone. The night went on. The boy remained outside in silence. He swung his feet anxiously and turned to look back. In Isabel's room, our protagonist and her husband stared at each other without uttering a word. Alexander looked at her with his deep golden eyes. Isabel asked him not to expect her to feel better while he continued to stare at her expressionlessly like that. He asked what she meant. She replied that he had certainly appeared in her room with some purpose. The protagonist said that since he had said some things to her, he was probably analyzing how to act next. Alexander completely changed his expression. Then he told her that the smarter she became, the greedier he would become. Then Isabel suggested that he watch her more properly. She decided to give him some advice. From then on, it would be better for him not to do anything that might displease others. Alexander was taken aback by her words. He laughed and asked her whether an emperor should pay attention to others. He also asked her what he could do to make someone else happy. Alexander walked toward Isabel, saying that he was very curious to know. With a wave of her hand, she asks him to forget the idea of making agreements and simply divorce her. He tells her that it is truly a shame. Gently taking her hand, he declares that he could not do that. He leans in to kiss his wife's hand. Then the emperor confesses that he would rather hear her asking to kiss his feet, because that would be easier than them separating. Isabel was left speechless, her cheeks deeply flushed. She replied that that joke was not funny. Our protagonist truly did not think that way. Isabel says that he was very conceited. She also said that he did not care about her at all. Alexander moved closer to her. The emperor asked whether she truly thought that way. Quickly, he extended his arm. Isabel did not understand what he was about to do. Alexander grabbed his wife by the waist, pulling her closer. Laying her down on the bed, he says that she does not know what he would be capable of doing to have her there with him. She looked at him in shock. Alexander looked at her with great affection. The emperor was on top of her, the two of them staring at each other, a little confused. He revealed that she was impressive to him. Holding a lock of her hair, Alexander says that he can finally show his sincerity to her. He gives a soft kiss to her hair. Isabel became very upset. Either he was crazy or things were going far too fast. Alexander gave her a mischievous smile. Our protagonist began calling him by name while he held her face. Quickly, their faces drew closer. Their mouths came very close. Isabel and Alexander kissed. Wow, finally. He closed his eyes, enjoying the moment. But unlike him, Isabel was not on the same wavelength. She looked for something nearby and managed to touch a pillow. Suddenly, that night took a completely unexpected turn. The emperor's face turned red. Breathless, Isabel pulled away from him. With a furious expression, she ordered him to get out of her room. He still did not seem to understand, so she repeated it several more times. The truth is that our protagonist seemed very frightened after that kiss. Despite her trembling hands, Isabel held the pillow firmly. Alexander apologized to her. As he left her room, he thought about how irrational he had been to do that. In addition to having gotten angry in front of her, he remembered her slightly startled expression. The emperor walked silently through the palace courtyard, thinking he could not understand why he had acted that way. Alexander was determined to resolve this at any cost. He could not ask for what he wanted, especially because he was frightened. The emperor told himself that he must have gone mad. At a moment like that, how could he be thinking about her lips? The effect of that kiss was far too intense for him. If he crossed the line, he stopped and thought for a moment. After all, it was normal to feel that kind of pleasure when kissing someone of the opposite sex, was it not? Apparently, only Isabel made him feel that way, which was even stranger on his part. He had gotten angry seeing her talking to the boy in the middle of the night in her room. Given the kind of relationship they had, it was normal for concubines to be accepted in the empire, so it was not something strange in a royal marriage. Besides, it was something written into the marriage documents. So Isabel calling Caleb or several other men should not have bothered him so much, but he was furious. What could be the reason for that? What could be troubling the emperor so deeply? Did he want a different kind of relationship with Isabel? Far beyond the alliance formed by their marriage. He desired a closer and more intimate relationship, a bond far more special than mere formality. He tried to content himself with that thought. Alexander desired Isabel intensely. She pleased him greatly. The emperor wished to walk by her side, and he also wished to help her with things beyond mere duties. As he walked through the courtyard, he convinced himself to stop thinking about that kiss. Insisting on that feeling would not help him at all. Everything was very strange to him. There were experiences impossible to forget. A pillow flew through the room. More and more pillows were thrown into the air. One of them landed right on Isabel's face. She stood there for a few moments with the pillow on her face. Gripping it tightly, she trembled and began to scream, muffled by the pillow. Our protagonist kicked her legs. Getting up, she thought that she must have gone mad. Isabel wondered why she had kissed that man. She knew that he had grabbed her first. However, after a while, she had liked it and returned the kiss. Our protagonist's ego was deeply wounded. Isabel desperately wished that her husband did not kiss so well. Lying back down on the bed, she decided to drop the matter. She was still shattered from the night before and had no energy even to go shopping, and thought it would be better to stay in her room. From outside, she heard some noises of people approaching. She got up, curious to know what was happening. One of her maids quickly entered her room, calling for the Empress. Isabel asked what was the reason for so much noise. She said that she wanted to spend the day alone and asked the girl to come back later. The young woman apologized but explained that she had to tell her something. She revealed to Isabel that the Emperor wished to see her immediately. Our protagonist thought that he must be crazy, because how could he summon examine her after what he did last night. Isabel asked the girl to tell him that the Empress was ill and could not go see him, but the girl insisted that it was urgent. That insistence from Alexander was very irritating. All she wanted was to ignore him. However, Isabel did not want to put the maid in a difficult situation. Besides, she was curious. Isabel wanted to know what his intentions were and asked her to inform him that she would arrive in 30 minutes. Sometime later, Alexander said that Isabel had come faster than he had imagined. He could even have waited longer. Isabel had gone to the royal office wearing the same nightgown and with her hair disheveled. What could be so important that the emperor needed to talk to her? Isabel said that it was just an excuse. She added that she hoped he would notice that excuse and come back, but maybe she had built up too many expectations. He noticed her hair. His wife seemed to have just gotten out of bed. Alexander thought that if Robert saw her like that, he would faint from high blood pressure. The protagonist said that at the end of the day, things were what they were, weren't they? The emperor said she could think whatever she wanted, since he was happy just to see her now, so it didn't matter. Isabel waited. What did he have to say, anyway? She let out a resigned sigh. As the girl sat down, Alexander asked why she had come. With a challenging look, Isabel spoke directly, telling him to say what he was plotting. She had been so busy that she barely had time to comb her hair. But Alexander kept her waiting. He took a deep breath. Finally, he revealed to the Empress that he would like to apologize to her for the previous night. He said that they kissed because he felt so many emotions seeing her there so surprised. For this reason, he would like to apologize. That gesture left Isabel speechless. Our girl isn't easy to intimidate. She kept thinking about the apology. Was the Emperor even capable of feeling guilt? Knowing him well, she knew that wasn't the case. Was she trying to forget at all costs because he insisted on reminding her? Lately, he had been feeling something. Apparently, she seemed to have some weakness for that kind of approach. Isabel replied that she was surprised the son of the empire wasn't more selective with his partners. The girl asked if it wasn't enough to kiss the concubine, since they would soon be getting divorced anyway. He asked, "What?" Alexander didn't understand. What was Isabel talking about? The emperor confessed that he didn't kiss or sleep with anyone else. What? How is that true? The man explained that he didn't understand her surprise, since that had been agreed upon since the beginning of the marriage. Or maybe she thought he hadn't kept his word and had slept with the imperial concubine. Oh no, Isabel was cornered. Since he had 2 wives, her reasoning was logical, especially since Sasha was from another imperial family, so succession made sense. Oh my god, so had yesterday been their first kiss? Alexander seemed to be having fun with her. Isabel could hardly believe it. He couldn't accept that his credibility was so low, and he swore to the heavens that he was telling the truth. She remembered that promises made to the heavens were very serious things in the kingdom. Since he was the emperor himself, he would never lie to the gods. Isabel couldn't accept that the kiss from the night before had been his first. It had been a long time since she'd read that story, so she didn't remember. Was there a scene like that in the original narrative? She barely remembered fragments of her previous life. What a difference. Apparently, there wouldn't be a kiss scene until part 2, so how was that possible? The girl needed to let it go, and hoped she wasn't responsible for such a change. He waited for her. The girl stood up. Isabel curtsied to him and asked to be excused. She needed to leave as quickly as possible. The girl tried to convince herself at all costs. Those feelings weren't hers, and therefore shouldn't matter so much. The table remained untouched. Even her cup was still full. Alexander noticed she hadn't even taken a sip of her tea. However, now he was sure of one thing. Isabel pretended to be strong, but in truth, she had a weakness when in contact with the opposite sex. Was she that clingy with others too? It might be good for him to increase her escort. The emperor thought for a few minutes. Should he seduce her? Maybe it was necessary. That way, if she were in his hands, Isabel would be his perfect ally. A new day begins at the palace. Isabel was satisfied with herself, as she imagined the news that would come out in the newspaper. However, nothing was published. Nothing. Not even a small piece about her adventure on Rue de la Mancha. She had even worn stunning clothes on purpose, and walked through places where she could be seen by many people. It couldn't get more interesting than that. Surely Alexander must have arranged something with the press. He was too stubborn, and besides, she still needed to divorce him. The girl tried to think of another plan, but what could she do after all that? She could try to return to her original world, but maybe that was impossible. Our protagonist judged that it might be much better to keep living there, despite everything. Her family had mistreated her a lot. The big problem was that, just like her, Isabel had no family to go back to, not even trustworthy friends. In the end, after separating, the only things she would have would be money and her own company. The only things a divorced woman could take in that conservative society were her jewels and expensive dresses. Isabel had spent a lot of money on those things. However, she thought that with that fortune, she could have bought a decent house in a smaller city. But since things were already hard, why make everything harder? And with the money left for her to start her own business, she would try to study taxation or business like Isabel had done before. Even in the empire, women weren't forbidden from studying. No matter what she tried, she needed to build a network, meet some important figures when she went out shopping again. Would she find a good enough product to launch in Castilla? Then she remembered something. On the other side of the palace, the emperor asked if the empress had already resolved the situation. The butler informed him that she had stored all the goods in the warehouse. He also said he heard that she had burned everything. Alexander didn't seem impressed. So, she hadn't bought those things to use with him, so had she bought them by mistake? Haha, silly. The butler wondered why his boss looked so sad. Alexander asked if that was all he had to say. The man said he wanted to talk about the slaves who came from Rue de la Mancha. That caught the emperor by surprise. He asked if something had happened to them. The butler replied no, but he seemed very surprised to reveal that they were working well. Alexander wasn't expecting that revelation either, so he asked why the butler was telling him that. The man explained that they were working so well that the empress's approval rating in the palace had increased considerably. A girl was walking outside. She heard some people talking and turned to listen. The maids were saying they could relax much more now that the new employees worked so well. One of them confided that they were so handsome and friendly. The girl felt embarrassed hearing them talk about her and her companions who came from the illegal market. Then she got even more excited, hearing so much praise about how competent she was. Finally revealing her name, Bianca, Caleb appeared from behind and asked what she was doing. He looked at her curiously. Bianca said he scared her and asked if he had finished his studies. Caleb asked why she was hiding there. The girl said she was listening to people praising the newcomers and wanted to hear a bit more. She asked if he remembered how she had saved them from the illegal market and even hidden their identities in the palace. That was exactly what she was talking about. Bianca was thinking exactly that. She said she was capable of doing anything for the empress. The girl said she was so happy that her reputation had improved in the palace because of their good work. Bianca told her friend she wanted to work even harder. Not even in her dreams would she have imagined having food and lodging. Caleb said that if they didn't work out, they would have to serve the rich at night. What did he mean by that? Oh no, but Caleb said he was just joking. Phew, thank goodness. He waved cheerfully at her. Then, the boy got distracted by something. The butler asked if he should send Caleb to the empress's chambers that night. Oh my god, Isabel almost spat out all her tea. She asked what he meant by that. The man explained that he had noticed she gave the boy special attention. Wasn't that true? Isabel was shocked by the audacity. Why would he think something like that? Would it be someone else's fault? In that kingdom, it wasn't common for married people to have other partners, but she had never looked at him that way. The girl replied that she kept Caleb close to protect and educate him, since he was too young. She said furiously that she hadn't brought those people to serve her at night, that this butler should never ask her that kind of thing again. He seemed shaken by the intrusion and asked her to forgive him. Isabel knew she was the villain of the story, but she wasn't an unscrupulous monster who would bring people to her room at night. That situation left her quite uncomfortable. She hoped Caleb would never need to hear things like that. Then, he arrived, at Isabel's request. The Empress asked how his magic studies were going. The boy said with a beautiful smile that he had even received praise from the teacher. He even told her he had performed some new spells. Isabel was happy that he seemed happier than before. At least he was acting normally. She said she was satisfied with the results. However, Caleb showed a mischievous smile. The boy invited her to watch one of his classes, since he would be very happy for her to see how well he was performing. The Empress only replied that he didn't need to show her the results. If he really wanted to, she might consider it. Suddenly, silence fell over the room. Caleb knelt before her. He looked at her with a sweet gaze. Caleb really was very cute. Isabel asked what he was doing. He revealed he was happy that she had forgiven him. The Empress asked what he meant by that. Caleb explained that lately she had been so busy that they barely had the chance to see each other. He reminded her that he was still her night guardian, but still had a lot to learn, so he judged that she didn't want to see him. Isabel explained that she had to deal with complicated things recently and couldn't give him attention. All Alexander's fault. He said he had a proposal. Caleb said he would like to help her in another way then. Isabel asked in what other way. Oh my god, but how could he help her? He confessed that he'd heard that young boys like him offered special services to nobility. Isabel had no idea where he could have found that out. The culprit was Bianca. Haha. Caleb explained he knew she wouldn't have bad intentions, but if he could reward her, even with a simple gesture. The boy held her face. Suddenly, Caleb leaned in to kiss Isabel. Oh my god, what was happening? Isabel needed to act fast. She had a brilliant idea. And so, she used a book to prevent the two of them from kissing. Caleb asked why she had done that. The Empress explained that she appreciated his help and support, but that was wrong. Phew, what a relief. He seemed surprised. Isabel explained that he was too young and that was inappropriate. The boy tried to justify himself, saying that in his city, people his age already got married. He was only a 16-year-old boy. The woman affectionately stroked his hair. Isabel said he should value himself. and then explained that he should only do those things when he was older and with someone he truly liked. He shouldn't let anyone do that to him. Caleb said she wasn't just anyone to him. Outside, the night was calm at the palace. He walked silently. The boy seemed lost in thought. He regretted having lost such a good chance. Suddenly, he was surprised by someone asking what chance he was talking about. Right in front of him, the emperor appeared, with an unfriendly expression. Alexander ordered him to answer the question. The nobleman wanted to know what chance the boy was talking about. The mood turned severe. The emperor looked at the boy with contained anger. Caleb was speechless. He greeted Alexander with a bow. The man asked if he had gone to the empress's room again. Caleb explained he had been summoned to talk about his academic achievements. He said she seemed to care a lot about him, since he still had some difficulties. Alexander tried to control his anger. He asked the boy if he knew who he was when they first met, but he definitely wasn't wrong. The man declared that he was only there thanks to the empress, but there was a catch. He had betrayed Isabel's pure heart, and was there with ulterior motives. Alexander asked if the boy had anything to say, but Caleb remained silent. Then he revealed that the emperor was right. In a gesture of humility, he began to speak. Despite having been rescued, he had dared to develop feelings for the empress. However, the emperor didn't need to worry about anything. The truth was that Isabel saw him only as a younger brother. He swore he wouldn't betray her kindness, and swore to always stand by her side as her night guardian. The two stared at each other in silence. Alexander clicked his tongue, and finally, he declared that Caleb should never appear before him again. The emperor was furious. Caleb seemed cautious. Watch out for him. In a defiant tone, he said it would be hard to obey that order. Far from there, Sasha asked what he meant. She was furious. How could her informant not have that information? The consort asked if he hadn't investigated properly. The man said he hadn't been able to find anything about the empress. Apparently, she had only lived at the duke's mansion before getting married. But other than that, she apparently didn't have many social activities. So that could mean she shouldn't be in contact with that world. Sasha wondered how that was possible. Information about that universe was public domain, common knowledge, and it was considered a crime to monopolize any unannounced information. Sasha judged it impossible for there to be no traces if Isabel had done something dangerous. She wasn't sure if Isabel had gotten information from the book or from somewhere else, so she was very rude to the butler. Poor guy, it wasn't his fault at all. The consort accused him of doing a poor job and said he needed to find something. She declared that all of Isabel's servants were competent and he should live up to them. The man revealed that in his investigation, he discovered something unusual. He had heard that all the newly hired employees came from the illegal market. Sasha asked how that was possible. She wanted to know what the source of that information was. He just said that a shop owner in Rue de la Mancha. Sasha asked if it really was that place. According to the seller, the empress brought many guards, in addition to spending a lot of money. The informant revealed that the empress had taken all the people from there to the palace. Sasha asked how she hadn't heard about it through rumors. The butler said there could be a reason for that. The seller said that the next day, some men in black showed up to make sure everyone stayed quiet. He didn't know all the details, but the same thing happened at the press. Sasha asked if he was sure. That could only mean one thing. Either Isabel or Alexander had blocked the information channels. Sasha thought that the rumors about the empress spending a lot of money in those places could be useful to her. She ordered him to stop the investigation into Isabel for a while, and instead, the consort said he would have another job to do. That girl is really wicked. In the middle of the night, the butler was lurking. Where was he going? He finally located the building. Right ahead, he saw the press building. It was Public Opinion Week. Even though he was apprehensive, he needed to carry out the mission. Sasha made several copies of a statement, and he needed to pass them to the press. She advised that it would be better to use the yellowed paper from the gossip columns. He asked what he should do. He had no contacts there. Sasha explained that this was why the imperial family had little influence. Even the most conservative nobles loved gossip. She handed him the papers, hoping her plan would work. The consort was willing to gamble. The butler wasn't sure how he'd make that plan work. He needed to focus and do what was necessary. Whether there were rumors or not, it wouldn't be his fault. The next day, the newsboys were already selling the day's headline. The ladies of the empire found it shameful that Isabel spent so much money on frivolities and even brought people from the illegal market. The gentlemen judged her a very arrogant and pretentious empress. Who could she be buying so many luxurious things for? A young man asked his editor-in-chief if it was really right for them to do that. The arrogant editor, named Javier Lanner, asked what the boy was talking about. He explained that an anonymous source sent a letter stating that the empress had gone to Rue de la Mancha, but there was nothing mentioning a secret lover. The rude editor asked how he hadn't noticed that. He explained that she had bought a large amount of adult items on the same day, so she must have been thinking of using them with another man. The boy still wasn't convinced, saying it was just speculation and that it could be dangerous to write things about the imperial family like that. The editor said it wasn't speculation, it was pure deduction. How awful, spreading fake news like that. Even if it weren't true, what could the imperial family do about it? After all, according to him, the press had freedom of expression under the empire's laws. What a cruel man. That's not freedom, Javier told the boy to drop the subject and take care of other tasks. For the rude editor, people had the right to know the stories. Unfortunately, not all of them were true. The boy was worried because they had printed more newspapers than they usually sold. Far away, a man was whispering something. Sasha noticed him too. She was pleased to see that more people were spreading the gossip. The rumors reached the noble ladies. The gentleman also seemed shocked. A maid seemed very apprehensive next to Isabel. She called out to Her Majesty. Isabel turned to see what she wanted. The girl asked the Empress not to be upset about what people were saying about her because Isabel was a good person. She heard from the maid that she had a kind and unique soul. Isabel had a request for her and then asked to be left alone for a few minutes. The girl replied, of course, and so the Empress left. She locked herself in her chambers. What was she plotting now? Isabel was trembling all over, barely able to contain herself. She needed to suppress something. What was happening? Phew, her plans had worked. What a huge victory, girl. The Empress was already wondering if she should spread her own rumors, since no one was saying anything. Finally, success. Well, maybe it was a bit strange for her to celebrate so much. The situation was a bit more serious than she had anticipated. She sat on the bed, wishing for a free life, but couldn't stop at just the divorce. Maybe it would be better for her to be thrown out of the house. That wasn't such a bad idea. Despite everything, the plan was working, wasn't it? Were they talking about her non-existent secret lover? That wasn't even a problem for her. The rumor didn't bother her, but she worried about Caleb and the others she had brought. Things had gotten to that point. She needed to keep finding ways to attract negative attention only to herself. Suddenly, one of the maids opened the door, summoning Isabel to an emergency press conference. The girl was surprised by the information. The maid confirmed it was true, and also explained that Isabel's presence was mandatory. She got excited. Would Alexander finally announce the divorce? However, our protagonist thought she was setting her expectations too high. Isabel told the maid she understood the situation. However, she couldn't show up there like that, and asked for help getting ready. What was our girl plotting? Alexander walked toward the conference. Wow, despite everything, he really was quite handsome, wasn't he? Everyone seemed intimidated by the Emperor's presence. Then, someone unexpectedly called out to him. It was that arrogant editor-in-chief. He wanted the Emperor to say something before the conference began. All the men were very curious. What was going to happen? They asked how he was doing. They even asked if he would announce the divorce. What nosy people. They even wanted to know if he was pressuring the 5 daily newspapers. Robert ordered all the men to be quiet and stop with those questions. But Alexander said it was fine, and that the reporters were just curious. Did the Emperor have some plan? While everyone debated about the start of the conference, Isabel appeared. Her arrival left the men speechless. Everyone noticed her. She said hello to her husband and asked the guests if she was very late. Even the Emperor was left speechless. She said she needed a little extra time because she wanted to give special attention to her appearance. In her original world, there was something called TPO, basically, time, place, and occasion. In other words, depending on those 3 factors, you should dress accordingly. Logically, you shouldn't wear pajamas to a formal party. She realized the same applied in that universe. The Empire dictated that she should wear more conservative dresses and light colors. Robert was shocked by the girl's clothes. Being the Empress, she could do whatever she wanted, couldn't she? She wanted to be exaggeratedly beautiful and sensual for the reporters. Isabel really hoped that would make her reputation go down the drain. Would they think she was crazy? Public opinion of her would be quite negative after that. She hoped to draw all the attention with a bad reputation. Good luck, girl. Alexander revealed he wouldn't like her wearing clothes like that, but he knew she would ignore the request. But Isabel ignored what he said and asked if he had called such an urgent conference to announce something. He said he wouldn't reveal it because she would object, and she realized the male lead was really quite cunning. A man announced that the conference was about to begin, but was interrupted. Alexander asked him to wait a moment. He announced that before they began with the questions, he would like to announce something. The Emperor declared that everyone seemed to have gathered there about the fact that his wife had gone to Rue de la Mancha. They must all be thinking she had ruined her reputation by going there. Isabel wondered what he was trying to do. To her surprise, Alexander said her virtue remained intact. He declared that she had gone there because he had asked her to. Isabel was very confused. She knew very well that it was a lie. What was her husband up to? She tried to warn everyone it was a lie, but it was in vain. The Emperor decreed that the illegal market on Rue de la Mancha belonged to him. Wow, but how was that possible? He told the guests that Isabel had gone there to help him with a special investigation. Now, all the men wanted to know what the investigation was about and wanted to publish headlines about it. Isabel wanted to know how he could say that with such confidence, since it was confidential information. Alexander said it was a secret he had kept until now, and then revealed he was telling them now for a reason. He didn't want the incident to harm his dear wife's reputation. For him, nothing in the world was more important than her, the mother of the empire. What was the emperor plotting? Isabel was now certain of one thing. Alexander had gone completely mad. He had a mischievous little smile on his lips. Then, the emperor asked if anyone had any more questions. He was giving them that opportunity to clarify things. Isabel asked what he thought he was doing. She was caught off guard by a question from one of the guests. According to the man, when Isabel went to Rue de la Mancha, she had bought several adult items, and now he wanted to know the truth. Had it been the emperor who asked her to buy them? What a terrible man. What kind of question was that? The Empress knew she shouldn't answer that. That man, what more did that arrogant editor-in-chief want to squeeze out of them? Isabel had bought the items to provoke Alexander, so she couldn't claim he had forced her to do anything. Our protagonist needed to find a way out of that situation. Surprising the guests, Alexander said that, apparently there was a fact unknown to all, especially regarding the rumors about the Empress having a lover. It was only natural for a married person to buy items necessary for a shared life. Wow. So, it was more than logical for Isabel to keep that private. Oh no, he had managed to divert attention to himself. The men said their relationship must be great. Isabel tried to ask again what he was plotting, but Alexander revealed that some of those men thought she received nightly favors from Caleb. That confession left Isabel tormented. After all, the boy was like a son to her. The emperor pulled his wife closer, saying it was all right. It was time for them to align their stories. He valued the public, and even in the palace, he often found her in the boy's company. That situation made him very uncomfortable. The two seemed very intimate. She smiled at Caleb the way she never smiled at the emperor. Isn't that right, Isabel? Well, on that point, he really was right. The girl had no other choice. It wasn't surprising how complicated things had gotten, so it was better to protect Caleb from those rumors. She found the situation very embarrassing. Alexander drew even closer to her. Then, Isabel admitted she had gone to Rue de la Mancha to buy items only because her husband had asked her to. She also said that in their relationship there was no room for lovers. With a charming smile, the emperor told everyone their relationship was great. He even said that he and the empress had had an eventful night yesterday. Oh my god. Alexander, how dare you? Isabel found herself forced to agree. Our poor girl. Wasn't he going too far? She couldn't believe she was being forced to talk about her night of love in front of other men. Did the imperial family have no right to privacy at all? The editor seemed very irritated. Alexander said it was more than great. The rumors now going around the empire were that they were the most incredible couple the imperial family had ever seen. Even while smiling, Isabel was screaming inside. The afternoon continued. Unexpectedly, the press conference ended with good results, and almost immediately, good news about them was being published in the capital. Many of those newspapers said their relationship was getting better and better. Frankly, the girl found those pieces fascinating because they were written with 100% creativity. Isabel no longer knew who was the male or female lead of the story. She imagined that could happen. Even though things were fine, she was worried about the people she had brought from Rue de la Mancha. The servants in the imperial palace seemed to have strong instincts, but despite everything, the young ones worked very well. Her maids appreciated their work, and despite having lived in poor conditions, they were never provoked at the palace. But it was practically impossible to expect everyone to accept them. More and more worries for Isabel. She had no other choice. If a problem arose, a young man called out to someone passing by and asked if Caleb was a slave. The young man turned around, unsure. They asked if Caleb was one of those who had been taken from the illegal market. The boy was speechless. What nosy knights! One of the men approached, saying he had too perfect a face, but even so, how dare he walk around the palace with his head held high when he had been a slave? And then, the man shoved Caleb hard on the shoulder. They turned to leave, and the arrogant one said he needed to clean himself. After all, he had been touched by something dirty. Ugh, he really was a horrible person. Poor Caleb, that really hurt him. Even from afar, the men kept bothering him. Wow, what a dark expression. What was Caleb capable of? Now that arrogant knight had an enemy. In the capital, someone asked what had happened in a commotion earlier. A boy asked if his friend knew who the knight Jack was. The other replied that he was the unlucky one. One of them explained that Jack had fallen from his horse, and that's why he broke his legs. The boy asked how he had fallen from his horse, being such an experienced knight. Wasn't that an amateur mistake? They said the horse had suddenly gotten spooked. What could have happened? I think our little furry friend might know the answer. Caleb turned to thank him for the good work. It was possible that something had spooked the horse out of nowhere. Him, our own boy Caleb, and his mouse friend. Did the boys read the main newspaper? Caleb's gaze grew darker. Now, with a broken leg, Jack was no better than any slave. The arrogant man got what he deserved. Now, all the other knights would despise him. No one would guess Jack's fate from then on. Caleb thought that now that the problem was solved, it was time to go back. Despite the wicked plan, he still had the features of a cute boy. He didn't want to cause the Empress any more worry. Bianca told herself to hold on a bit longer. She needed to be sensible and not respond with cruelty. While the maids laughed at her, all Bianca wanted was to not disgrace Isabel. Those maids were very arrogant, laughing at Bianca for tripping on her own. Everyone said the slaves were ignorant and vulgar, and seeing that scene, they even believed it to be true. Suddenly, one of them stepped on the sewing spool. Oh no, what could Bianca do now? She called one of the young women, who responded arrogantly. The maid kicked the thread spool and said dirty clothes suited Bianca. She ordered the girl to hurry up and pick up her things from the floor. Unfortunately, there was no one else to witness it. The two girls were surprised by someone's voice, saying Bianca shouldn't touch that dirty thing. She was also very surprised. But who could it be? Wow, Isabel had just arrived. She looked stunning. The girl said that if Bianca touched that item, her hands would get dirty. The maids asked how Isabel had gotten there. The Empress declared they shouldn't let the hands that worked for her get dirty. Isn't that right, Bianca? Isabel was always very affectionate with the girl. So sweet. She got a bit emotional and could barely apologize. Isabel found it amusing. The Empress said there was no need for her to apologize. The ones who should be apologizing weren't her, but rather the arrogant maids. She was referring to that dirty cloth on the floor. Apparently, it suited their mouths better than Bianca's hands. That's it, girl. The girls apologized to the Empress, but one of them spoke up, saying she acted that way out of loyalty to the imperial family. Isabel heard the girls say they couldn't just accept slaves at the palace. Those words hurt Bianca deeply. The arrogant girl couldn't accept how those people could be at the palace, so close to nobility. Isabel asked if she had any idea what she was saying. That child had been specially chosen by her, so the maid was questioning the Empress's judgment. The two girls were scared to death. That's it, Isabel. Show them who's boss. Who were they to question Empress Isabel Castilla's authority? They still tried to argue, but the protagonist ordered them to be silent. Bianca heard Isabel say that, from then on, they were forbidden from insulting the maid. The Empress would take it as a personal offense if anyone questioned her authority and would be punished according to the penalty of the law. It was good that they take that seriously. As Bianca expected, Isabel was an incredible woman. The Empress decided it was time to go back. She thought that warning should be enough for now, but there was still much to be done. Our protagonist thought about how she would convince the people of the Empire to change their mindset about humanitarian issues, until someone interrupted her thoughts. Behind her, the girl Bianca appeared. She ran toward Isabel, a bit hesitant. The young woman still seemed very emotional about what had happened. Isabel asked what was going on. The young maid only replied that she wanted to express her most sincere gratitude. She thanked the Empress for having helped her moments before, but Isabel only replied that she was teaching the other maids a lesson, and it wasn't what Bianca was thinking. Something made her change her posture. Isabel waited for the girl to respond. The girl asked how the Empress knew her name. She was impressed that someone so important remembered her name, despite her difficult past. Bianca hardly knew how to express so much emotion. She truly respected the Empress a lot. The maid declared that, even though it wasn't much, she would dedicate her life to serving only Isabel. She swore on her own life. How had things gotten to that point? Isabel had no idea how Bianca had twisted her words, but the newcomers to the palace showed up, asking Isabel not to send them away. Isabel replied she wouldn't do any such thing because she didn't want them to worry about her reputation. Everyone was very happy with her answer, causing an unexpected effect. As a result, the newcomers only said good things about the Empress wherever they went. Many commented on how Isabel cared about their well-being, which made her a magnificent woman, and they even wanted to work for her. She noticed that her reputation was constantly growing, which was actually the opposite effect of what Isabel wanted. It was useless for her to just buy clothes and bathe in luxury. Despite that, she couldn't just stop, since the clothes and jewels would be her spoils in the future. But as a precaution, it was better for her to keep with her plan. Our protagonist was studying taxation in her free time and considered opening a small office in a smaller city. Isabel even dreamed of having a small garden she could tend herself, with a little cat or dog. Wow, our girl was really adorable, don't you think? She figured that would be enough to make her happy. Then, a maid called out to her. The girl announced that an important guest had just arrived. Oh, who could it be? Sometime later, in one of the palace gardens, Alexander revealed he had been visiting the palace and some gardens recently. Just with the intention of seeing her face, the emperor revealed he would like to see her more often. The girl stopped and waited for him. Then, Alexander asked what she thought of his outfit. Wow, very elegant. Isabel only replied that he worried too much. She demanded to know the reason for his visit. The man was finally going to reveal it. That night, there would be a special dinner, and he wished she could accompany him as his wife. Isabel just said she didn't want to go. That wasn't the answer Alexander expected. She didn't want to change her mind. He revealed that he knew she'd give that answer, but it had already been a week since the press conference. The public was having doubts about their relationship. That was obvious because they had gone a week without speaking to each other. Isabel asked if he had come to threaten her or start another rumor about her having an affair with Caleb. Alexander said he would never threaten her and that he was just worried. She seemed very affectionate with the newcomers. The emperor called out to her. He asked if things would really be fine if she didn't go. Those rumors would harm the newcomer's reputation. The empress was unhappy about it. That's it, girl. Alexander said all she needed to do was go with him to the dinner and shine. He would take care of the rest himself, and that would prove to people there was nothing to worry about. The girl's gaze was very stubborn, but her expression showed total displeasure. She finally gave in and accepted his invitation. However, her final word was that it would be the last event of that kind she would attend with him. Alexander seemed very pleased. Oh no, that didn't seem like a good sign. He took her hand and finally told Isabel that it had been a clever move. Our protagonist was very frustrated because she felt once again that she was at his mercy, but she had no other choice since she wanted to protect Caleb and Bianca's future. She tried to see it only as theater to make people stop with so much speculation. Isabel knew they had been acting from the beginning until that moment. Wow, the grand golden hall was beautifully decorated. The guests were impressed by something. Some young women were asking if something had happened to the empress. They didn't expect Isabel to wear an outfit appropriate for the occasion, but, well, at least our girl looked beautiful. She had only dressed modestly once, and after that, the girl wore only very luxurious dresses. Isabel was getting more and more annoyed with so many comments. She dressed that way to fit the villain concept. This time, Isabel fell asleep while her maids did her makeup and hair. And look what happened. The girl said she didn't want that makeup and asked if they were challenging her authority. One of the young women said they were just worried about her reputation. That excuse hadn't convinced Isabel at all. They were worried that the empress wouldn't be insulted. Isabel decided to calm down. She gently swirled a glass of wine. Those girls had helped her a lot and were among the few people she cared for. But even so, everyone at the party noticed how beautiful Isabel was. She would surely be the front page of the newspapers. Our girl definitely didn't expect that whole reaction just from her change of clothes. Then, someone called out to her. One of the guests introduced himself as Viscount Fernand Winters, Count Winters' eldest son. He said it was an honor to finally meet her. The young man lamented that she must have had a hard time because of the unfounded rumors about her. He himself had read the articles and was furious. Isabel replied she didn't care one bit about people's opinions. Suddenly, more and more men arrived introducing themselves. Where were all these people coming from? Why were they so annoying? Were they approaching Isabel because she looked more mature? Did they have amnesia and forget what she had done? Without saying anything more to them, the girl turned and walked away. After all, where were Sasha and Alexander when she needed them most? Without those two, all the party's attention turned to her. A footman announced the arrival of the son of the empire. And now, what would happen? The palace fell silent. He stealthily placed a hand on her waist. Alexander asked his wife what the hurry was, and said that she, as empress, should maintain her composure until the end. The girl was speechless. She said he had arrived too late. Isabel was very irritated. The guests began to notice their agitation. Alexander asked her to trust him. He was willing to fix anything that bothered her at that party. She just needed to stay by his side. Isabel remained silent. He always seemed to be plotting something. Finally, the consort Sasha arrived. She kept telling herself it was fine, because that day she was especially beautiful. Sasha didn't want to be the enemy of someone who dressed flashily to draw attention. She preferred to focus on those who loved her. In the end, she knew it was true. They announced the consort's arrival. The gentleman went to greet her and tell her she looked beautiful. She was very happy with the compliments, until she noticed something was odd. That night, everyone's attention seemed different. She observed everything carefully, and decided to go see what was happening. Everyone in the grand golden hall was talking. She tried to make her way through the crowd. What was going on? Were Alexander and Isabel kissing? That sight left the girl tormented. How could her great love do this? People commented on how beautiful the relationship between the emperor and empress was. Everyone was curious to know what had happened that morning. People commented they had never seen a love like that. Sasha was petrified with fear and anguish. She clenched her fist tightly. The consort decided it was time to leave. The guests didn't understand why she left so suddenly. While some wanted to understand what happened, Alexander seemed satisfied. The emperor, with his cunning gaze, asked how Isabel felt at that moment. He judged that their act had already been convincing enough, but Isabel was still very bothered by that theater. The girl thought they were about to kiss. Oh my god. The emperor said it had worked well, and everyone believed the farce. Isabel accepted that he was telling the truth. Because of that, she was anxious for the next day's newspaper. The girl walked among the wreckage. Sasha could hardly believe what she saw. In her room, objects were in pieces. Sasha seemed desperate, laughing mentally while being desperate. What could she do now? She needed to maintain her composure. The consort regretted having broken the object. With trembling hands, Sasha admitted she hadn't wanted to do that. That was no longer a photo to her. A red drop dripped down. All of that was strange to her. Alexander, or at least that person, she should have been the one chosen by him. Sasha gripped the sharp piece with great force. She was furious because she knew the true story. According to the book, she should have been the one chosen in that story. An adorable girl like her, with lovely brown hair and violet eyes. Alexander would smile at her, and everything would be fine. However, something unexpected happened. Before Sasha could even foresee it, somehow, Isabel appeared, making Alexander let go of Sasha and take the Empress's hand. How could he be capable of giving up his destiny to choose that girl? Sasha was devastated in her chambers. At that moment, she didn't care about anything else. The consort needed to get rid of Isabel at all costs. That wasn't cruelty. It was just a display of power. That's how things were resolved in the Imperial Palace. If she wanted to be the mother of the Empire, she wouldn't mind dirtying the crown, not even if the consequences fell upon her. If she wanted power, she had to take action. Sasha was completely certain it was all Isabel's fault. To reverse fate, the redhead must have done several unthinkable things. So, setting the gears in motion shouldn't be a big deal. She would move the tools to counter any false argument. That way, Alexander would follow the original storyline and could love her. Sasha wanted to take back what had been stolen from her. That was why she was there. She needed to be determined. Sometime later, someone asked if the Empress's palace had already been finished. However, a young woman replied that, apparently she wasn't satisfied. Someone had told her they heard Isabel tell the Emperor himself that she didn't like his gifts. How could they accept an Empress as arrogant as her? For them, no matter how much they thought about it, that favor was only temporary. Another lady said that the Empress herself had brought 30 slaves to the palace, and if a noble did that, he would never be taken seriously again. While petting her kitten, Sasha asked the girl not to exaggerate. The consort revealed that maybe Isabel had her own motivations. The ladies insisted the Empress was insulting the former imperial family. Then, one of them said the imperial consort was being too tolerant, thinking that way. Another girl asked why Sasha was defending her rival, and asked what Duke Schwartz thought of the situation. Until then, he hadn't said a word. The man thought before answering, wow, how attractive he was, silver hair and ruby-colored eyes. Then, Duke Schwartz said he was just listening to the conversation. The girl replied he couldn't just do that. Secretly, Sasha knew the Duke owed the Emperor great favors, and yet he never got angry at anything Isabel did. He asked what she wanted, and whether he should speak ill of the Empress like everyone else in that room. The girl said he had gotten it all wrong. Sasha analyzed the situation in silence. The man stood up quickly, saying it was better to leave. The Duke said if he stayed there, nothing funny would happen. Before leaving, he wanted to give the consort some advice from the bottom of his heart. She waited anxiously to hear it. The man revealed there was a folk song that said a person is known by the company they keep. The purpose of that phrase was to say that if we associate with bad people, everything we hear and see is wrong. She would know what he meant. Sasha thanked him for the Duke's wise words. And for that very reason, he asked for her forgiveness and left, slamming the door behind him. What a strange guy, but wise words. Sasha felt quite embarrassed by that interaction, but internally she was quite intrigued. She had judged him as a quiet person, but she didn't know how stubborn he really was. The girl thought it best to let him be stubborn and control that to a certain point. Sasha was certain he would be useful to her later. A new day. The morning sun made the palace glow. But not everything was calm, because early on, they were already shouting for Isabel. The maids tried to wake the Empress, warning her about the news in the paper, but the girl just wanted 5 more minutes to sleep. Poor thing. Isabel woke up and noticed a detail. She sat up in bed and asked how the girl was. The Empress wanted to know if the girl had been crying, but the maid only confessed that crying wasn't allowed during work hours. Isabel said they weren't machines and shouldn't have to control that. The girl handed the morning paper to Isabel, asking her to read it. Our protagonist, in shock, read the news. The headline criticized Isabel for bringing 30 slaves to the palace, considering it an act of disrespect to the previous Empress. Wow, her expression grew very dark. The maid said that wasn't an isolated case. They had all searched and found more than 7 headlines like that. That was a lot to read. Isabel noticed something. She asked if Casey was crying. The girl apologized, saying sorry for shedding tears in front of the Empress. Maybe Isabel found it harder than she did. She reached out her hand, but let it drop right after. Deep down, Isabel suspected the girls weren't being completely honest with her. If that were the case, maybe she should be grateful for so much criticism. But she didn't want to think that way. That's it, girl. She needed to be strong for the people who loved her, who would have a lot of trouble dealing with that. The Empress had to think for a moment. Then, she decided to tell them the truth. Isabel told the girls that she had taken several steps to make her divorce from the Emperor easier, so they didn't need to grieve over the defamatory headlines. On the contrary, she felt relieved because she would achieve her goal. Casey said Isabel was a great woman. But that statement didn't surprise the Empress. The girls joined together to say how much they wished for Isabel's happiness. Isabel paused to think and had never worried so much in her life. She remembered her past. In her past life, her family was nothing more than a bunch of strangers to her. Isabel, or rather Jane, didn't even have friends or love. So this was how people felt. The feeling of being loved by people she had only met in stories. Deep down, she knew she couldn't get too attached. That thought saddened her. That's exactly why she couldn't reveal everything. She confessed she couldn't be happy while married to the Emperor. Casey asked what the reason was. Isabel revealed that he didn't love her and only cared about the imperial consort. In her past life, Jane also seemed sad. That would never change. Isabel explained to the girls that it was only temporary. It was something only she knew. The truth was that, in the end of the story, the real leads were Sasha and Alexander. Casey fell silent. She revealed she would like to make a request. The girl suggested that if the Emperor confirmed that he truly loved her, then Isabel might not divorce him. That request left the girl speechless. Somehow, those words comforted her. Surprising the girls, Isabel said she would fulfill the request, above the god of the Empire. The girl knew everyone was rooting for her relationship with Alexander to work out. If it meant keeping everything fine, she would fulfill the promise. That being the case, she hoped Sasha would understand. Suddenly, someone asked if Duchess Salinger had understood everything. Oh, it was Sasha, with her enigmatic smile. Oh my god, what could that girl be plotting? The consort was quite the strategist. The innocent butterfly flew. It witnessed a mysterious conversation. Duchess Salinger agreed to the consort's terms. However, the woman had a concern. If she were caught spreading false rumors about the Empress, she would be in great danger. But Sasha wasn't interested in hearing that. She replied that way, it seemed like it was the consort who was making things up about Isabel. Duchess Salinger got a little scared. Could that be true? Sasha reminded her that the Empress had brought 30 slaves to the palace, and that wasn't a rumor. Stories spread quickly among people. That was just a reminder of a matter everyone was forgetting. Duchess Salinger was very frightened. Sasha approached her. With a smile, she told the Duchess not to worry. What a fake girl. She explained that rumors had their own rhythm, and it would be impossible even for the highest mage to find the true source of those rumors. The consort declared she believed in the Duchess's popularity, and that would be of great help to her. Sasha asked if the deal was still on. The Duchess couldn't say no. The consort was too manipulative. She said goodbye with a wave. Sasha felt she was in control. Very well, it was time to go. She thought, what would her next step be? But she already had the answer. Destroy Isabel. According to imperial law, there were conditions for deposing an empress, whether for rebellion, crimes against the imperial family, or harming the honor of her country. But the last way was when public opinion of her was extremely negative. This happened especially when Isabel constantly defied the authority of the royal family. Sasha thought Alexander was completely bewitched and wouldn't do anything to stop her. She cursed Isabel with terrible names. The Empress must have probably used potions, spells, or even a curse to control him. Since Sasha couldn't uncover the truth, she thought public opinion would be a good way to get rid of her rival. But now what? What could that ridiculous girl do? All she wanted was to control her own world. Sasha was determined to take everything back. Even if Isabel crawled beneath her feet, she wouldn't be merciful. The night was calm outside. The delicate butterfly followed its path through the garden. Oh, someone appeared to greet it. Oh, it was Caleb. He could even communicate with the smallest animals. He seemed relatively relieved. The boy wondered how the consort could be so shallow that she couldn't see through his tricks. To him, Sasha was really a very foolish girl. The maid seemed suspicious. It was better for him to investigate. Saying Sasha was a sweet and pure consort was the biggest lie in the capital, and so he released the butterfly again. Caleb knew all that innocence was just a mask of hers. After all, he used that trick himself. The only truly pure person was Isabel. He didn't think there was anyone else like her in the Empire, and so he left. Caleb needed to make good use of all his powers. He hoped his butterfly friend would come back with news about the consort. After all, how would Sasha react upon discovering she had fallen into her own traps? In the hall, some guests were waiting. One of the ladies announced the arrival of the imperial consort. The girl's hair seemed to float lightly in the wind. Everyone thought she looked beautiful that day. Sasha, as always, thanked them for the compliments. A lady thanked her for the invitation to the palace event. Everyone commented on the delicious food at the party. The guests praised Sasha's efforts. She was pleased because her plan was working and people were seeing what she was capable of. It wasn't enough to just slander Isabel, but rather to show people that the consort would be the perfect empress. For the sake of her reputation, that party needed to be a success. Besides, there was another detail. In one of the corners of the party, Duke Schwartz stood alone. Despite being reserved, he really was very elegant and quite handsome. The Duke seemed sad, despite the lively party. Sasha focused all her attention on him. His territory lay in the north of the country, filled with snow and creatures that hid in the ice. There were even rumors that the people there were cold. His father brought him to the capital when he was only 17 years old. He was an exotic boy, with physical traits never seen before. Wow, quite different, and he grew up to become a very attractive man. Sasha knew that in his homeland, legends said the inhabitants were half human, half monster. Could that really be true? But she didn't pay attention to the stories and just thought him quite handsome and rich. She had been the only person who was nice to him, and they became confidants. If she could use him to her advantage, it would greatly benefit her reputation. Then, the consort called all the guests. Sasha asked if everyone was ready for the main attraction of the evening. She had prepared a performance for them and hoped they would enjoy it. The guests were eager to see what she would do. The girl approached the elegant golden piano. She positioned her hands and began to play a sweet melody with clear, soft notes. The ladies were impressed by the harmony. Playing the piano well suited a refined lady like the consort. Sasha was quite pleased playing her melody. It was something she felt very confident in, since it was something she knew well. She had learned it from a very young age. Despite having gone a few months without playing, she was still quite skilled. The girl wanted to win over the guests' affection and needed to start with simple things so as not to fail like the other time. The performance was going well. But then why was the reception so lukewarm? She finally finished the song. The guests applauded the consort. She thanked them for the praise and revealed she had a second performance planned. Duke Schwartz remained silent, waiting. She would use a record to perform a song. Since it was a duet, she would use the melody as a guide. One of the maids prepared the device and turned it on to begin the performance. Finally, the needle touched the record. But before Sasha could start singing, she had a bitter surprise. The sound was the recording of her conversation with Duchess Salinger. She knew she was in trouble. Everyone in the hall began to hear the conversation in which Sasha threatened the woman. The gentleman asked what that was about. The Duke remained silent, his expression frozen. Even the piano keys seemed paralyzed. Everyone recognized Sasha's voice. Now the cruel consort was cornered. Panic set in for the girl. This couldn't be happening. From the gramophone, Sasha's voice was manipulative, but the conversation was real. She no longer knew how that situation could get any worse. The maids tried to turn off the device at all costs, but they couldn't. Sasha dashed across the hall to prevent something worse. She ran toward the gramophone, and then a loud noise filled the room. Everyone was speechless at what happened. Sasha was panting from the panic. In a desperate act, the consort destroyed the gramophone. An awkward silence fell over the palace. The device lay broken on the floor. Sasha was absolutely furious. Finally, that abomination had stopped. Now, she had bigger problems to deal with. She looked at everyone, stunned. Now, all attention was turned to the cruel consort. Sasha tried to explain what had happened. She tried to tell everyone it was a fake recording, but no one, especially the Duke, seemed to believe her. The man heard her say she would never spread rumors about the Empress. Wow, what a piercing look. Sasha said she was practically a newcomer to the palace. The girl tried to claim she still didn't understand the Empire's customs. How could she be capable of such a thing? But the Duke approached, correcting her, saying it had already been a year since she arrived. Sasha didn't quite understand what he meant. He repeated the statement. The Duke walked heavily toward the consort. The man accused her of being there for a year and still not having learned about the Empire, nor her duties. Basically, he said Sasha was running from the blame. Now the girl was truly scared. He stood in front of her with a threatening posture. Schwartz reminded her of her obligations as the imperial consort and declared in front of all the guests that Sasha didn't carry out her duties with dedication. Sasha asked if he didn't trust her. Did he really think she had done that? Duke Schwartz said he thought he knew her and had faith in her kindness, but it had all been in vain. He pointed to the broken gramophone on the floor and said it was property of the imperial palace. It was an instrument created for criminal investigation and national defense, so it wasn't possible to fake it. Sasha was in deep trouble. The girl could barely speak out of fear. She asked if he really didn't trust her anymore. Sasha tried to convince him with her tears. She asked if he was really accusing her of creating gossip about the Empress. Did the Duke really believe that? Sasha didn't expect Norman Schwartz to react that way. She hoped he would forgive her when he saw her crying. Come on, Norman, hurry up. Sasha wanted him to say he trusted her, but contrary to what she expected, his expression was furious and threatening. Even we are scared. Finally, the Duke revealed he regretted what happened, but he could no longer trust her. He declared he would never deny a fact like that, just to cover for her. Sasha was devastated. The man regretted having ruined the party, and without saying goodbye, he just left, leaving Sasha behind. She clenched her fist tightly. How could that situation have happened? It would only be possible if someone had swapped the copy of the magic record. Everyone was stunned after so many revelations. She needed to find out who had done that. For what reason would someone harm her that way? Our boy Caleb was full of the most refined tricks. Phew, good thing he's on our side. Far from there, Isabel asked what had happened. She was quite surprised. The girls seemed happy, treating it as a matter of karma. That's right, Sasha's kindness was very fake. The girls revealed that Sasha had set traps for her other times, and that Isabel should punish her, but Isabel was curious to know who could have done it. She meant, who could have swapped the copy of the magic record? It could only be someone capable of crafting magical items. The girls said that whoever did it was certainly on Isabel's side. One of the girls appeared at the door, announcing there was a guest. Who could it be? Who could arrive at such an hour? The girls seemed apprehensive to answer. Isabel knew well who it must be. She asked her to say she was sleeping, but before the maid could say anything, the emperor was already right behind her. Alexander didn't wait for permission to enter. Either way, he seemed pleased to have gone directly to her. Isabel was clearly annoyed by his arrival. She asked if he didn't know it was rude to enter other people's chambers without permission. Alexander said it was a great offense to lie to the emperor. He entered the room anyway, and said he couldn't blame her. Then, Alexander extended his hand to her, saying Isabel was the exception to everything. Our protagonist definitely didn't want to take his hand. That's it, girl. The emperor called out to her, and said those colors suited her very well. Isabel didn't want to give in at all costs. She asked Casey to make tea and leave them alone for a few moments. The Empress declared she didn't know what he had come to say, but she had a question for him. Alexander waited patiently. She wanted to know if he knew about the accident that happened at the consort's party. The Emperor revealed that yes, so Isabel asked if he knew who had swapped the copy of the magic record. He didn't expect her to ask him that. Isabel was also curious to know if there had been any punishment. She was very curious. Alexander revealed they were investigating to find the person behind it. Traces of some spell had been found on the gramophone. However, besides that, there were no other clues, meaning it had been someone very cautious. Isabel thought about his words. Given the circumstances, Alexander couldn't have been the culprit, but rather someone who held some hostility toward the Empire. But who could it be? The Emperor waited for his wife to speak. His eyes were restless. He revealed he intended to put Sasha under punishment for 3 months and cut her allowance. Alexander asked if that would be enough. Isabel didn't understand what he was trying to say. Did he want a harsher punishment? Despite it being tempting and Sasha being very annoying, Isabel replied no. In fact, her actions had helped her. It was important for Isabel to ruin her reputation in order to get divorced. Alexander praised her for keeping strategy above all else. Isabel reflected for a few moments. He revealed he was afraid of hurting her. What was Alexander plotting now? Logically, he wasn't talking about any physical punishment. He feared hurting Isabel's feelings. That statement surprised her greatly. What was this now? She insisted it was beneficial for her. The Emperor said everyone had their feelings hurt by criticism, but she stood firm. Our girl was very strong. She remembered the times when she needed to hide her weaknesses in the past, so that people would always think she was fine. Isabel was still haunted by her past. When she was Jane, she couldn't get tired yet. Then, Alexander revealed he wished she would tell him the truth and seek his help. Isabel couldn't understand. Why was he saying those things now? Our protagonist was afraid of confusing those words with real feelings, especially knowing he was a liar. Isabel fought not to feel attracted to him and to be strong with her feelings. She declared she didn't know he cared so much about her. Deep down, the girl knew the Emperor just wanted to seduce her. Alexander was disheartened to hear her say that. In the original story, he only cared about Sasha, discarding Isabel at the first opportunity. She wondered what kind of man he was to have abandoned her for 3 years. Isabel didn't want to get hurt anymore. She knew that, no matter what happened, she would always have herself. In her past, Jane was an office worker in Korea. The girl loved romance stories and watched movies of the same genre. However, if a stranger approached, she would grow suspicious and push them away. Jane and Isabel were very different, because secretly Isabel desired Alexander's love and approval above all else. Jane didn't understand how she could love him so much. For her own safety, Jane suppressed all those feelings. Maybe that explains why things happened the way they did before. And that kiss too. That's why she needed to be strong, if she wanted to succeed. And even now, in a moment like that one, Isabel was troubled, but she wasn't. Even though it wasn't necessary, in the end, she still felt a lot of resentment. Alexander called out to his wife. The Emperor seemed apprehensive. What could he be worried about? He was anxious, waiting for her answer. What could Isabel be thinking? The truth was, Alexander barely remembered what he was going to say. Would he apologize to escape that situation? Meanwhile, the touch of his hand on hers was something unforgettable. So sweet. He thought he probably knew the reason she no longer trusted him. But that wasn't what the Emperor wanted. The man was no longer sure what he should do. All Alexander wanted most was for her to show him something. The same smile she reserved for the rest of the world. Yeah, he really liked that smile a lot. Alexander was distant, lost in his thoughts. The Emperor knew that if he changed his stance, it would be very strange. Isabel looked at him with doubt. He was hard to figure out. He thought that was because she was extremely ambitious. For his own sake, he could pretend to apologize as many times as he wanted. But with her, things were different. Isabel called out to her husband and then regretted having said those earlier words. She seemed to be fighting an internal battle. Isabel said it was nothing, so that was it. If she was physically or mentally hurt, she wouldn't want to do things for him, hence his concern. The Emperor paused and revealed he would like to ask her a favor. There was no undertone in his voice, and so Alexander asked Isabel to give him one more chance. He promised that if she accepted, he wouldn't disappoint her. The Emperor said he would give anything Isabel wanted. The room fell silent. Alexander said he would create the image of the perfect life she wanted. She wouldn't regret it if she chose to stay with him for a while. That was what he was willing to do. The only condition was that she not leave him. He would ask again. Alexander wanted to know if she still wanted to divorce him after hearing all that. The Empress was very surprised. So were we. Isabel thought for a few moments. And to his displeasure, the girl replied yes. She revealed that no matter what, all she wanted most was to be rid of him. Isabel declared she would like to clarify everything. The life she wanted, the happiness she sought so much. She would never achieve it while married to him. The truth was, Isabel didn't care about money or power. She wanted a truly happy life, so no matter what offer he made, she wouldn't change her mind. That's it, girl. The Emperor fell silent, impressed by the answer. He was upset by the answer, but Isabel stood firm and didn't back down. Our protagonist knew Alexander wouldn't keep his promises. If she chose to stay by his side, she'd have everything, wealth and power. But those were all things she didn't want. For Isabel, it didn't matter how much wealth he had, since he wasn't someone who truly cared about her. Our girl always right. The Emperor was furious at not getting what he wanted. She judged that must be painful for him. Isabel assumed there had probably never been a time when he couldn't get something he desired. But what was happening there would certainly help him in the end. He called out to his wife again. In a dark voice, he asked if she knew what it meant to swear by the gods of the empire. The girl replied yes, that those who broke their promises would meet tragic fates. Alexander asked her to pay attention to his words. What was he plotting now? And surprisingly, he swore by the gods of the empire. Alexander swore he would not separate from her, no matter what happened in the future. Isabel asked how he could do this. He declared that, from then on, she would only have two ways to get rid of him. One or the other would have to meet their fate. The girl heard in astonishment as he said that if he gave up on her while he was alive, he would accept any tragic end that came. Isabel was furious. How could he be so stubborn? She declared that he had recklessly made a huge oath without even consulting her. The girl told him to cancel it immediately. Alexander said it was no use. It was an oath that couldn't be reversed, and he would proceed that way. The Emperor ordered her to get used to staying by his side already. If she didn't leave, she could do whatever she wanted. Isabel no longer understood what was happening. Everyone in that palace was crazy. Days later, Isabel was in her chambers, sunk in regret. She couldn't just be lost now. The girl couldn't have worked so hard for nothing. Why had he sworn to the gods? Daisy approached with a message. The girl apologized for the intrusion and asked if the Empress would also sponsor that month. The Empress replied yes. Isabel had decided to donate money to libraries, hospitals, and this time would help the orphanages of the capital. She did this to ease the hardships of poverty, thus benefiting a wider public. That's why the Empress had been making generous donations for 7 months. She preferred to use that money to do good things rather than just buy luxury items. Caleb's cheeks turned red just from looking at Isabel. Casey wanted to ask the Empress something. She wanted to know if things were okay between her and the Emperor. Isabel asked if she had noticed something. The protagonist replied that he had made an oath to the gods. All the servants were shocked. Casey tried to explain that he must have done that because he loved her very much. Isabel replied frankly that that wasn't love. She told the children that trying to force someone to stay by your side wasn't affection, but obsession. By the way, Isabel judged that this was the crucial moment to change the direction of her plan. She had been a villain in her own way, had her luxuries, but her imagination and skills weren't enough. The girl knew that if the plan didn't work, she would have to find a way to convince Alexander to divorce, despite the oath. As she expected, there was only one way to stand out. But would it work? Without the necessary preparation, she wouldn't be able to escape the palace's security. Isabel knew she couldn't do that alone. She needed a friend, an outside ally who didn't care about the Emperor's wealth. She knew very well it would be hard to find people like that. Suddenly, one of the maids opened the door, startling the girl. She revealed something unexpected. An unexpected visitor had just arrived. What a plot twist. Isabel asked, who could it be? The Empress wanted to know who would be bold enough to come see her without an appointment. The maid replied it was Duke Norman Schwartz. The answer left Isabel speechless. What was a man like him doing there? What did he want with her? Isabel remembered that he was a supporting character in the original book. In terms of importance, the Duke would be even more important than Caleb. A kind man who made readers cry. Casey declared he was the person closest to the consort. She judged that he had bad intentions and might want to test her. Isabel thought the girl was right. What's most intriguing is that that scene didn't exist in the original novel. The development was different from the book, but for her, the more different, the more beneficial it would be for Isabel. Finally, the Empress asked for him to be let in. She wanted to know what he had to say. Outside, in the palace courtyard, tea was served at the table. Isabel thanked him for waiting for her and said it was an honor to finally meet him, but the man just remained silent. How mysterious he was. Caleb was quite apprehensive. The Duke took her hand, then he kissed it and said it was also an honor to meet her. Isabel paid close attention to that gesture. That man was Sasha's closest friend. Since he wouldn't fall for the Empress, she should be cautious. She asked if it was the first time they'd met in person. If it weren't for the consort's party, they would hardly have met. Then, he revealed they had already met before. Norman confessed he had been at her wedding to Alexander, but saw her from afar, without her noticing. So that was it. Isabel asked what the consort's closest friend wanted to talk to her about. But the Duke just gave a mysterious smile. Oh my God. He asked if the Empress thought he was a confidant of the imperial consort. Norman said he wouldn't deny the information, but declared that his visit to the Empress had nothing to do with Sasha. He had no interest in spying on her. That conversation was making Casey very alert. Isabel asked what his interest was in that conversation. Besides that, she had no idea about the reason for his visit. The man asked if she remembered the St. Joanna orphanage. He had very intense eyes. Isabel didn't seem to know what he was talking about, but Casey remembered. The Empress looked at the girl, who seemed slightly nervous. She finally remembered the paper Casey had brought to her chambers. The protagonist remembered having donated money to that institution, but what could that have to do with the Duke? He asked directly why she donated large sums of money to that place. Isabel didn't understand the reason for the question. Norman insisted she tell him the reason for such large donations. The girl replied that her reasons were none of his business. Had the Duke really come all that way just to ask that? The man said she should be ashamed for thinking he was being rude. Either way, he was being rude, indeed. So many people listened to him without being able to understand him, so he apologized. Caleb couldn't accept those words. The boy asked what the real purpose of that visit was. The two of them shouldn't be alone. He begged Isabel to let him stay by her side. However, the Empress insisted everyone step out for a few moments. Casey insisted on staying, but she said it was fine. Isabel said she would call if she needed anything, but the girl didn't need to worry. Caleb didn't like that situation one bit. Now, the two of them were alone. Isabel said it was now his turn, since she had sent the servants away. The Duke began to reveal his purpose, and then confessed to the Empress that he had an illegitimate son. What? How was that possible? Isabel's voice echoed through the courtyard. She said she needed to mentally prepare herself for that information. The Empress declared she needed to absorb that for a moment. Isabel took a deep breath. It was a huge revelation. What was happening? Why did these things only happen to her? A son of Norman's? That definitely didn't exist in the original book. She asked if it had been an accident. The Duke said his son's name was Ernest. Oh, it hadn't been a coincidence. She asked how he was the child's father. Norman explained that due to personal circumstances, he couldn't take direct care of his son. And that's why the child currently lived at the St. Joanna orphanage. Isabel finally understood the reason for his questions. That's why he had investigated who had sent funds to the institution. Duke Schwartz revealed that yes, because he was afraid there was a conspiracy. Isabel didn't know what to do with that information. It was quite a complex situation. The Empress wanted to ask him a delicate question. Isabel wanted to know why his son had been sent to the orphanage. It was their first conversation, and she didn't want to be so blunt, but she needed to understand better. They fell silent. To her surprise, Norman revealed it had been the child's mother's wish. The woman had asked him to stay away from the child so that he wouldn't suffer prejudice for being a monster. So she decided it would be better for the son to be raised in an orphanage. She cried a lot because of the decision. Norman blamed his appearance a lot for that. Half human, half monster. He would have to carry that bad reputation his whole life. Isabel heard the whole story, but she still wasn't convinced. People in that universe made every bad decision. Everyone lived just for events and newspaper articles. It was absurd. Of course, he didn't mean he doesn't know the child. When things got better, he would like to pass the title on to him. That's why he kept following the news and financially supporting the orphanage. However, he feared there were limits. The more he sponsored the institution, the faster rumors would spread. And eventually, someone would question those amounts, and someone might investigate. So, he was afraid it would be exposed that Ernest was his son. When the Duke was already very tired and sad, a mysterious donor appeared, and that changed everything. He looked at the documents carefully. And that made him very happy. Thanks to the generous donations, even if he temporarily paused the sponsorship, his son would grow up in good conditions. He revealed other things to the Empress. At first, he thought the mysterious donor had been the imperial concubine, because the information pointed toward the palace. Of course, Sasha felt for children, but it wasn't her. It was the Empress herself. Isabel looked at him, a bit startled. Duke Schwartz said that now she knew his secret and he had no intention of using it against her. He just wanted to show his goodwill. Isabel thought the atmosphere between them had changed a little. Norman said the Empress was someone he truly respected. Isabel was a bit embarrassed by his words. Wait, what's happening? Why was he acting like that? Later, the emperor's chambers were silent. Something seemed to trouble Alexander. He seemed hurt. Hours ago, he said exactly what he wanted to say to her and decided to go against Isabel's intentions. So, how was that possible? He clenched his fist tightly. Apparently, everything he did only pushed Isabel further away from him. The emperor felt he was drowning more and more in that swamp. Lost in his own emotions, he found everything irritating and strange. You could see all his anguish on his face. In his eyes, there was only one feeling: guilt. Now, in the middle of the night, Alexander regretted his actions. He regretted having said those things to Isabel. He could understand her motivations. If only he hadn't abandoned her when the consort arrived. All he wanted most was to feel her affection. His wife, Isabel Castilla. He should have respected her while they were together. Only then, who knows, if things had been different, she might smile at him. He sighed and thought it was just a smile. Alexander told himself to wake up, since she was currently just a greedy talent. But we know that wasn't true, more than most people. He didn't emphasize feelings like affection and shouldn't forget that. However, he wasn't alone. Someone called out to the emperor. He already knew that voice well. Sasha, his imperial consort. She was happy to see him. Alexander said they had no appointment scheduled. Why was she there? The girl said she was missing him, and that's why she had come to his chambers. He didn't seem the least bit impressed. How did she have the nerve to go there, with that suggestive manner? But Alexander knew her personality very well, a powerful tool. Sasha was just using the words of an ordinary noble, very different from Isabel. He asked what she wanted, but the girl fumbled to answer. The emperor was already getting tired of it, and asked again if something was wrong. She just needed to ask. Sasha seemed very nervous to answer. She revealed she'd heard her budget would be cut for 3 months. Since it had been his decision, the girl didn't want to contest it, but the consort claimed she always obeyed his orders and asked him to have mercy on her, just this once. Alexander thought about how much she failed to meet his expectations. He asked if she was sure of what she was claiming. Sasha was confused, and he reminded her of the first time they met. Alexander asked if she remembered the contract she signed. He assumed she didn't know how to manage certain palace matters and wasn't even familiar with imperial culture, but the story painted the consort as if she were a saint, a divine being, pure and kind. He had hoped she would act as such, but he was deceived. Her stupid actions that he needed to clean up afterward. The imperial family's honor had been affected by her irresponsibility, hindering his goals. How dare she claim to be following his instructions? So it was better for her to stop claiming that. The mood grew heavy. Sasha began to cry. She begged forgiveness for being a bad person, incapable of following his instructions. Either way, it wasn't as if the emperor could just expel her from the palace, could he? Alexander noticed her change. The emperor laughed, satisfied. There it was, that creature. Sasha declared that according to imperial law, royal marriages couldn't end in divorce, and she, as a sacred woman, also followed that rule. So, per the empire's diplomatic agreements, he couldn't divorce her either. He clenched his fist in anger. Sasha approached, telling her husband she needed him. With a strange glint in her eye, the consort said she would never abandon him and would always be by his side to give him whatever he wanted. The emperor remained silent, and then showed a wicked smile. His laughter filled the room. He declared to the consort that she was much braver than he thought. Sasha didn't understand what he meant. Alexander had a mysterious expression. He thought she no longer felt sorry for her own life. Besides that, what else did she want to ask for? Sasha was frightened by his stance. So were we. How could he speak to her like that? Suddenly, she could hardly move. Was she bewitched? Was Sasha in danger? Alexander was wrapped in an evil aura. He declared to the girl she had made a mistake. What was he talking about now? The emperor stood up and said Sasha would never take Isabel's place. No matter what she did, no matter how hard she tried, the result would always be the same. Sasha didn't recognize that man. Who could be so cruel? To her relief, the conversation was interrupted. Robert had come to consult the emperor and was surprised to see Sasha there. What was the consort doing in Alexander's chambers? The secretary asked if there was a problem. Alexander walked past the girl and said everything was fine, completely ignoring her. Sasha could hardly believe what had happened. The emperor asked Robert what had happened. He waited for the answer. Sasha wondered if their relationship no longer meant anything. Robert asked what the matter was with the consort, but Alexander said it was nothing special. The men left the girl alone. She was speechless. Alexander asked if the empress was having a conversation with Duke Schwartz. Robert explained that Norman had shown up unannounced, and that the two of them were alone in the imperial courtyard. The emperor grew tense just imagining it. Why had he gone there? Alexander knew the duke was Sasha's closest friend. Robert asked if he was all right. The emperor said it was nothing. But the truth was, he hated imagining Isabel smiling at someone else, especially if she were alone with Norman Schwartz. Alexander ordered Robert to hurry and locate the empress. The emperor suddenly stopped. He couldn't believe the scene before his eyes. Duke Schwartz. The emperor saw him at the moment he knelt to kiss Isabel's hand. Alexander was stunned by that sight. How could Norman dare so much? Those red eyes fooled no one. The duke showed a sweet smile to the empress. Alexander scowled with hatred. The emperor walked heavily toward the two of them and asked if something wonderful had happened before his eyes. Isabel was quite surprised by his arrival. Alexander came even closer. An awkward silence fell over the scene. He asked Duke Schwartz if kneeling and kissing other men's wives' hands was a popular custom in the north. Norman replied it was just a courtesy, and Isabel, as empress, should accept courtesies from other nobles. The duke said he didn't expect to shock the emperor that way. He revealed that married people in the capital weren't strangers to each other. Isabel felt suffocated by the situation. What had happened to Alexander? She wondered if the duke had come there just to cause discord. Was he certain of the things he'd said? The protagonist felt Norman hid a dark heart. Before she could say anything, Alexander said the capital's culture promoted free communication, but the emperor could see beyond the duke's actions. Maybe he just wanted to say polite phrases in front of others. Duke Schwartz fell silent. He asked the emperor if, while still married, it was normal to keep a second woman at the palace. Alexander laughed scornfully. The emperor said he didn't know the reason for that sudden visit and offered the duke some advice. The man declared that, in the capital, it was better to be careful with his customs. Alexander said that if any act harmed his honor, then Schwartz's own honor would be challenged. Were the two of them talking about Sasha? She still hadn't understood why Norman had approached her. Isabel was surprised to hear the duke say he wouldn't deny his friendships, but his approach to the empress was a sincere gesture. The duke swore he would never hurt the empress. He revealed she was his benefactress and apologized to her for showing up without prior notice, and would contact her later. Alexander didn't like that at all. Despite being quick, that situation passed like a hurricane. Some even asked if it was a love triangle. The emperor seemed to have more to say. However, he said nothing more. Isabel thought it best to let it go. That had nothing to do with her anyway. On one of the streets of the capital, a mysterious figure stood in an alley. A mother hugged her son, trying to silence him. She begged for mercy. The hooded man called the minister, warning him he had a message from the saint. The minister asked him to wait, because he needed to finish his work there. He declared to the woman that her husband had been helping him spy on an organization of the Holy Kingdom for half a year. Thus, he proved that the minister wasn't smart, and the result was before her. The man declared to the frightened woman that he wouldn't waste any more time. The gods of the empire wanted the same thing he did. The cruel minister used the gods' names to manipulate. He extended his hand to her and asked the woman to hurry and answer. The peasant woman seemed too frightened to say anything. Fear was etched in her eyes. She had no idea what would happen next. The woman stammered a few times, trying to answer him. She revealed she knew about her husband's deal with the organization, even having concealed the intelligence because of it. The minister asked where the intelligence agent's residence was. The peasant woman declared she knew nothing about that. She had always tried to protest so he wouldn't join the organization. The minister finally decided what was about to happen. The man said her story was over. The woman perked up and asked if she was free, but the cruel minister said he would send her to the arms of the gods. She begged him to have mercy. Her son was still just a child, but the minister ignored her completely. Someone judged that the saint must be very tired. The minister said that, being so, he would have to help her. The man asked if the minister planned to go directly to the empire. The man declared there was no other way. She wouldn't be strong enough to deal with the immediate problem. Oh no, how could Sasha be involved in that? Days later, after the last time, she really didn't need to fall into that pile of anxiety, if it just made sense. But what could Isabel do? She had immediately returned to his chambers. The best person to be her helper? Couldn't it be Norman Schwartz? Or could it? Isabel was very confused. One wrong step and she could lose a lot. Despite that, he was her best option. It had to be the Duke. He was a very powerful and rich man, lord of the castle in the north of the empire, making it a good place to hide from Alexander. Besides, he had good reasons to help her. But even so, she wasn't sure. How could Isabel use him, even if she only wanted the divorce? As a result, she might harm someone else's situation. What to do, Isabel? Given the way things had gone, it was the only thing to do. She wanted to wake up in her old life, right after leaving her family. Isabel was determined to think only of herself, like a selfish person, like a bad girl. That's why she would be able to manage on her own. She noticed the atmosphere wasn't tense, even though she herself was. Norman fell silent. He didn't expect her to contact him first. Even so, he had planned to visit her a few times. Once again, the Duke thanked the Empress. The protagonist said there was no need to thank her. Isabel revealed she had summoned him because she needed him. Norman was happy to hear the Empress needed him. She asked if everything they talked about last time was true. The Duke swore by the gods he would never lie to her. Isabel was tired of hearing people swear by the gods, and told him she had listened carefully to his story. Then, she said she would be glad if he could listen to hers. Norman said he would listen with pleasure, and so, the afternoon went on. Alexander seemed unhappy with something. Those documents made no sense to him. Norman Schwartz said he was heading to the Empress's palace. What had the Duke gone there to do? Alexander knew Isabel, and he were having a private conversation, not even the servants present. He remembered how much she hated running into him around. He noticed bitterly that she had gradually distanced herself from him. It was very hard for Alexander to let her go. All the Emperor wanted most was for them to grow close again. But then he arrived. What was so special or interesting about the Duke? A dark aura surrounded Alexander. His cruel side seemed to have made a discovery. Isabel didn't care about him at all. Quite the opposite. Norman Schwartz, the Duke, he watched her in silence as she said she had finished her account. Isabel confessed to him that her only real plan was to divorce the Emperor. She herself had rejected the crown, which didn't suit her. The girl felt confined in that palace, looking for a way to escape, and finally asked if the Duke knew any way to run away. The Empress waited anxiously for his reaction. He fell silent, thinking about her words. Isabel hoped he wouldn't think her crazy, but she would do whatever was necessary. Then, the Duke asked if she was considering fleeing to another empire. Isabel finally realized he had really listened to her story. Norman reminded her that she herself had asked him to listen carefully, hadn't she? Even though it was a difficult account, it wasn't hard to understand her reasons. Isabel thought about what he had said. He explained that if the Empress needed help, no matter how, Isabel interrupted him, saying she just wanted to take advantage of him. There wasn't even any benefit for him. But Norman insisted on helping her. Duke Schwartz revealed he would be glad to be a tool for the Empress. Isabel was very surprised by his devotion. He was certain of it, and said he would be her most powerful ally. A new day. The servants were already talking about rumors between the Empress and the Duke. One of the young women even revealed she'd heard they were having an affair. What they didn't know was that someone else was listening. Caleb listened to the conversations and even found out that Isabel and Norman were meeting alone. The young man walked through the courtyard. He already had enough worries because of the Emperor. Apparently, there was someone else for him to worry about. Casey asked the Empress not to worry. The girl told her to ignore the rumors going around those days. Isabel thanked her for her words and finally said she was fine. The girl said she didn't care what people said about her. She assured there was nothing going on between her and the Duke, and was sure the rumors would die down soon. Casey was happy to hear that. She thought Isabel was a very wise empress. In truth, she was quite worried about the content of the rumors. After her last conversation with Norman, a strange rumor started at the palace. Some people were saying Isabel was having an affair with the Duke, and that Alexander disapproved of it entirely. She remembered there had been a similar rumor with Caleb. People in the capital seemed to love rumors of lovers. What could she do? Isabel thought about the Duke. He had told her he would find ways to take her to his palace, and also asked her not to worry too much about it. But how could she not worry? Wasn't she shameless enough not to care about someone who said he would help her without asking for anything in return? Especially with those beautiful eyes. The protagonist was very apprehensive. Isabel lamented, feeling like a burden. Yeah, it really wasn't easy being a villain. Casey didn't understand her reaction. Isabel changed the subject and asked if her things had arrived from Sasha's palace. The maid said she had left several bags in a spare room. The Empress thanked her and said she would take a look. It had already been a while since she'd settled into her own palace, but she still hadn't unpacked most of her bags. She had bought a lot of things while she was still spending Alexander's money, and there were still boxes and boxes for her to organize. They told her they were making a list of the items, so there wasn't much left. Apparently, something was out of the ordinary. Isabel asked what he had come there to do. Alexander seemed to have been waiting for her for some time. He explained there seemed to be a commotion at the Empress's palace and asked if it was forbidden for him to be there. Isabel replied that wasn't what she meant. The Emperor said apparently there was no problem with the Duke visiting her. Isabel noticed something different about him. Lately, Alexander had been visiting her more often. Isabel said it was wonderful talking with the Duke. Besides, he was very cordial. Alexander didn't like that at all. He reminded her that Norman was Sasha's best friend and said it could be dangerous for her to keep someone like him so close. Isabel said he seemed worried they'd become lovers and that would ruin the imperial family's reputation. Alexander was speechless. He must really be very jealous of her. The Empress asked him not to worry about that. With a beautiful smile, she revealed she was no longer interested in love. Alexander was once again speechless, completely ignoring him. Isabel said it was time to start organizing things. They needed to move the boxes from there to the Emerald Room, and then other boxes would go to the Ruby Room. Oh no! One of the boxes started to topple. Isabel was distracted talking about items she had bought the previous Wednesday. Casey shouted, "Careful, Your Majesty." Isabel could only see the shadow of the box collapsing above her. Oh my God! The sound of breaking wood filled the room. Casey asked if the Empress was all right. But she was very surprised by something she saw. Isabel was breathless because of the accident. Alexander had prevented her from getting hurt. So sweet. Our protagonist was very frightened. Those boxes really were heavy, and the pieces scattered. Alexander asked if she was okay, but she didn't answer. Then, the emperor called his wife by name. Despite his secrets, he had a very caring side. The maids came running and asked if the two of them were all right. Isabel asked them to tend to the emperor, but before she could even stand up, Alexander picked his wife up in his arms and said they would look for a doctor immediately. Wow, how manly. He wanted to make sure she wasn't hurt. The girls were impressed. What a man. When he wanted to, Alexander could even be a good husband. Already at the palace doctor's office, the doctor said the empress didn't seem to have any injuries. Maybe she was just a little in shock from the incident. Isabel repeated to her husband that she was fine and there was nothing to worry about, but he wasn't satisfied. Alexander said he was glad she was fine, but what would happen to her if she had gotten hurt? Isabel's heart pounded hearing him be so attentive to her. So sweet. Even the doctor was sensing a different mood and wanted to leave right away. Either way, Isabel repeated that she was fine. So, there was no need for Alexander to worry so much about her. He sat beside her on the bed. Isabel was confused. He replied that he didn't care what she said, since he couldn't help worrying about her. How adorable! Were things changing for the better? Even if the chances were 1 in a million, the emperor revealed that the thought of her getting hurt was unbearable to him. Oh, how sweet. Please, keep going like this. He confessed he didn't want her to get hurt. Not now. Not ever. The girl had never seen that side of him. Despite that, she knew well what emotions he hid behind his eyes. This time, Isabel knew he wasn't pretending. He was desperate. Those were the eyes of someone who had lost someone special and who never wanted to lose anyone again. Isabel thought for a moment. Alexander's past had been mentioned briefly in the original book. He was the son of a consort with the emperor, and his mother had no power or influence. Alexander only held the title of prince, but he would need to sacrifice a lot if he wanted the throne. That's why his mother always told him to stay hidden and not stand out in the crowd. It was a wise decision. The former emperor became obsessed with religion and failed to take care of the empire. His successors fought hard to keep the throne, so Alexander's mother fought hard to protect herself and her son. But despite her efforts, she didn't last long. That loss was irreparable for him. The consort fell ill, but the emperor had already given in to depravity, and the noble houses had turned against each other. While few remained to defend themselves, Alexander stepped out of the shadows. He gathered troops to seize the palace and attacked it all at once. And so, he dethroned the former emperor, who was lost between madness and religion. Alexander crowned himself the next emperor. Isabel felt sorry that his past had been so sad, and she never imagined they could have gone through similar moments. But she needed to be strong. Far from there, at the consort's palace, someone asked how Sasha was. One of the maids said she refused to leave her room. She really wanted Sasha to eat something, but the consort had been locked in her chambers since the last incident. Everyone wished she would regain her strength soon. But the scene in the room was sad, slightly dark. Sasha seemed completely lost, talking to herself and biting her nails. Wow, what got into her? Sasha was hearing voices. The nobility cursed her, deceived her, and openly laughed at her. How could things have gotten so bad? Everyone had sided with Isabel. Sasha felt no one was on her side anymore. Suddenly, she heard someone calling her. Sasha stood up quickly, startled. With trembling hands, she held a talisman, and through it, someone was calling her. The voice asked if she was listening, and she replied, "Yes, priest." What? Sasha told the priest she was there and listening to him. She asked what the reason was for that sudden contact. The man explained that since she hadn't answered his calls, he used the divine stone in the amulet to find her. The consort explained she had been busy with many tasks. She apologized and said she hadn't meant to worry him. The girl even said the emperor was taking very good care of her and that she might soon become empress as soon as she got rid of that woman. But her speech was interrupted by the priest. He simply announced that lying was a sin. She knew that very well. Sasha was trembling a lot, barely able to respond. She asked for forgiveness, explaining she had done her best. The man explained she didn't need to make more excuses, but he had to warn her of something. He was on his way to the empire. The priest said he planned to stay at the imperial palace as an honored guest of the holy nation and would help with whatever she needed. They needed to remove that foolish woman from the throne and crown Sasha as empress. The girl was devastated by the news. She asked if that was really possible. He replied yes, if it was the will of the gods. Sasha was deeply worried. The consort said she would trust his every word completely, and that she would do whatever he ordered. The girl was determined to pull Isabel from the throne. The man said he hoped she would keep her word. She couldn't lie to him. That being the case, the man asked her to prove her words. For that, she would need to make another contract with him. Far away, people were commenting on the Empress's charity. Apparently, that was discovered in a cabinet meeting. A young woman asked if that was the reason the Imperial Poverty Relief Fund had been created. People were talking about an imperial fund called Isabel, created by the Empress herself. Her father hadn't liked it much because he thought they shouldn't spend money on such matters, but the girl honestly thought that gesture was very generous. Another commented that the Empress was more impressive than any knight. In the distance, a gentleman was listening to the girl's conversation. He seemed curious to hear more. Alexander was pleased, because everything was going very well. The man asked if it would last. He thought Isabel might not like knowing her name was being used. The Emperor judged she wouldn't even mind. He knew she had a soft heart for the weaker ones, and even if the fund were named after her siblings, she wouldn't oppose the general idea. Alexander admired her kind heart. He didn't know how it had been revealed that she was helping the poor, but the Emperor saw it as an opportunity to improve her reputation. Isabel thought it was too obvious how much her husband was trying to ruin her plans. Casey asked if everything was okay, and the protagonist just replied she was talking to herself. She had given up on ruining her own reputation, but wanted to avoid public support. The truth was, Isabel didn't want them to suffer when she left. She couldn't mess up her plans while she could still do some good in that world, and she had another concern. Casey asked what the Empress would do about Duke Blake and the Count. Isabel had an idea, and then asked for help getting dressed and made up. It had been a long time since she'd last looked presentable. The men thanked the Empress for receiving them that afternoon. Duke Blake said she was a very graceful woman. Isabel said she was happy to receive them. After all, they were family, weren't they? Blake was Isabel's surname before she married Alexander Castilla, so those people were her closest relatives. Her father said she had been precious since childhood and he missed her very much. They talked about how 3 years had already passed. Her father was very happy to see her. Wow, 3 years was a long time, which was ironic because in all those years they had never once contacted her or even called her precious. Isabel said she was doing very well. Duke Blake was Isabel's father and the Count was her younger brother. However, they didn't even appear in the original book. She knew the Blake house had been powerful many years ago, but it was hard to find official documents. That's why Isabel never thought their paths would cross at that moment. Apparently, Isabel wasn't usually close to her family. Her father had strange eyes. What did that mean? They were happy to know she was doing well. Her brother revealed they were worried she might have misread their lack of contact until now. Isabel asked what he was talking about. Her father interrupted his son, saying they always got news of her through the Empire, and gave a flimsy excuse, saying it was as if she had never left. The latest news was impressive, about how well she was doing in society. They also commented on her relationship with the Emperor, which seemed to have improved a lot. Isabel realized she had seen people like them before. She could never forget their faces, even if she tried. They were like her family from her past life. The Empress decided to ask what they wanted from her. Isabel explained they must have had a reason to go there, so she told her father to spit it out and get straight to the point. He held his hands uncomfortably. Finally, the man revealed the Blake house was going through financial difficulties. Things had gotten much worse since she left. Isabel heard them lament that they would need to sell the palaces and the house, despite having worked hard to try to keep their assets. But the voice she heard wasn't the Duke's, but rather Jane's father's. She had gone back in time to when her father asked her for money. Isabel asked if that was all. They had come there just to ask her for money. Her father tried to manipulate her, asking her to grant grace to the Blake house, but he was interrupted. The sound of water filled the room. The Duke was completely soaked and his son was quite confused. Wow, what happened? Isabel had thrown her tea at her father, saying they were really quite bold to have put her into an arranged marriage and then show up asking for favors. It would have been better to sell the castle than to sell his own daughter. Her brother tried to dissuade her, saying they had done it for her own good, since after all, she was married to the Emperor himself. Before leaving, Isabel told them she didn't care about the fall of the Blake house. The man was stunned to hear his daughter say she was no longer part of their family. Now, they were just strangers. They tried to call out to her, but she had already left the room. Isabel dashed down the hallway, leaving them behind. She had to be very brave to take that stance. That's it, girl. The protagonist had tried so hard to forget them, but it had been very difficult. But why were those memories resurfacing? She just wanted to calm down. They weren't really her family. They were just people who pretended to care and only sought her out when they needed her. Even having moved past it, why did it hurt so much? Isabel tried to convince herself it was nothing. She needed to endure that pain until she got to her palace. Only then could she cry as much as she needed to. Some pain's time doesn't erase. The afternoon was calm. Alexander looked out the window. In the distance, he saw Isabel walking with Casey, but she seemed deeply shaken. Oh no, poor thing. He asked what could have happened to her. In the Empress's chambers, Alexander knocked on the door. As expected of him, the Emperor didn't wait for an answer and just walked in. But what he saw left him very worried. His wife, hugging a pillow, looked very sad. He said he was very sorry about what happened. Alexander revealed he didn't know she wasn't on good terms with her family and apologized for the carelessness of not having been there for her. The emperor knew many people loved their families, even though that wasn't his case. So he had assumed Isabel and her family were fine. Before he continued speaking, his wife called out to him. Isabel asked why he had chosen her to be his empress. He declared it was for legitimacy and reminded her he wasn't the immediate heir, son of one of his father's several consorts. Isabel's family, despite its fragility, had an unmatched legitimacy in history. Isabel figured that must indeed be the reason. She said he no longer needed her, since no one questioned his legitimacy on the throne. Alexander was surprised by her words. She asked if it wouldn't be more beneficial for him to remove her from the throne and make Sasha empress. After all, Sasha was a holy woman, and she was just a woman from a ruined noble family. The emperor said she was his only wife. Alexander admitted that 3 years ago, he saw her as a status tool, but now he deeply regretted that. Those words caught Isabel by surprise. He confessed he regretted not having treated her as she deserved, but today, he really felt very lucky to have her as his wife. Wow, how sweet. And it was true, even though he felt embarrassed to admit it only now. Isabel was speechless. Why was he saying those things? Her past was still very painful. The things her father had told her still haunted her, but Alexander's words were everything she most wanted to hear. Isabel wanted someone to set aside their pride and offer a sincere apology, but of all people, why was he saying that? After all, Alexander was the emperor of that world and was destined to belong to someone else. The emperor waited for her to say something, but her answer was surprising. Isabel said she hated him, and her tears fell onto the pillow. She said she despised him more than anyone else in that world. Why did it have to be him? Alexander didn't wait any longer and hugged his wife, while she kept repeating that she hated him. Oh, what a delicate moment. Our dear protagonist could no longer hold back her tears. The emperor begged her to forgive him, but our girl couldn't stop crying. Alexander said she didn't need to be strong in front of him. Inside, Isabel was very tired. She had cut ties with her family and become independent, only to fall into a completely different world and have to pretend to be someone else. Maybe that's why she found refuge in his arms. A few minutes later, Isabel slept peacefully. Alexander watched his wife sleeping. He hoped his words hadn't caused her more pain, but she was deeply asleep. After crying so much, he thought about what he would do next. Then, the emperor had an idea. The man got up quietly so as not to wake her. Outside the palace, Duke Blake and his son couldn't accept being thrown out in the middle of the night. They claimed they were the Empress's family. That was absurd. Then, someone said that was exactly why they wouldn't take more drastic measures. The Duke was very frightened by what he saw. Alexander said that as minimal courtesy to her relatives, if they left on their own, he wouldn't hold them accountable for the tears Isabel had shed. Otherwise, they could face serious trouble. The emperor gave an ultimatum and said the choice was entirely theirs. Wow, so intense. A new day begins. The priest thanked the emperor for his hospitality. He was happy about the reception. The man said he didn't know how to show his full gratitude. Alexander said he was happy to receive such a special guest. But Isabel had a strange feeling. Sasha heard the emperor say he hoped the priest would feel at home. Our protagonist remembered she had never seen that priest in the original book, so she didn't know what relationship he had with Sasha. According to the book, multidimensional transport took the traveler to the Holy Land where the priest stayed. Would that priest be a guardian or a mentor? He had a very mysterious look. The maids found the priest very elegant. Little did they know, they also found him very polite. On the other side, Sasha closed the door. She told the man she had solved her problem in the past, so she wouldn't be coming back so soon. If he wanted to say something, now was the time. The priest asked how everything had gone wrong. Sasha got very nervous. She asked if he hadn't already gone there knowing everything. He told her that even for him, there were certain limits of understanding he hadn't yet reached. The man walked toward her. In a frightening manner, the priest asked her to hurry and tell him everything, but the consort was very scared. Sasha asked if he already knew Isabel wanted to divorce the emperor. The priest said her request had been denied, and then she began taking several rather strange actions. Well, he seemed partially up to date. He was understanding everything. He asked if she wasn't doing anything else at the palace. Sasha tried to say yes, but fear had taken over the girl. A strange mood filled the room. He raised his hand, asking what she meant, and gave a hard slap to the girl's face. Oh no! Sasha had her flaws, but she didn't deserve that. She touched her reddened cheek. With a kind expression, the cruel man insisted she keep talking. She tried to compose herself to explain the situation. With a trembling voice, the consort explained she had opened a salon with the idea of using magic mirrors, but he asked her to continue. Before she even finished the story, he slapped her again and again. How could a priest be so terrible? The man held her face in his hands and declared in a threatening tone that her face was one of her great weapons. So, it shouldn't be in that state. He truly didn't care. Touching a wound on her cheek, the priest said that if she was going to become empress in the future, she should be prepared. And with a wave of magic, the wound vanished. Despite that, he was very resentful of her stupidity. Sasha had the ability to foresee events and yet withdraw from situations. He judged her quite pathetic. The priest asked her not to worry, since he would help her even though she was incompetent. What cruelty in those words. That's why he had no choice but to offer her a new contract, in exchange for the complete annihilation of her soul. Oh my god. Sasha was too weak to react and think clearly. He asked if she was really worried. While alive, she had the powers of a sacred entity. The priest said with a wicked expression that soon the entire empire would belong to her. Besides, what other choice did she have now? If she couldn't become empress and become the next owner of the empire, Sasha said she agreed, but the girl seemed in a trance. She placed her small hand in his and asked him to make her empress. Oh no. And so, they made another pact. The priest said that was the will of the gods, so it should be fulfilled. Sasha was very afraid. What would happen to her? Possessed spirits needed to be eliminated. Nothing like a new day. The sky was blue and clear and the weather pleasant. Boys and girls strolled through the streets of the capital. Summer had begun. That meant Isabel had already gone almost a year without getting her divorce. She watched the young people. The girl had thought she would be free of the marriage in 3 months and didn't understand how it could be taking so long. That period marked the beginning of the social events in the Kingdom of Castilla. That year, at the palace, there would be a party lasting 3 days and 3 nights. Isabel had no reason to attend or help with that event, but after the last incident, she remembered, embarrassed, the intimate moment with Alexander. The girl felt indebted and wanted to do something to help, but she had pushed herself hard and even felt a little depressed. Outside the palace, the day was beautiful. Isabel was lost in her thoughts. She didn't know what to do at a time like that. The girl hoped a walk would make her feel better. A little sun. Oh, she wasn't entirely alone. Someone called out to her, interrupting her break. Sasha and the priest suddenly appeared. Isabel explained she was resting a bit and asked what brought the two of them there. The consort explained she was showing her friend around the palace. She gave a smile, but in truth, she had noticed Sasha had been very strange lately, but that wasn't important. None of that mattered to her. The priest bowed courteously, greeting the mother of the empire. He said he would like a chance to talk with her, since apparently the emperor had arranged that meeting. Isabel was curious. What was he talking about? The priest said he admired the way she governed and cared for the people. Sasha remained silent, unlike her usual chatty self. The night before, she had asked him if Isabel could have come from another world. The man asked why the surprise. They were people with the same body, but different souls, still very weak. Sasha asked how he had come to that conclusion. It was something impossible. Besides, it hadn't been mentioned in any book. The priest said there were no records of multidimensional travelers. Sasha would know what that meant. He told her that the absence of records didn't prove it was impossible. The girl's gaze was tormented. Could there be others like them too in that world? Sasha didn't know how to answer that. Back in the present, she thought the priest was right about Isabel. But was that really so? She needed to be sure. Isabel noticed Sasha's silence. Was the mood getting tense? Why was the world's most talkative girl staying quiet? The truth was, Isabel felt uncomfortable for no apparent reason. What was going on? The man insisted the empress consider having a meeting with him. He asked if she thought she had changed that much in a year. The priest revealed he had heard that from the consort. He knew that her personality and tastes had suddenly changed. Those values were shaped according to a person's life. The man said it was as if she had become another person. Isabel felt threatened by his terrible words. Oh no. What did he want to gain from that strange conversation? Finally, saved by the bell, a familiar voice said he was relieved to find her. She turned to see who had arrived. He approached. The emperor smiled, seeing her, and said he had been looking for her. Alexander asked if everyone had arranged to meet there without telling him. The priest remembered the previous night, in which he had secured a new agreement. That interruption could ruin both his and the consort's plans, and they might not manage to get rid of the possessed spirits. Alexander placed his hand on Isabel's shoulder. With a friendly smile, he asked them what they were talking about. Ugh, why did that guy insist on showing up out of nowhere? Despite that, Isabel felt much safer in his presence. She didn't want that to happen. Isabel said it would be best for them to leave. Alexander said the mood was really heating up. The priest showed a malicious look. He said they weren't talking about anything important, just cordial greetings. Alexander laughed in response. Isabel heard her husband say he thought the empress was being bothered. Oh my god, she didn't understand. After all, the priest was an honored guest. The man said he understood and regretted having bothered someone who was tired from work. The priest apologized to the empress. In truth, she found him very suspicious. Alexander told the guest that he and his wife would return to the palace, and something changed in his gaze, becoming more severe. The day was calm. Despite the tense mood between them, Isabel said she needed to rest a little. The emperor declared he would accompany his wife to her chambers. The priest noticed he didn't care at all about the consort. She played with her fingers in silence. The priest said he would like to talk more with the consort. Sasha's expression froze. What more could he want? Then, the holy man gave a message to Isabel. He declared he would like to meet her in the future, under better circumstances, but there was nothing to respond to him. Isabel asked if everything would be all right. Alexander had just insulted the priest because of her. The emperor said the man had been too friendly with her. The girl couldn't believe what he had said. The truth was, she didn't understand anything that was happening, because he was a holy man of the empire who probably knew about her secret. His relationship with Sasha was also very strange. Alexander touched his wife's face. He noticed his wife seemed very tired. What happened? Isabel pushed him away and told him she was busy at that moment. The emperor reminded her that the social events had begun and that might be a bit hard for her. Alexander asked if he could do something to help her. It was the least he could offer. Isabel's cheeks turned very red. So sweet. He even said he would do anything for her. The day went on. Some men were talking distractedly. A large camping tent was ready. The day's event was a hunting competition, and there was nothing special about it, just men going into the forest. Some women gathered to pray for their safety and enjoy some refreshments. There were also opportunities for a bit of romance. Casey could hardly wait to have her own romantic experiences too. Isabel asked if the girl was feeling lonely. She said no, since she was accompanied by the Empress, even though they couldn't talk during the event. Isabel smiled at the maid. At that moment, all they could do was follow her in silence. Maybe a little chaos would even be good. Then, Isabel noticed she was completely alone. She had no friends, other than her servants. The protagonist asked if they could sit somewhere else, until someone approached. Who could be calling for her? Two unknown girls looked at her, a bit awkwardly. Isabel asked what was going on, and they replied they would like to sit with the Empress. They said it would be an honor. The girl didn't quite understand. Isabel asked what the invitation was about. That was quite unexpected. The young women really wanted to sit with her, if it was appropriate, of course. Isabel wondered where those girls knew her from. They could be trouble. The girls were anxious for her answer. The blonde girl introduced herself as Mary, Viscount Orion's eldest daughter. She revealed she read everything about Isabel in the newspapers and was very happy to meet her in person. The Empress was speechless. She felt a déjà vu, remembering Bianca. Isabel remembered someone who resembled her. Bianca and Mary had the same innocent manner. The other girl introduced herself as Anna, Baron Heron's daughter. She also followed the news about the Empress in the paper. Isabel didn't seem too impressed. She explained she didn't know them and didn't think it a good idea to sit together. So, because of that... But the girl was interrupted by Casey. Isabel asked what it was. She revealed there were few seats and asked if she should prepare everything for the Empress. Isabel felt cornered. So, just this once? The girls were very happy and would never forget that day. Casey suggested they connect the seats. Another maid suggested Isabel try the sandwiches. Isabel knew she would like everything, according to the original book. She didn't understand why the girls were so happy. Isabel noticed more and more people arriving. She asked what the girls read about her in the newspapers. Anna replied she read about the Empress's achievements in the capital. The girl said she read all the articles about the punishments of slave traders, the Marquess who was caught committing illegal acts. Isabel was grateful they also celebrated those victories. Now she understood everything. She had spent so much time waiting for the divorce, and nothing had gone as she planned, to the point of being a good person in the girls' eyes. They seemed quite happy in Isabel's company. Isabel was embarrassed because she felt like she was deceiving them. The protagonist explained maybe the girls were misinterpreting her, since she wasn't the good person they thought. Isabel knew she wasn't a perfect empress. Mary said that wasn't true, because Isabel was an example to her. The girl said she would like to be like her. She was getting more and more used to that kind of reaction. Then, someone approached to greet Isabel, the mother of the empire. Isabel asked who she was. The lady introduced herself as Countess Liliana Hearth. When Isabel was a child, Liliana had been her private tutor for 2 years. The Empress didn't know how she knew so many people, but only replied that it had been a long time since they'd seen each other. The woman interrupted her. The Countess said she was only there to give her some advice. Isabel should look around and notice the ladies expressing their resentment toward her. It wasn't good for the Empress to sit with girls like those. The girl didn't like her one bit. Indeed, the other noble ladies seemed quite bothered, but that was their problem. People were really capable of saying the most horrible things. Anna apologized and said they would leave the Empress immediately. Isabel told Liliana that the mere fact of her socializing with other girls bothered the noble ladies. The lady said yes, for the sake of the imperial family. Now Isabel was going to show who the villain was. The Empress declared she didn't know that the imperial family's fame was so weak it could be destroyed by a few girls. A tense mood filled the room. Liliana tried to respond, but had no words. Isabel ordered the Countess to be careful about what she said in her presence, because standing before her was the Empress herself. That's it, girl. Liliana Hearth found that attitude very insolent. Isabel was very pleased with herself. How could the Empress speak to her like that? For the lady, it was an insult to repay her loyalty with such an affront. Being an etiquette teacher, she wouldn't accept that attitude. Mary felt very embarrassed, but the Empress's reaction surprised her. Isabel said she enjoyed spending time with them and saw no reason not to enjoy their company. The Empress said it was much better than being with people who like to gossip about others, like herself. Mary was very surprised. See? That's our girl. The protagonist declared it would be better for the Countess to leave, unless she wanted to be further humiliated. The lady was petrified. Don't mess with the Empress. How could she have been so bold? She apologized to the Empress. The Countess left grumbling, but it didn't matter to Isabel. That kind of attitude was unjustifiable to her. Many people just pretended to care. But Mary and Anna thought Isabel had been amazing. Isabel didn't understand the reason for their reaction. Mary declared she was much nicer than the news said. The girls said she had been incredible and had been afraid of getting her into trouble. They were overflowing with joy. Isabel hadn't expected that reaction. The girls said they were mistaken. Then, Alexander called out to his wife and asked what she was talking about. She was surprised by his sudden arrival. Always like that. The Emperor said she seemed to be having fun. The girls got excited about the important man. He said he was there to see the Empress. Isabel had no idea what he wanted now. The Emperor showed a sweet smile. He didn't fool the girl, but the girls fell for him quickly. They thought the two of them made a very cute couple. One of them said she didn't expect the Emperor to be so romantic. He even promised to capture the biggest monsters for his wife. Then, Isabel heard something interesting. Someone said the Emperor had tied with Duke Schwartz. The two of them got so excited about the competition that they eliminated almost all the monsters. Isabel thought that made no sense at all. Alexander said people were already talking about it. The girl asked if that was really true. He indicated yes, surprising his wife. Isabel said she had no interest in hunting, but in the original book, she used to. Alexander revealed he had pushed himself in the hunt for a reason. He confessed that if someone else won first place, he feared she wouldn't pay attention to him, and the Emperor didn't want that to happen. Alexander was very jealous and didn't want to share her with anyone. People were impressed. The ladies commented that the Emperor seemed to love the Empress very much, but not the concert. Probably things had changed since the accident. Other girls found the situation unacceptable and asked Sasha not to pay attention to the rumors, but she just looked at her wine glass. Sasha said she was fine, even though she didn't look it, and reinforced that everything was normal. She knew everyone was worried about her, but the Emperor's coldness was just a misunderstanding. One of them said she didn't understand, since he seemed to have a good heart. Sasha was holding back tears, but her gaze was distant and melancholic. The girls said that soon people would find out who the Empress really was, but how could they know? The consort thanked the ladies for their words. Sasha said that, thanks to her friend's support, she felt much stronger. Out in the forest, the day was calm. Alexander and Isabel walked together in the woods. She found that atmosphere suffocating. The Empress had invited him for a walk because she was afraid he'd say something foolish in front of the ladies. Things got a bit awkward. Alexander was very surprised because he never imagined she would invite him for a walk. He imagined it was because she didn't want to share his attention with other people. Isabel asked if he was sure of what he was saying. Either way, Alexander was happy they were there together. Walking calmly, he hadn't had moments of peace like that in a long time. She knew that very well, since he was the Emperor. For those who carried the crown, free time was a luxury item, but our protagonist had nothing to do with that. Then, Isabel heard some noises. She asked what sounds those were. Alexander asked her to stay behind him, since it could be something dangerous. First of all, something ran past through the foliage. Isabel saw the animal in front of her. That was a small fox. It seemed a bit frightened. Alexander found it strange, since there shouldn't be wild animals in that area. He noticed another detail. The little animal was injured, probably had fled from the hunting grounds. The Emperor asked his wife not to worry, since he would take care of the animal. Isabel asked him not to do anything. Alexander asked what was wrong. Isabel didn't want him to do the little creature any harm. After all, it was just a defenseless fox. The Emperor promised he wouldn't do anything, especially since it seemed she had escaped from a trap. He saw how good a person his wife was. While he suggested calling someone to take care of the little creature, Duke Schwartz appeared out of nowhere. Norman said he was surprised to find the Emperor there. Isabel was surprised to see Norman and asked what he was doing there. He replied he was looking for prey. He heard people's voices and came to the clearing. Isabel asked him to release the poor animal. Alexander teased him, saying the Duke had lost his prey. The Emperor said that, despite his great effort, a fox wouldn't move them up in the hunting rankings. Men, always so childish. However, Norman declared that, at that moment, he was in first place in the hunting competition. The mood grew tense among everyone. Even the little fox was shocked. Alexander asked what he had said. The Duke explained that during the Emperor's absence, he had captured some large animals. Now, the one with the advantage was Duke Schwartz. Isabel noticed the Emperor getting irritated. Norman declared that, besides everything, the prey he was looking for wasn't that little fox. Heavy clouds began to gather, and the first drops began to fall. She asked where that rain was coming from. Alexander said it was something quite unexpected. The rain fell heavily over the campsite. A carriage moved away quickly. One of the men was quite frightened. The priest said he understood his fear and explained that soon everything would be fine and that monster wouldn't hurt anyone else. He advised the man to calm down and go into the tent. The saint was waiting for him. The man was very surprised. Sasha welcomed him. He asked why she had invited him there. The consort asked him not to feel overwhelmed, but she had a small request for him. The man asked how he could help her, since he was a mere servant. She asked him not to get nervous. It was just a small favor. The rain fell outside. Sasha explained it was really something simple. Her gaze changed completely. How bizarre. She asked that, tomorrow night, during a party, he placed the Empress's seat closer to the lake. The servant tried to ask why, but for what reason would she ask such a favor? Sasha explained that recently there had been a lot of talk about her, and she was worried Isabel might be harmed. Logically, she would try to avoid any problem, but if Sasha stayed close to her, the Empress might be affected by the negativity, and so there would be great chaos. That's why she needed his help. The servant said he would do everything to help the consort. He promised he would be responsible and asked her not to cry, please. Sasha was very pleased. With a big smile, she thanked the young man. She felt she really had a chance of success. Night finally came. The girl asked if that was really her seat. Casey said the view was beautiful. Isabel looked so beautiful. That dress enhanced her beauty. She confessed she was worried about the sudden change in her seat, but was pleased with the view. Isabel also said it was her first time being so close to the lake, and she was a little nervous because of it. She fell silent for a moment. Despite being very nice, Lady Anna and Lady Mary drained her social battery. Isabel explained she would have to see them later. The night was calm. Alexander asked if Isabel didn't want to invite them. He was sure they would come immediately. Isabel preferred to change the subject. What was the Emperor doing there? He noticed the place was too quiet. Then, Alexander revealed to her that no one was interested in talking to him. Isabel said that made no sense at all. Casey loved seeing them together. The Empress asked why Casey was making that face. He said there hadn't been any negative comments about her. Isabel didn't understand what he wanted to achieve with that conversation. The Emperor really was quite annoying. She noticed the lake had a special charm at night. The protagonist declared she was happy to be there. Isabel asked Caleb if he had fully recovered. With a beautiful smile, he replied yes. He still couldn't run, but could walk calmly. Alexander watched the two of them talking. It was hard to decipher what the Emperor was thinking. Casey noticed his gaze. She tried to explain that the Empress cared for Caleb because he was very young, and that nothing more was going on. The Emperor said that if his wife was happy, it was fine by him. He really loved that smile. Far away, someone was spying on a boat. The mysterious man told the other that someone had just arrived. Probably someone would join them. One of the men told his friend not to worry, since they should focus on their assigned task. Isabel noticed there was no one else to arrive, so she suggested they start dinner. She invited Caleb, Casey, and the other maid to join them. And, of course, she couldn't forget to invite her beloved husband, Alexander. He was happy, even though Isabel didn't entirely approve of the idea. The protagonist didn't want him to just stand there. Suddenly, Caleb had a bad feeling. Alexander noticed the change in the boy. Isabel was explaining that he had already gone there once. Wait. What's that glowing on the horizon? Alexander shouted for his wife. Caleb was startled. What was happening? An enchanted arrow was flying toward Isabel. She barely had time to grasp the situation. The commotion was huge. But something even more unexpected happened. Caleb used a magic shield to protect the Empress from the arrow. Isabel asked what that was. The boy asked if the Empress was all right. She didn't understand how he was doing that magic, but Alexander protected her. The Emperor asked her to calm down. They needed to get out of there as fast as possible. For the first time, Isabel agreed with the Emperor. Alexander asked how long he could hold the spell, but Caleb explained not for very long. Caleb said that magic was very powerful and wasn't the work of an amateur. The boy insisted they flee from there as quickly as possible. Alexander repeated to his wife it was good for them to escape now. The Emperor explained that commotion would soon alert the knights, and they would arrive soon. He would steer the boat. Isabel said she would take care of the rest. She called the girls to follow her. Alexander was pleased, seeing how strong a woman she was. However, in the distance, more lights flashed in the woods. Oh no, they were being attacked. Isabel helped the girls calm down. She asked the Emperor if they were still far from the palace. Alexander replied they were almost there. Caleb was straining hard to maintain the magic shield. Just a little bit more. The Emperor shouted it was time for everyone to jump off the boat and run. The maids went first. Isabel jumped right after, running toward the palace. She turned to call for Caleb. However, the boy was still struggling to run. The girl remembered his leg. Caleb needed to get there fast. Isabel called her husband and said the boy couldn't run fast. Then, the magic shield broke. In front of her, Isabel saw a tragedy. Oh no! Caleb was hit by the enemy. Our protagonist was deeply tormented seeing that. She didn't want the boy to get hurt. Isabel screamed for Caleb. Casey said it was too dangerous, but the Empress ignored her and ran. Before she could get close, Alexander held her back. He said he knew how she was feeling, but she couldn't go there. The knights were already arriving. Phew, the mysterious men were disappointed. Who could they be? Isabel and her husband waited while the troops advanced. She couldn't stop thinking about Caleb. Would he be all right? Days later, Isabel looked out the window as if seeking answers. She was still very sad about the recent events. After Caleb was injured, all other social events at the palace were cancelled. She herself had to cancel her outside commitments and rest. Alexander had taken charge of resolving everything. She hoped the knights were doing their best to find the enemy who attacked them. She sighed, quite sad. Besides that, Caleb was resting. Before passing out, he said he was glad he had managed to save them all. Isabel was still very worried. To her, it seemed he had used his powers excessively to spare them from danger. It was better for her to sit down. Caleb had been in a coma for several days. The Empress asked her guest to come in. She asked if the situation was very worrying. The girl told the maids she was still waiting for the boy to wake up. All she wanted most was for him to come out of the coma. Her hands trembled with fear. Isabel just wanted him to wake up. She felt guilty about what had happened. The last attack had been aimed at her. After all, she was the Empress, the mother of the Empire. So, the reason the servants had been in danger was because of her. Isabel knew that part wasn't in the original book. How was that possible? This time, who knows? That tragic accident might have been her fault for meddling with the timeline. She needed to leave immediately, because that way, she wouldn't cause those people any more pain. Isabel wanted to go somewhere no one could find her, and that way, no one would get hurt. Only then would she be free. Suddenly, someone arrived. He greeted the Empress. Isabel thanked him for arriving so quickly. It was Duke Schwartz. What had he come to talk to her about? The Empress said she never had free time anymore, except for the hours she spent with Caleb. She felt she had caused too many problems. The Duke explained that, since the last incident, it was normal for her to want to protect herself. Isabel admitted that was true. She asked how the preparations were going. Norman asked if she was worried about all the company surrounding her. He revealed the place was ready, so she could leave whenever she wanted. The Duke said all she had to do was tell him the time and place. She stayed silent for a few moments. The girl thanked him for the information. Isabel asked Norman to finish the preparations, since she would soon try to help Caleb. He seemed so peaceful, sleeping like that. And then, he opened his eyes. Wow, what a nice surprise. On the night of the accident, everything seemed blurry. The servant who had helped Sasha ran through the palace. He heard the knights say he was one of the enemies. But that wasn't true. The boy had just done a favor for the consort. How could he have predicted that tragedy? Why were they after him? He fell to the ground, but he wasn't alone. A familiar voice called out to the boy, and in a threatening tone, asked what had happened to him. The priest said the young man seemed very distressed. In the consort's chambers, the fireplace crackled. Sasha sat alone, lost in her thoughts. She seemed very worried. Suddenly, a voice interrupted her, startling the girl. Sasha asked what the priest wanted from her at such an hour. He revealed he knew she would be awake, even though it was already late. The consort asked how it had gone. She had asked a young man to change the seats, but the priest asked who she was talking about. Sasha was confused. The priest said he had no idea what she was talking about. How strange. A holy woman would never do such a thing. He said such a person never existed. The two fell silent. Sasha declared he was right. The priest said it was all right, and she didn't need to worry. He judged she was tired from having stayed up so late. Sasha figured that was it. The man advised she drink some tea before sleeping. He said he would soon bring her a warm cup. The consort was very tense. Soon after, he brought her the tea. The priest asked how she was feeling. Sasha said she was feeling better. That was a relief. It was better for them to talk in the future. The priest asked if she had noticed the level of security around the Empress. Sasha noticed it was much more reinforced than before. There were more guards, but she wasn't sure. He asked if that was really so. The man thought it a shame, but for now it was better for them to wait and assess the situation later. Sasha didn't feel good about those insinuations. She asked if it was really necessary to eliminate the Empress. Maybe the plans were going too far. The priest interrupted the girl. He said she always said the silliest things in the world and declared the Empress needed to be removed from the story. The man said Sasha didn't need to worry about anything else. That was all she needed to know, and nothing more. Had he made himself clear? Sasha said she understood perfectly. As expected, there were many things wrong at play. Silence filled the room. From the start, the priest had an obsession with removing Isabel, but Sasha didn't know why. Definitely there was something more, and if that was his only purpose, on the other side of the palace, Isabel was alone. She had received a letter from Norman. At first glance, it seemed just a simple greeting. However, the main content was a report that the preparations had been completed. That made her a little nervous. For her, there wasn't much time left now. She heard a knock at the door. Who could it be at that hour? And then she saw... With trembling hands, still very weak, the Empress was very surprised. Caleb had left his chambers. How was that possible? He still needed to recover a lot, Isabel asked when he had woken up. He still couldn't walk yet, but she was very relieved. He was happy it wasn't too late. Isabel didn't understand. Caleb explained he thought she had already left with Duke Schwartz. The boy begged her to take him with her. It was his only request. He didn't want to be left behind. Isabel asked what he was talking about. Caleb confessed he had overheard her conversation with the Duke, and that the two of them were going to flee. He was very worried about that. The boy had heard their whole plan. Caleb knew he wasn't in any position to make requests. He had already been heavily criticized for having bad legs. When they tried to expel him, he could barely hold himself up. And at that time, the only person who saw his potential was the Empress, like a light at the end of the tunnel. That changed his life. Thanks to the affection the Empress graciously granted him, he had improved a lot. So, that's why he begged her to let him come along. The boy reminded her of the attack on the boat, in which he managed to protect everyone with his magical powers. He would do that as many times as necessary and would be useful to her. Isabel called out to Caleb. The Empress said he had gotten hurt because of her. The protagonist never wanted to put him in danger again. She felt very ashamed about what happened, so Caleb shouted that she had promised she would never abandon him. He remembered the promise from when he first arrived at the Imperial Palace. Everyone's life had meaning, and his was to serve the Empress. He swore on his soul he would never let anything happen to Isabel. Caleb was very determined. Isabel was quite worried by his speech. She thought that for the boy's own good, she needed to refuse the request. However, when she looked into his eyes, she thought differently. Isabel said it would be dangerous to stay by her side. She reminded him the Emperor was a difficult man to deal with, and neither of them would know what would happen if they were caught by Alexander. The Empress asked if he still wanted to go with her. The girl waited for the answer. Caleb replied yes. She said very well, and thanked the boy for his kindness. She felt like a coward, unable to leave him behind. When she looked into his eyes, she was convinced by his kindness and gave in. Isabel apologized for her selfishness. Time passed. On the other hand, who was responsible for that attack? Casey brushed Isabel's hair, who was distracted. She thought a lot about that tragic night. Logically, the consort was the main suspect. But would she really have the capacity or means to do that? It was true the girl was annoying and foolish, but she didn't seem to have the stomach to do that. Casey had a hunch. She asked why the priest wanted so badly to meet with her. Isabel asked if the girl had any information about him. Casey said he seemed like a good person, who had helped peoples who went through epidemics. Another maid said he founded medical missionary campaigns, which traveled to battlefields to care for the wounded. That information wasn't helping Isabel at all. Despite that, he seemed like a respectable person. So, why did she feel so uncomfortable in his presence? Was it because of his closeness to Sasha? Then, someone called for Isabel. The priest had arrived. He apologized for arriving so suddenly and greeted the Empress. And thanked her for receiving him anyway. Oh no, what did this strange guy want? And that's it for today, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the story. What do you all think? Did you already suspect the priest before the slap scene? Honestly, I like Isabel more with every chapter. She could have just minded her own business, enjoyed the luxury, and kept pretending to be the villain, but she still genuinely cares about everyone around her, even if she doesn't want to admit it to herself. I really don't know if she's going to get that divorce anytime soon. And honestly, I'm not even sure I want that for her anymore. What about you? Are you still rooting for the divorce, or have you changed your mind like I have? And if you want more, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss any new videos I post. The name of this series is I'm Divorcing My Tyrant Husband, and today's recap covered up to chapter 71. Kisses, and see you next time.